This raid was supposed to be a standard run, but everything is quickly falling apart. A massive flower-headed monstrosity is completely tearing through the guild's front lines, leaving the vanguard hunters to realize they are completely outmatched and out of options. Backup is supposedly on the way, but nobody expects to survive long enough to see it. Just as the squad prepares for the worst, a legendary figure finally arrives to intervene. The vanguard leader orders a full retreat to save whatever lives are left, but a single massive spell instantly shreds the beast into absolute nothingness. The surviving hunters can barely process the sheer scale of the power they just witnessed, while an on-scene streamer captures the entire miracle live for millions of viewers. Standing calmly amidst the destruction is the world's ultimate savior, a high-ranking ranker who does not even break a sweat after neutralizing a major threat. The streamer identifies him as the legendary Kai Shinbeek, known as the Hunter of Hunters. Millions are watching this broadcast, including a high school kid staring blankly at his screen. This legendary hero happens to be the young boy's actual father, who could not even bother to show up for his own son's high school graduation. While every other student celebrates their big achievement, Seung-hyun stands entirely alone in the crowd. A classmate walks up to ask where his family is, forcing the kid to make up a quick excuse about them being too busy with work. Instead of offering any comfort, the classmate simply hands over a phone to get a family photo taken, leaving the son of the world's greatest hero to watch other families celebrate while he stands in the background. Seung-hyun returns home alone after his lonely graduation ceremony, only to find his mother waiting by his sister's room. She has not been able to leave the house because she is constantly caring for his comatose sister, a heavy burden she has carried for 12 long years. Looking at his sister, who has been asleep for over a decade, the kid finally decides to speak up. He confronts his mother, asking why she could not make it to his graduation for just one day. When she explains his sister needs constant care, he snaps, arguing that a single afternoon would not hurt. But as he demands to know why his sister always comes first, a cold voice cuts him off. The sudden interruption catches him completely off guard because standing right behind him is his famous father, who just returned from the raid. Stunned by how fast he arrived, Seung-hyun can barely stammer out a greeting. His father ignores the question, sternly warning him never to raise his voice at his mother. Silenced by the overwhelming pressure of the world's greatest hunter, the kid can only look down. With the family tension reaching a boiling point, Seung-hyun decides to walk away. When asked where he is going, he bluntly states he is heading straight to the training hall. This only earns him more disapproval from his father, who asks how many times he has to say it. The legendary hunter delivers a brutal truth, telling his son he simply does not have the talent to succeed. He demands that Seung-hyun give up on his dreams of becoming a hunter once and for all. But instead of quitting, Seung-hyun takes that harsh rejection and throws himself into brutal training, taking hit after hit. His training partner, active hunter and gym owner Lee Jae-young, immediately notices how aggressively the kid is swinging today, but Seung-hyun does not back down, pressing the attack with everything he has got. Jae-young easily parries the strike and forces him back, showing the massive gap in their experience, which catches the kid completely off guard, sending him sliding across the gym floor as he struggles to keep his balance. Realizing physical attacks are not enough, Seung-hyun summons his glowing mana chains, but the gym owner watches calmly, completely unfazed by the sudden display of magic. Charging forward once more, the kid tries to bind his opponent while swinging for a hit. Jae-young does not even flinch as the chains close in on him. And that confidence immediately tells Seung-hyun he just made a massive mistake. Before the kid can even react, the veteran hunter easily bypasses the magic barrier, moving right through the chains like they are not even there. This leaves Seung-hyun completely defenseless and staring in absolute shock right before a heavy blow lands and shuts down the entire attack. Resting his wooden sword on his shoulder, Jae-young casually points out that the hit definitely connected, teasing the defeated kid that his signature chains are still way too weak. He suggests that Seung-hyun should try fighting without relying on his magic abilities altogether. To cool things down, the owner treats him to some black bean noodles to help him recover, but the kid is already demanding another round the second he finishes his bowl. Jae-young tells him to relax until his exam results are out, but Seung-hyun refuses to stop when his competition consists of multi-talented returnees. Seung-hyun points out that the other applicants are insanely overpowered returnees who can literally bend fire, leaving him convinced that his current skill level will not even let him qualify as a hunter, which is a massive problem if he ever wants to earn his father's approval. Determined to make something of himself, he refuses to just sit around at home, but Jae-young warns him against pushing himself too hard. The veteran hunter tells him he is looking at things all wrong, explaining that family should always be a safe haven because losing that comfort leaves you with nowhere to turn. Later, Seung-hyun walks out into a heavy downpour, where a nearby protester shouts about the century-long war against monsters disguising themselves as humans. The crowd rants against the returnees who claim to have come back from other worlds, accusing them of deceiving the public just to find a place to belong. The angry speaker demands that the public expose the truth, shouting that this world is no longer a home for these outsiders. As the crowd screams for the returnees to go back to hell, only to find a rejection letter from the Seonghan Awakened Academy. While staring at the screen, the veteran's earlier warning about having nowhere to turn hits home. With his future in pieces, the kid hurls his phone onto the wet pavement. With his future in pieces, the kid hurls his phone onto the wet pavement. With no backup plan left, he screams into the rain, wondering where he is even supposed to go. Rain continues to pour down over the cold city streets, leaving Seung-hyun sitting alone on the curb in complete despair. Just as he is about to hit absolute rock bottom, his discarded phone starts buzzing on the wet pavement with a call from his mother. Staring down at the screen, he hesitates for a long moment before picking it up. He answers the call with a quiet, hesitant hello, only to be completely blindsided by whatever news she is frantically trying to tell him. He rushes straight to the hospital, unable to believe what he is hearing. Inside, a doctor explains that his sister has miraculously woken up after a 12-year coma. His mother immediately breaks down in tears of absolute relief, urging him to finally say hello to the sister he barely knows. But the sudden family reunion quickly turns into another massive burden. As his mother immediately asks him to help take turns watching over her, Seung-hyun refuses, pointing out that graduating does not mean he has free time to spare. When his mother reminds him of his family duty, he snaps back that he does not even remember her. His father steps in to shut down the attitude, but Seung-hyun immediately fires back. He calls out his father's hypocrisy, completely ignoring the fact that his sister is right there. Terrified by all the aggressive screaming, the young girl starts trembling on the hospital bed, begging them to stop because she does not want her family fighting over her. The sudden emotional plea cuts straight through the room, leaving everyone stunned as they realize what they have done. Seung-hyun tries to diffuse the tension, gently reassuring his sister as the shouting finally stops, but the damage to their fragile family dynamic has already been done. To keep the peace, he starts spending 3 days a week sitting by her hospital bed, trying to satisfy his mother's desperate hope that they will somehow bond. While he sits there quietly reading to pass the hours, his mind remains entirely focused on his secret, otherworldly training. Despite the constant rejections from the system, he refuses to let his progress slip. But his routine is completely shattered during his next visit to the hospital ward. When he steps into her room only to find an open window and an empty bed. An empty bed means she could be anywhere, forcing him to scramble. After a desperate search through the dark grounds, he finally spots her sitting alone on a bench. Startled by his sudden arrival, she gasps as he runs up to confront her. The kid is furious that she wandered off, but she softly explains she just needed some fresh air. When she asks to stay outside just a little bit longer, he can only sigh, reluctantly taking a seat right next to her to keep watch. After a long, heavy silence, she quietly calls out his name, hesitantly asking if he secretly hates her now. Caught completely off guard, he stammers a denial before she explains how intimidating he feels. She admits he reminds her of their father now, missing the cute 5-year-old brother she once knew. That heartbreaking reminder of her 12-year gap leaves them both staring into the quiet night. She laments that she cannot even go back to school, crying that she feels completely isolated from the rest of the world. The word alone strikes a deep chord with him, bringing back bitter memories of his own days being shunned by everyone. Rejecting that dark thought, he tells her she is talking total nonsense, reminding her that she still has both their parents and him. He assures her that school is not the only place to build a life or make friends. Realizing his own words apply perfectly to his secret path as a hunter, if his mentor could succeed without formal training, he should not give up either. So Hyun quietly thanks him for the comfort as they prepare to head back inside. But as he gets up, a sudden logical gap hits him, making him ask how she got out here without her wheelchair. Before he can even process the question, she literally levitates off the ground, revealing she visited a mysterious fairy realm while she was asleep. She casually explains she learned this impossible magic during her slumber, triggering his memory of being told he lacked the talent to ever be a hunter. Seeing her effortlessly bypass the laws of physics with zero formal training, she gently floats back down to Earth like it is nothing. He can only stare in absolute shock at his sister's absurd awakening, right as their mother arrives to witness the impossible scene. Flashback to their childhood when tomorrow felt totally guaranteed, playing in the mud without a single care, but that comfortable, ordinary routine was about to be shattered forever when So Hyun went to sleep, wondering what kind of games she and her brother would play the very next day, completely unaware that this peaceful night would mark the end of her normal childhood, as an otherworldly glowing light suddenly broke through her slumber to whisk her away, pulling her conscious mind into a completely different dimension while her physical body remained behind, where she opened her eyes to a fantastical reality she never could have imagined, greeted by a mysterious little fairy who offered her a rather sudden invitation, explaining that she had been specially chosen by this magical world for a grand purpose, and asking if she would help them save their realm from total destruction. Back in the real world, medical tests finally confirm her sudden, miraculous awakening, leaving the doctor to deliver some incredibly shocking news to her worried parents. He reveals that the special power-dampening bracelet he put on her wrist to seal her magic, which normally keeps an awakener completely in check, has absolutely zero effect on returnees. When the adults ask what she actually did during her time in that bizarre fantasy world, the young girl explains that the fairies taught her the fundamental rules of their realm, giving her all the essential magical knowledge she needed to survive in their environment, along with intensive combat training to prepare her for a massive, brutal conflict, and teaching her how to survive the wrath of their incredibly evil queen. She was told that defeating this ultimate tyrant was her only ticket back home. The government official tries to confirm if So Hyun actually assassinated the fantasy world's queen, but she quickly panics and claims they actually just talked out their differences, insisting she does not possess any dangerous magic that could threaten anyone here. The suit is not buying it though, pointing out that surviving another world makes her a certified S-rank caliber anomaly regardless of what she claims to have done. Meaning her seemingly harmless abilities could still mutate into something catastrophic. To prevent any disasters, the official strictly bans her from using any magic, ordering her family to keep her under absolute house arrest for safety. On top of that, a government agent is being assigned to monitor her starting tomorrow, leaving the older brother, Seung-hyun, to quietly slip away down the hospital hall. It turns out he recently requested an official evaluation of his own latent powers. And while the test results confirm he technically meets the minimum requirements, his conjured chains are deemed way too weak and fragile for real combat. They lack any special properties, making them completely inferior to actual physical steel, which officially slaps him with the lowest possible rating of F rank. Slumped on a hallway bench, the harsh reality of his uselessness starts to sink in, until his little sister slowly approaches and calls out his name. She sits nearby and tries her best to comfort him after his disappointing evaluation, putting on a brave face to assure him that everything is going to be fine, but the massive gap between their newly awakened powers is impossible to ignore. Seung-hyun immediately shuts down her attempts to comfort him, bluntly telling her to leave, which catches So-hyun completely off guard as her brother demands to be left entirely alone, stunned by his sudden coldness. She quietly asks why he is pushing her away like this, gently reaching out to grab his sleeve in a desperate plea for answers, but his frustration boils over and he violently snaps, screaming at her to just get out of his sight. The harsh outburst leaves her completely frozen, unable to find the words to stop him as he turns his back on her. Without looking back, the dejected F-rank hunter walks away, leaving his little sister standing alone in the hallway. While his own overwhelming feelings of inadequacy consume his thoughts, back at the hospital, So-hyun can only let out a heavy sigh, deeply hurt by the sudden rift. Meanwhile, Seung-hyun wanders aimlessly through the busy city streets, questioning his own dramatic reaction and silently cursing himself for acting so pathetic over a stupid ranking evaluation. His self-pity is suddenly cut short when he hears distressed murmurs from the crowd around him, prompting him to look up and notice a massive group of people gathering nearby. Pushing past the onlookers to see what the commotion is all about, his heart completely drops when he spots his own father beaten and bloody in the middle of the street. Later that night, the focus shifts back to the quiet hospital wing, where the newly classified S-rank threat sits awake in her darkened room, staring blankly into the night as the emotional distance between her and her brother continues to grow. So-hyun lies awake in her hospital bed, haunted by memories of her brother's bitter frustration, contrasted sharply with the happier, much simpler days of their childhood. The growing, painful divide between them brings tears to her eyes as a strange, glowing blue energy suddenly begins to fill the quiet room. Completely unconscious, her newly awakened S-rank powers lift her straight out the window, carrying her silently across the sleeping city skyline. Until she finally touches down in a desolate, ruined sector. She wanders aimlessly into the overgrown, vine-covered wreckage of an abandoned building, her mind still trapped in her deepest regrets, desperately wishing she could just go back to the days when they were happy. This quiet breakdown is suddenly interrupted when two scavengers spot her in the shadows, instantly snapping her out of her emotional trance. The men are immediately on high alert, demanding to know who she is, and questioning how she ended up wandering around such a dangerous place alone. They explain that this ruined zone was shut down after a massive dungeon break, warning her that the area is now crawling with hostile vagrants. When she politely declines their help and tries to find her own way out, a third scavenger blindsides her with a brutal, heavy blow to the head. The thug immediately claims her as his prize, ignoring his companion's panic, while casually dismissing the sudden violence he just inflicted on her. To the scavenger's absolute shock, the girl they just brutally knocked down slowly starts getting back up, bleeding heavily from her forehead but somehow still breathing. The thug is baffled that his heavy swing failed, while So-hyun slowly realizes she was just attacked, backing away from the hostile men in a desperate attempt to keep her distance, warning them not to take another step toward her, and raising her hand like a weapon to threaten them. The scavengers just laugh it off, mockingly asking if she escaped from a mental hospital, completely unaware that her S-rank system is actively searching for a defensive spellbook, locking onto a high-tier magic skill called Archer's Constellation. As a massive glowing bow manifests, she innocently assures them they will not die, explaining that the magical arrows will only temporarily turn them to stone. But the sheer destructive power of the S-rank spell completely obliterates her target, leaving the surviving scavengers frozen in absolute terror at the sudden bloodbath. Staring at her own blood-stained hands, the horrific sight triggers a sudden rush of traumatic memories, pulling her mind back to a chaotic crowd from her past, where she once watched in silent despair, desperately searching through the frantic onlookers to find her father, only to find him beaten, bloody, and carrying another dying hunter. Even in that tragic moment, heartless bystanders only cared about filming the famous internet creator, leaving a young So-hyun staring in horror, wondering if her father was already dead. While the family deals with the trauma, we see a memory of the brother getting lost in a crowd, only to be confronted by his father, fresh off a bloody raid, who immediately demands to know why he left his sister alone just to go for a walk. The atmosphere is tense as the old man looks down at him, asking if this is his very first time seeing a corpse. After the kid quietly nods, his father drops some incredibly grim statistics, explaining that 40% of hunters do not survive their first year. On top of that, another 20% get crippled and 10% quit from psychological trauma. He warns that this meat grinder does not care about experience or rank. Grabbing the boy's shoulder to force him to face this brutal reality, the father asks point-blank if he honestly believes he has what it takes to survive, but the kid can only stammer, unable to find an answer. Seeing his hesitation, his father brutally tells him he does not stand a chance with that weak resolve. Flash forward to the kid standing outside a hospital under the cold night sky, forced to confront his own limitations while his family suffers. Finally admitting to himself that he simply lacks the talent to be a hunter. He spent years trying to deny it while watching the glamorous elites on television, but sitting alone in the dark as a child, the gap felt impossible to bridge, leaving him completely lost and questioning his own path in life, wondering what he even wants to achieve in a world that constantly breaks people. Dujun's spiral is cut short when a strange figure appears floating in the night sky, leaving him completely bewildered as he tries to make sense of the situation, only to realize that the person hovering above him is actually his sister. Her sudden appearance is immediately alarming, especially with her hospital clothes covered in blood, instantly freezing him in place as he stares up at her in shock. He calls out to ask if she is hurt and where all the blood came from, begging her to tell him what happened during her sudden escape. But a grim reminder about the sheer volatility of returnees flashes through his mind, just as she weakly warns him to keep his distance. This sudden rejection leaves him completely stunned, unable to process why she's pushing him away, while her power begins to surge violently out of control. She screams at him to stay back as her unstable energy reaches a breaking point, forcing him to watch helplessly as the light completely swallows her up, building up into a terrifying burst of pressure. Until a massive shockwave of energy detonates across the hospital courtyard. The sudden blast immediately triggers the facility's security alarms, as an emergency broadcast warns everyone that a highly dangerous attacker is on the loose outside. Despite the sirens, his sister is completely overwhelmed by her own awakening powers, right when a hostile hunter charges into the clearing to put her down by force. The newcomer demands she freeze, but she desperately fights to protect herself. She desperately screams that she does not want to hurt anyone, but her unstable awakening forces a terrifying, violent urge to take over. Meanwhile, the hospital's automated defense system blares a chilling warning throughout the courtyard, announcing that unauthorized public ability use has been detected in the vicinity. With the penalty set to immediate execution, calling for backup is no longer an option. In the middle of the chaos, Seung-hyun suddenly freezes in place, staring down at his own trembling, injured fingers. His hands are completely coated in fresh blood from the shockwave, triggering a sudden, overwhelming urge to abandon his sister and flee the scene to save his own life. He tries to convince himself this nightmare is not his fault as he turns away, remembering how he always chose to stay detached from everyone else, living his life as a bystander who never got involved in trouble, but looking back at his younger, helpless self. A wave of self-loathing hits him for trying to run away again. He remembers his sister's agonizing despair when she wanted to give up on the world, and decides he cannot leave her to die alone in this place. Stealing his resolve, the kid unleashes his own power to break through her raging energy storm, screaming at the top of his lungs for her to stay with him. His desperate voice finally pierces through the madness, shocking her back to her senses. Seung-hyun yells that he already knows the risks of being a hunter, desperately begging his sister not to panic as her powers spiral out of control. He tells her to just calm down, but she cannot understand why he is doing this, looking at her blood-stained hands and feeling too far gone to be saved, leaving him desperately trying to understand what she could possibly mean by that. In her mind, she drifts back to a memory of a mysterious, glowing spirit, who once comforted her during a lonely time in a vast, starry dreamscape. The spirit praised her as a legendary hero who had saved an entire world, but those grand praises only made her feel more isolated from normal life. She felt like a completely lost child trapped inside an adult's body, surrounded by constant, terrifying danger with absolutely no one to turn to. She was convinced everyone hated her, but the spirit gently rejected that thought. Now, looking at her brother's battered face, she realizes there is one person who cares, since no one would ever risk their entire life to save someone they truly despised. With the spirit's parting words urging her to return to where she belongs, the violent storm of energy holding her hostage finally begins to subside. She collapses into her brother's arms, weeping as the nightmare finally ends. Seung-hyun holds her tight, battered and completely exhausted, but relieved she is finally safe. The sheer physical toll of the struggle begins to catch up to him, bringing back quiet, heavy memories of the lonely childhood they both had to survive. Seung-hyun catches his breath, knowing he actually pulled it off. Nearby, witnesses are already poking around the wreckage of the fight, but nobody caught a glimpse of what really went down. The authorities ended up scrubbing the whole mess from the news. Meanwhile, at the detention center, guards finally open up visiting hours. So Hyun looks completely drained as she is called out of her cell. A full escort leads her down the hall toward the meeting room. Seeing her mother break down again just makes the guilt heavier, and she has no idea what she's even supposed to say anymore. But when she walks in, her father is already waiting for her. He looks more composed and serious than she has seen him in years. They sit across from each other in a heavy, tense silence. So Hyun finally manages a greeting, her voice barely a whisper, only for him to drop the bombshell that he's taking her home today. Turns out that psychic their mom hired scanned the memories of the event. That mental evidence changed the entire legal landscape of her case. The memory proved she was not the aggressor and only acted to survive. Since it was self-defense, all the criminal charges are being dropped. He tells her she did nothing wrong, but she is still stuck on the damage she did. That's when he reveals the guy she shot survived thanks to some high-tier healers. Hearing that the victim survived and she did not actually kill anyone that night, the massive weight finally drops off her shoulders as she completely breaks down while her father watches on, relieved to finally see his daughter find some peace. Their moment gets cut short when the legal representative steps in to wrap things up. He confirms they're finished, ready to finally put this whole nightmare behind them. There are still hospital fines and property damages to settle, but he's just glad she's free. They both know they owe a massive debt to Hunter Kai Shinbeek for making this happen, but the reality of the situation is much darker than what he told his daughter. It turns out the guy she attacked did not actually survive his injuries after all. He's betting that she'll be strong enough to handle the truth by the time she finds out. Before they leave, the woman hands over some documents addressed specifically to the girl. Her father takes a look at the papers himself first to see what they're about, and the contents of the letter immediately send him into a state of shock, leading him to lose his cool and shred the mystery sender's message on the spot. Meanwhile, the guy who was supposed to be dead is very much alive and well, currently pushing himself through some pretty intense conditions using his mana chains. Practicing with high-speed energy to get his precision and control up to par. It looks like he's focusing on snatching targets out of the air without breaking a sweat, and a successful grab on a soda can prove his skills are getting sharper. But even with all the progress, he's clearly exhausted from this secret training grind. The gym staff is weirded out by a guy who's been loitering all day, especially since he's just sitting there munching on snacks during their training. When the kid complains about the distraction, the stranger asks what he'd do in a real dungeon, where the environment is way less predictable than a gym. He points out that if a little noise throws him off his game, it just proves he's nowhere near ready for a real fight. The kid gets defensive, asking how this random guy could possibly know him, or how much effort he's actually put into his training. But this stranger can read his entire skill set just by watching him move, acknowledging his raw power while tearing down his lack of finesse. Before the student can even react, the guy is already standing right behind him, explaining that those mana chains are a massive drain on his stamina. He's using way too much energy for every single motion, which is exactly why his precision is so trash compared to real experts do not need to flex that much force to get results, and a quick flick of a snack piece proves his point by obliterating a can. The gym employee can barely believe the level of control he just witnessed, especially since the snack didn't even crumble from the impact. As the kid starts to wonder who this master actually is, the stranger drops a bombshell about the true nature of his artifact. Jae-hyung tells the kid to test the chains against his own mana. The contact confirms everything he suspected about the boy's artifact. He brings up that day at the hospital, reminding him of what happened. Specifically, the moment the chains made contact with his sister. Her power completely vanished the second they touched her. It turns out these are not just normal weapons, but a specialized tool designed specifically to seal the power of returnees. Swinging them around like a club is a waste of their true potential, and mastering that hidden depth is the only way he will actually get stronger. Finally dropping the act, the man introduces himself as Ki Jae-hyung, a professor from the Seonghan Awakened Academy who is here to recruit him. The kid is floored since he literally just failed the entrance exam, but Jae-hyung reveals he has the power to bypass the standard results. In his eyes, the boy's unique ability is already far beyond the passing grade. The offer is on the table, leaving the choice entirely up to him. Realizing this is his second chance, the kid does not hesitate to accept. He's officially headed to the Hunter Academy, and Jae-hyung welcomes him as his newest student. Passing over the enrollment documents, the professor's expression suggests he has big plans for this new recruit. Just as things settle, a massive presence crashes the party, and a man wrapped in a murderous red aura steps through the door. He's clearly not happy about Jae-hyung's little recruitment drive. The professor barely has time to recover before the interrogation starts. This newcomer demands to know exactly what's going on, and he's looking for a very good reason why his family is involved. It turns out this is not just some random high-ranker, it's the kid's own father. Jae-hyung tries to play it cool with some casual banter about old age, but the dad is not in the mood for jokes and demands a straight answer. Apparently, the professor just wants to sponsor the two siblings for the academy. He's eyeing So-hyun's S-rank potential and the boy's insane new power, but their father immediately shuts the whole idea down. The dad thinks his daughter is way too young for that kind of environment, yet Jae-hyung brings up a recent rampage that changed everything. In his eyes, the girl is a ticking time bomb that needs a specialist. If she does not get proper training now, she will never learn to control it, though the old man is far more concerned about his son. Looking his boy dead in the eye, he says the kid has zero talent, claiming that a weak will in this world is just a death sentence. The rejection hits harder than any physical blow the kid has ever taken. Jae-hyung argues that jumping in to save his sister was an act of pure bravery, the kind of hunter's courage that sets someone apart from the crowd. But the father is not buying it, calling the move reckless rather than heroic. He corners the boy, demanding to know if there was even a plan behind that desperate rescue. Seung-hyun tries to explain that he just could not stand by and let her get hurt. Yet his dad dismisses the whole thing as nothing more than a lucky break. In this line of work, banking on luck is just a one-way ticket to the morgue. The old man warns that a recommendation does not guarantee any special treatment, effectively shutting down Jae-hyung's attempt to lighten the mood with school talk. All the kid wants is a single word of praise, wondering why his father cannot just acknowledge the win. It is a crushing feeling of isolation, realizing that his efforts are never going to be enough. He's basically falling apart inside while the adults continue to debate his future. Just as the spiral gets worse, someone else steps in to break the tension. It is his friend offering a genuine congratulations on catching a high-ranking professor's eye. While the dad remains a wall of negativity in the background, the buddy points out that getting scouted is a massive step toward reaching his dream. Seung-hyun tries to play it down, his confidence still shattered after the verbal beatdown, but he is told to stop overthinking and just keep moving forward on the path he chose. Having someone actually trust his judgment for once gives him the push he needs to keep walking. Even with his father's harsh words lingering, the road to the academy is officially open. The mentor steps in to steady the kid, giving him a physical anchor while the world feels like it is crashing down. He makes it clear that seeking approval from people who do not see his worth is a dead end. This direct challenge to the father's authority shifts the blame entirely onto the mentor, confirming the dad's worst fears about who's been whispering in his son's ear. The father views the dream of becoming a hunter as a corruption caused by this outsider, identifying the mentor as the source of Seung-hyun's newfound defiance. A sharp slap cuts through the tension, marking the father's final attempt to force him back into line. But the physical blow does not have the intended effect because Seung-hyun finally feels the fog lifting from his mind. He confesses that he spent years chasing his father's shadow, trying to mold himself into someone the man would actually respect. It was a cycle of seeking recognition for all the wrong reasons, but the life-or-death moment at the hospital broke that spell. For the first time, he felt like he was not just a disappointment or a failure. With that realization comes a new sense of readiness, and he yells his declaration of war against his father's expectations. The dad finally accepts that verbal threats are not going to fix this, deciding that words are no longer his weapon of choice. Seung-hyun senses the shift in the air as the confrontation gets dangerously serious. The suffocating grip finally loosens as the old man gives in. Telling his son to go ahead and try his luck in the field, it's a shocking reversal, but it's far from a free pass. He's convinced that first-hand experience will prove the kid does not belong among hunters. Two non-negotiable conditions are set for this little experiment, starting with a demand to join the student council within a single year. The second condition hits closer to home: he has to protect his sister. Her abilities are apparently unstable, forcing her to enroll at the academy as well. If she fails or gets hurt under his watch, the deal is dead and he's coming home. Asked if he can actually handle the pressure, the kid gives a shaky but definite yes. With the terms officially set, the immediate physical threat finally passes. The father turns his back on the scene, leaving the room without another word. Everyone else is left standing there, trying to process the sudden shift in the air. Seung-hyun is practically gasping for air, fully realizing how close he was to the edge. Outside, the old man continues his walk through the city as if nothing happened. Jae-hyung catches up to him, clearly bothered by the impossible standards being set. He argues that the student council requirement is way too much for a beginner, pointing out that those seats are reserved for the absolute elite while the kid is F rank. But the dad thinks if he wants to play at being a hunter, he needs to face the harsh reality of the latter. He cuts off the complaints by calling out his companion's name with total authority. Dad admits he never wanted to pull anyone else onto this dangerous road, but he is already too deep in the life he chose for himself. Jae-hyung just watches him leave, clearly seeing a side of the man he did not expect. The old man does not look back, walking away with the weight of his own decisions while leaving the mentor behind. Meanwhile, the sister's admission letter finally arrives, signaling the start of a new chapter. Seung-hyun spends his remaining time training by the coast, grinding to prepare for the academy. Once March hits, the storm officially begins as the students gather at the docks. The massive passenger ship finally sets sail, carrying the new recruits toward their future. On board, a kid named Subin is trapped in a memory of a disaster he cannot forget. He remembers the destruction and the people left behind in the chaos, looking out over a wasteland that used to be a city. In the dream, a hunter stands amidst the wreckage, but his actions are anything but heroic. The memory turns into a full-blown nightmare, and he snaps awake with a jolt, heart racing from the trauma. Subin sits up in his cramped bunk, trying to shake off the images of the past. His bunkmate leans down to check on him, assuming the kid is just dealing with a bad case of seasickness. Subin plays it off as a bad sleeping habit while the older student introduces himself. This is son Purium, a friendly second year who's about to be the newcomer's first contact at school. Subin introduces himself to Purium as they start getting acquainted. The ship continues its trek toward the island while everyone settles in. Elsewhere on the boat, Seung-hyun is busy checking his personal arsenal. He confesses to his sister that most of this high-end gear was stolen from their dad's private drawer. Seung-ah is terrified their father will literally turn the ship around once he notices his stuff is missing, and Seung-hyeon has to admit that's a very real possibility. She decides to stop worrying and go check out the rest of the ship. Fearing she will get lost, Seung-hyeon makes sure she remembers their cabin number before following after her. He's already in overprotective brother mode, giving her a quick lecture on stranger danger. Treating her like a kid is basically a full-time job for him. But while the siblings bicker, the school's social hierarchy is already shifting. For the returning students, the new semester is the perfect time for some strategic networking. Scouting the incoming freshmen is seen as the best way to secure a comfortable life at the academy, and some are already planning how to use these new connections to their advantage. A senior named Jeon Woojin watches the newcomers with a critical eye. He thinks Purium is being way too soft and treats him like a total novice. Purium just wants to know what the guy's actual point is. Networking is fine and all, but the senior has a much more personal agenda. Instead of focusing on power levels, he's obsessed with finally finding a girlfriend this year. This is Jeon Woojin, a desperate second year who's definitely going to be a handful. Woojin isn't wasting any time and claims he's already found a prime target for his scouting mission. He spots a girl on deck trying to play nice with the local wildlife, but the seagulls are completely ignoring her and her open bag of snacks. Just as she's about to give up, the bag starts to slip out of her hands. And the senior sees his perfect opening to swoop in and make a save. Returning the chips with his best cool guy energy, he waits for a reaction. Getting a close look at her, he's immediately blindsided by her looks. Seung-ah is just trying to be polite, but the guy is already acting like he's in a romance manhwa. While the snacks might not have worked on the birds, they definitely attracted a very specific kind of bottom feeder. The girl is clearly trying to process his sudden intensity. While he doubles down and starts asking which department she's joining. Watching from a safe distance, Purium thinks the play is actually working since she has not fled yet, though Seung-hyeon suspects she might just be too awkward to make an escape. The conversation shifts to why a second-year senior is hanging out with the new recruits. Apparently, Woojin failed his first year and is being forced to redo everything as a freshman. Seonghan Academy is ruthless with its grading, so flunking means a total reset without exceptions. Plenty of students are in the same boat, with some even paying a fortune just to re-enroll. That's because a diploma here is basically a golden ticket to a guaranteed career, and even if it means repeating the grind, people will do whatever it takes to secure that future. Woojin is still questioning if a guy like Seung-hyeon even deserves to be a hunter. The siblings decide they've had enough of the weird energy and get up to leave. Seeing them move, Woojin and Purium realize the pursuit is not over yet. They keep a safe distance while tracking exactly where the pair is heading and follow them right to the door of their assigned room. Inside, another student named Subin is just trying to have a quiet moment with a book, until the siblings burst in looking completely shaken up by the encounter outside. Seung-hyeon immediately reports that some total stranger was trying to mess with his sister. He breaks down the details about the guy being way too forward, mentioning how the creep kept pestering her about having a boyfriend, but the real issue was when he tried to get physical and grabbed her hand. Just as the tension peaks, the culprit actually has the nerve to show up at the door. Woojin barely gets a greeting out before Subin launches him across the room with a kick. The roommate is not interested in hearing any excuses about what happened, explaining that he prefers to let his fists do the talking when it comes to creeps. Despite getting absolutely bodied, Woojin tells Purium he has zero regrets about his actions. Purium finally clarifies that Seung-ah was in a coma for 12 years, making her mentally much younger than she looks. With the heavy context revealed, the group manages to sit down and exchange some forced apologies. It turns out this powerhouse roommate is actually the same age as the new recruits, and Subin officially introduces himself, signaling a very tense start to their living situation. Seung-hyeon awkwardly accepts the greeting as the group starts heading out together, walking through the halls while getting to know the new faces in the dorm. One of the guys introduces himself as an E-rank student from the Magitech engineering department. And he's curious if a high-spec hunter like Seung-hyeon has a personal idol in the field. Seung-hyeon admits he does not follow the scene much, though his father was a hunter himself. That bit of info catches Subin's attention immediately, specifically because of the guy's last name. He cuts in to ask if his father happens to be the legendary Kai Shinbeek, and Seung-hyeon casually confirms that the famous figure is indeed his dad. The room goes absolutely quiet for a second as the weight of that reveal sinks in, and then the guys completely lose it because they're actually standing next to royalty. Even the Magitech student starts geeking out, claiming to be one of the man's biggest fans. Kai Shinbeek is basically a household name in this world, known for his incredible exploits, and he's portrayed as this mythical scholarly powerhouse that everyone looks up to. Subin is visibly stunned to realize he's living with the son of a living legend, while the engineering student explains that the man was his absolute role model growing up. He admits that seeing Kai Shinbeek in action was the reason he wanted to be a hunter, though his own lack of natural talent eventually forced him onto a different path. Seung-hyeon asks why he did not join the hunter department if he was that dedicated. But it turns out being a low rank meant he never even had the option to apply. Despite the prestigious family tree, Seung-hyeon tries to play it cool and keep things low-key. Subin casually drops a bombshell by revealing her brother is actually F rank and gets seasick easily. This news sends the group into a total tailspin because F rank should not even be here, and everyone demands to know how he managed to sneak into the hunter department with those stats. Seung-hyun quickly covers by claiming they both got in through special recommendations, and then proceeds to physically shut his sister up before she leaks any more secrets, as he gives her a stern lecture about keeping their family business private in public. The engineering student watches the exchange, clearly weighing the truth of that explanation. Trying to smooth things over, Seung-hyun claims even low ranks can make it with enough effort. Though his friend seems to realize there's more to the story than just hard work. Meanwhile, the mysterious white-haired guy stays quiet and just observes the chaotic group dynamic. The scene shifts as their ship finally cuts through the open ocean under a bright sky. Most of the students are enjoying the cruise, treating the whole trip like a standard vacation, while the blonde guy is busy flirting and making the most of the social scene. Seung-hyun is wandering the deck alone, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, and he's already hitting a wall of boredom with nothing to do but watch the waves. That's when he notices his white-haired teammate leaning over the railing by himself. Thinking back to his sister's earlier comment, he asks if the guy is feeling a bit seasick. The stoic hunter admits he's struggling, showing a rare moment of vulnerability. They stand there in silence for a beat as a seagull passes them by in the breeze. Then out of nowhere, the guy asks Seung-hyun the one question he's been avoiding: why be a hunter? Seung-hyun tries to give the same old answer about his dad, but the white-haired hunter shuts him down. He wants to know the real reason, like a personal conviction or a deeper belief. Seung-hyun realizes he's never actually put much thought into it, and stays quiet as he tries to find an answer that is not a total lie. He knows a lot of people jump into the industry on a whim because of the media hype, looking for a quick payday or a shortcut to fame and popularity. The stoic hunter admits those types of people definitely exist, but he's disgusted by how they take all the benefits of the job without any sense of responsibility. Seeing hunters like that makes his blood boil, and he clearly does not respect them. He looks Seung-hyun dead in the eye and asks what his specific motivation is, before revealing that his own goal is to become a hunter who saves everyone. Seung-hyun takes a moment to process that lofty ideal while checking his phone. Then out of nowhere, the white-haired guy tells him he should just drop out of school. This completely catches Seung-hyun off guard as the mood on the deck shifts. He asks what the hell the guy is talking about, only to get a harsh reality check about how hard work does not bridge the gap for an E rank. To this guy, awakening is just a stroke of luck, and your rank is a permanent label that never changes. He points out that the tuition for their school is astronomical, meaning it's basically a playground for kids with wealthy, powerful fathers, and he finishes his lecture by putting Seung-hyun right in that same category. Seung-hyun is not taking the insult lying down, calling the guy an asshole and explaining his late awakening, but Baek Si-hyun does not care about excuses. Doubling down that effort has nothing to do with awakening. To him, gaining an ability late just means you were born with it and did not notice, meaning every achievement Seung-hyun has is just a product of being lucky. He keeps talking, dismissing the special recommendation that got Seung-hyun into this elite program. To this guy, the very fact that they are even standing here as Hunter Department students is just another roll of the dice that happened to go in their favor. He argues that since everything was handed to them by chance, talking about hard work is just a slap in the face to people who actually struggle. He finds the idea of anyone reaching the top through sheer will to be a joke, especially when it comes to E-ranks who are stuck at the bottom of the barrel. He calls that kind of optimism empty nonsense and claims Seung-hyun is just as naive as his sister. Hearing her name mentioned is the final straw, and Seung-hyun completely loses his cool. He lunges forward to shut the guy up once and for all, but Si-hyun is on a completely different level and deflects the attack with zero effort. Seung-hyun hits the deck before he even realizes what hit him. The commotion draws attention from the other students nearby, who come over to see what all the noise is about. Si-hyun just puts on a fake smile and tells them Seung-hyun is just a bit clumsy. Even his own sister buys the lie. While Seung-hyun tries to process the terrifying speed of that counter, Seung-hyun realizes something forced his fist off course right before the impact, but Si-hyun just keeps looking down on him for acting without thinking. He claims guys like this are exactly why the hunter world is going to hell, and tells him to just do everyone a favor and quit now. That ego takes a hit when glowing chains suddenly manifest and bind Si-hyun's legs, drawing confused looks from the other students as the ground itself seems to turn against him. Pinned to the floor by the unexpected move, the elitist cannot believe he's being tripped up, while Seung-hyun asks if he really thinks rank is just a matter of luck. He might be willing to admit he got lucky getting through the door, but since he's the one still standing, he's not giving up on his goal. He refuses to drop out by choice regardless of how much pressure is put on him. Si-hyun warns that an E-rank will not survive long and challenges him to prove his worth. He wants to settle this once and for all and tells the kid to meet him at midnight, setting the stage for a confrontation that neither of them can walk away from. Later that night, a heavy storm rolls in over the dark ocean. As a memory of a crying girl and a promise of comfort begins to play out, a strange, glowing figure tells her that a certain light will never truly fade away, leaving her with a hope that seems to be the only thing keeping her going. The sound of the rain against the window eventually breaks the vision, and she wakes up realizing the whole emotional moment was just a dream. So Hyun snaps awake from that dream, immediately noticing that Seung-hyun is nowhere to be found. She wanders out into the empty dorm hallway, calling out for him while using her phone to cut through the dark. A sudden greeting from the shadows nearly gives her a heart attack, but it's just a group of other students wandering the halls. She asks what they're doing out so late, and they explain they are just heading to another room to hang out. Since they are all freshmen, the guy in charge invites her along, figuring she might as well get to know the rest of the class now. She agrees instantly, her search for her brother completely slipping her mind. While she is off making friends, Seung-hyun is still out there dealing with his own mess. The group arrives at the designated party room where a few other students are already swapping stories and laughing. One of the girls tells the newcomers to grab a seat and relax, but the guy who brought So-hyun stops dead in his tracks. He tries to bail the second he sees who else is in the room, complaining that nobody told him a certain rival would be here. So-hyun does not even notice the drama, distracted by the mountain of snacks, leaving her guide fuming while the rest of the group tells him to just deal with it. Woojin's friends finally get him to sit down and stop making a scene, and even though he is still annoyed, he decides to stick around for the party. Naturally, the other girl in the room wants to know who the new face is. So he introduces So-hyun as a freshman he just happened to meet. There is a bit of a weird vibe as the girl looks her over before finally saying hi. While So-hyun is focused on snacks, the conversation shifts to the missing students. One of the guys asks where Seung-hyun is, but she has no clue since he was gone when she woke up. It turns out he is not the only one missing, as Subin has also vanished from her room. The guy mentions it is pretty suspicious that they both disappeared at the same time, wondering if there's some secret drama happening between them out in the storm. Meanwhile, Seung-hyun is actually out in the pouring rain holding an umbrella. His opponent shows up in a full raincoat, looking ready for a serious confrontation. The guy is baffled that Seung-hyun showed up to a fight dressed like he is going for a stroll. He points out that an umbrella is completely useless once the actual fighting starts, but Seung-hyun just wants to stay dry for as long as he possibly can. They stare each other down in the downpour, both thinking the other is a total moron. The guy in the raincoat realizes he's wasting his breath and decides to just start the duel. He pulls out a catalyst to activate his primary specialty, revealing his true power as a water spirit summoner. Since they are surrounded by the ocean and the heavy rain, he is basically in the perfect arena. Subin warns that the heavy rain is basically a cheat code for his spirits, and since he is at max power, he cannot promise that Seung-hyun will actually survive this. Seung-hyun does not seem even slightly concerned by the death threat, finally letting go of his umbrella as the real fight begins. He reminds Subin that this whole mess was his idea in the first place. So there is no point in acting like he has a choice now. The catalyst activates, signaling the start of a massive offensive, and the kid barely has time to react before the pressure shifts. A massive surge of water comes crashing in, fueled by the surrounding storm, but Seung-hyun manages to brace himself against the force of the impact. Standing his ground against that hit completely changes the summoner's math, though the kid is not waiting around for a second invitation to strike back. The F-ranker swings his chains with enough raw power to tear through the water, forcing Subin to admit that his opponent is surprisingly capable, especially since he is supposed to be a bottom-tier ranker. But the praise ends there as the summoner mocks the quality of the kid's weapon, and Seung-hyun suddenly realizes he's dealing with multiple spirits at once. Subin declares the chains useless for both offense and defense, effectively putting the F-ranker on the clock to find a new solution. As a relentless barrage of water spikes forces Seung-hyun into a desperate retreat, Subin thinks he's seen this all before, brushing off the kid's efforts as a desperate repeat, and mocks the F-ranker for relying on the same old tricks while his spirits block every hit. The summoner stands tall, soaked, but completely unbothered by the pressure of the duel, revealing that he has not even had to shift his feet since the fight started. He uses the opening to remind Seung-hyun that a low ranker like him has no place at this academy, but the kid realizes that staying stationary was actually Subin's biggest mistake. Seung-hyun finally looks up with a grin, explaining why the summoner missed what was happening right under him. Subin finally glances down at the ground, only to find the situation has completely flipped, as the chains he dismissed earlier have been quietly snaking around his boots this entire time. The summoner has literally walked right into a trap that is now locked tight across the floor. The realization hits him like a truck, but it is already too late to break the bind. Seung-hyun yanks the line with everything he has got, sending a massive shockwave through the summoner's defense. The impact is enough to send Subin flying backward, breaking his concentration and his spirits in one go. Clenching the glowing chain, the F-ranker is not letting up for even a second. Subin cannot believe he is losing to the same predictable move over and over, but Seung-hyun just calls him an idiot for not respecting the only weapon he has. With the summoner slumped on the ground, the power dynamic in the rain has shifted for good. Seung-hyun catches his breath, noting that Subin's performance has been dropping for a while now. He drops the final insult by questioning if the guy's rank was even real to begin with. Because there is no way a true high ranker would ever get bodied by a bottom tier like him. Subin finally reaches his breaking point, decided he is done playing nice and lets his real power out. The summoner swears he's going to stop holding back, but Seung-hyun just looks at him like he's watching a bad comedy skit. Even the crowd cannot believe what they are seeing as the pressure shifts, reminding everyone that this guy is technically an SSS rank summoner when he is not playing around. The whole vibe takes Seung-hyun back to a day hanging out with his friends when they introduced him to a board game specifically designed for ability users. It was not just for fun though, as the console scans their real-world stats to generate avatars. Purium goes first, watching as the system builds her a high-tier wizard character based on her mana, explaining that these games are actually used as training tools for elites. Seung-hyun finally steps up to give it a shot. But when he places his piece on the board, nothing happens. The lack of a flashy transformation is awkward, making everyone think he's just a complete dud. His friends start theorizing that his energy levels are just too low for the scanner to even register, and the console even flashes a red error message saying it cannot analyze his abilities. Then the system suddenly pivots, identifying him as a returnee instead of a weakling. It starts assigning him a random hidden class, which is a rare event that sends the whole room into a panic. The group realizes that returnee label is way more important than some lucky hidden class, and Purium can barely process that the guy she knows might be something legendary. The man warns her to keep the returnee status a total secret if she can help it. Purium is confused why it's such a big deal, but he explains that most returnees come back with some heavy psychological baggage. Losing over a decade of their lives makes it almost impossible to reintegrate into normal society, leading many to turn to a life of crime where ability suppressors are completely useless against them. Since most of these guys are walking nukes with S-rank power levels, society sees them more as potential natural disasters than actual people. He warns that once the public finds out what they really are, the respect will turn into fear. The realization finally hits her why the label is so dangerous, but the rest of the group is way too hyped to care about the risks. They immediately start crowding around for stories from the other side, dying to know what it was actually like living in another world for all those years. Even the game console confirms the hype by assigning a legendary Dragon Slayer hidden class, making Purium wonder if being this different is actually going to make her an outcast. Her friends just shrug it off, saying the returnee stuff does not bother them at all. Seeing their genuine reaction finally takes the weight off her shoulders, and it looks like the group is actually okay with her being a total anomaly. Everyone starts leaning in with their own theories about the fantasy world, asking if the rumors about fighting demon lords and saving kingdoms are actually true. Then the conversation takes a sharp turn when they ask if he's ever actually had to kill someone. Purium is completely stunned by the blunt question about taking a life, which triggers a dark memory about the weight of killing and the mark of Cain. The scene shifts back to a desolate basketball court drenched in rain, where a brutal lesson in power dynamics is currently playing out. A mysterious fighter stands over his defeated opponent, acknowledging that the kid actually had the edge in skill and tactics. None of that matters now that he's the one left lying in the dirt. So the winner tells him not to take the loss too personally. He explains that power earned through blood and sweat usually loses to raw talent, pointing out how some people are capped by their rank from the very start. Others just stumble into the opportunities that everyone else is dying for, proving there's a hard limit to what sheer willpower can actually achieve. This warning serves as a grim preview of the monsters waiting at the school. Claiming that anyone heading there is just looking for a world of pain. The defeated fighter struggles to breathe but refuses to let the comment slide, bringing up his father's history as a way to defend the value of effort. His dad was not an S rank or even in a rank by the system's standards, yet the man cleared legendary gates that should have been impossible for him. Those achievements saved countless people and proved his worth to the world. And the son screams that his father's success was earned, not handed to him. Seung-hyun demands to know how an F rank is supposed to survive this world, and the rival finally snaps. He decides to stop holding back and brings up the kid's father and his specific record. This points back to the infamous S-rank gate in the Mapo district from 7 years ago, and the mention of that disaster hits a nerve as the kid asks why it is being brought up now. That dungeon break resulted in massive casualties that were not just caused by the monsters themselves. The rival drops the bombshell that some of those victims were actually killed by a hunter. Seung-hyun tries to defend the legacy, arguing that nobody blames his father for what happened anymore. But the rival is not looking for a debate about the public's perception of the event. There were reasons for the actions taken that day, but they do not change the outcome for the families left behind. The truth comes out when the rival reveals his own sister died during that specific operation. This direct blame for her death turns a historical tragedy into a personal vendetta, and the revelation leaves the kid completely stunned, unable to process the weight of the accusation. The rival mocks the logic of sacrificing the few to save the many as a betrayal of what a hunter should be, questioning the entire foundation of their profession if protecting everyone is not the primary goal. The conversation shifts to the present as he asks what Seung-hyun is actually trying to become. It is a challenge to his motivations and whether he is prepared for the reality of the hunter world. Knowing what kind of hunter the kid plans to be is the only thing that matters now, and the question lingers as the ideological gap between them becomes an unbridgeable canyon. The tension stays high as the two face off with the truth finally out in the open. While a dark presence watches from the shadows, suggesting this conflict is being observed by someone else. Shin Miju drops a heavy question right out of the gate, asking if anyone has ever actually killed someone. The silence in the room gets real heavy as Sora tries to process the bluntness of the topic. Seung-hyun watches as she completely freezes up, unable to find the words to respond to such a dark turn in the conversation. Instead of answering, Sora just screams that she needs to use the bathroom, making a desperate exit as she bolts away from the group. It is a clumsy escape that leaves everyone else just staring at the door. While the rest of the crew is still processing what just happened, Miju just laughs it off like it's the funniest thing she's seen all day. Seunghyun finally asks why she'd even bring up something that's sensitive in the first place. She admits it was a bit creepy to ask, but the conversation quickly shifts to what department Sora is even in. When the guys mention she's actually in the hunter department, Miju's mood shifts instantly, claiming the girl will not last a week in that program. According to her, the hunter track is not just about taking down monsters in a dungeon. It's about the reality of killing and having to make that choice whenever the situation demands it. She points out that everyone enrolled in this school should have known the stakes before they walked through the door. The rest of the group goes quiet as the weight of that truth sinks in. Miju does not think someone who runs away from a question can survive the actual job. Out in the hallway, Sora is still gasping for air after fleeing the room, wondering why her body reacted that way when the topic of killing finally came up. Sora tries to convince herself she is clean. But the memory of that day still makes her heart race. This weight makes her feel like an outsider in the school, haunted by a scene she cannot seem to escape. Shin's presence is the only thing linking her to that moment, and she wonders if a normal life is even possible anymore. That's when the girl from earlier, Dan Modern, catches up, introducing herself properly to try and break the ice. Seeing Sora's state, she asks if continuing the game is even an option. Admitting she was mostly curious about seeing a hidden class in action. Sora can barely hold it together, doubting her place in the program, but Modern does not just walk away when things get heavy. Instead, she confesses to nearly taking a life once herself. The reveal catches Sora off guard as Modern explains her late awakening, describing a power she could not control when it first manifested. Her friends ended up getting caught in the crossfire back then. Yet she's still here because she refuses to let that define her. She tells Sora that one bad day does not mean the dream is over, and for the first time Sora looks at her spirit with a bit more clarity, realizing she might not have to carry this burden alone. Modern notices the giant rock that was originally blocking the path is gone, and Sora admits she did not actually use any force to move it. She explains that she just sat down and listened to the rock's sadness, letting the spirit inside vent its feelings through those massive waterfalls. Sharing her own pain created a connection that physical strength could not match, and once the rock felt cheered up, it simply rolled itself out of her way. It's proof that her unconventional empathy works even on inanimate objects, turning a major obstacle into a path forward through nothing but understanding. The kid and her spirit celebrate the win, proving friendship is her real power, which helps her and Modern finally start to bridge the gap between them. Modern realizes that Sora's perspective is exactly what has been missing, agreeing that sometimes just being there for someone is the only thing that matters. Just as they are about to head back, a sudden surge of power hits the room, pulling them into a confrontation regarding the Mappo S-Rank gate incident. This disaster from 7 years ago is clearly still an open wound for Seunghyun, who looks like he's on the verge of a total breakdown in front of the girls. He screams that nobody should be blamed for what happened back then, insisting there were reasons for the tragedy that people refuse to understand. The pain turns into a direct attack when he mentions his sister's death, and he blames Sora's father for killing her, leaving the poor girl in shock. Sora cannot believe what she is hearing, struggling to wrap her head around the idea that her dad was involved in the tragedy 7 years ago. The claim that he killed Subin's sister is a massive bombshell, and Seunghyun keeps pushing, questioning what kind of hunter the kid even thinks he is becoming. He throws the kid's own words back at him, mocking the goal of saving everyone when the reality of their world is so much darker. The kid admits he has not thought that far ahead, revealing that he is actually only here out of personal admiration for someone else. He knows he is not the only one with a simple motivation, pointing out that some people just want to make friends, even if that sounds ridiculous to a pro. After being told he was not cut out for this and facing rejection after rejection, he has realized that any goal is valid as long as you're serious about it. There is no such thing as a superior dream in this world. And he looks Seunghyun in the eye to tell him they're exactly the same. This comparison is the final straw for the white-haired hunter, who starts losing control as his power begins to fracture and surge out of him. Sora and the others can only watch from the sidelines as the conversation turns into a physical threat, yet the kid stands his ground, insisting that they are both driven by the same fundamental pain. This just fuels the fire, leading to a total outburst as Seunghyun demands to know how they could possibly be equals, while his mana starts to materialize into a dangerous physical form. MC keeps his focus steady even as the room starts to vibrate with killing intent, and Seunghyun finally snaps, screaming at the top of his lungs while letting his mana run wild. The elite hunter lunges forward with his power crystallized into sharp geometric barriers, but the initial impact does not go the way he expected. Instead of crushing his opponent, Seunghyun finds himself stumbling back in total disbelief, as the kid finds an opening and drives a counterblow straight through his guard. This hit sends the white-haired hunter skidding across the deck with enough force to crack the floor, leaving him gasping for air while trying to process how he is losing ground. He refuses to accept being pushed back by someone he considers a bottom-tier loser. So he forces his mana to stabilize for one more desperate, high-output strike. The protagonist does not give him an inch, closing the distance to grapple with him head-on, and the resulting energy clash creates a blinding surge that rattles the entire cruise ship. Seung-hyun is clearly reaching his limit, gritting his teeth as the raw pressure turns against him, while the MC continues to suppress the elite's power with sheer physical dominance. Sora and the other witnesses can only watch as the training session turns into a literal disaster, culminating in a massive pillar of light that beams straight from the deck into the sky. Once the discharge finally clears, the kid stands his ground among the debris, watching as the last of the mana storm suddenly dissipates into the night air. It's clear that the gap between them was not what Seung-hyun originally thought. Especially now that a final impact leaves the arrogant hunter broken and defeated on the ground. Seung-hyun tries to shake off the cobwebs, but his head is absolutely spinning. He quickly realizes something is wrong when his spirit power starts flickering out as the mana crystals literally shatter into nothing before his eyes. Panicking over his disappearing spirits, the elite hunter is wide open for a counter, and the kid takes full advantage by slamming into him with a heavy tackle. Looking down at his arm, the arrogant hunter finally spots the source of the interference. It's a high-grade power seal device, the kind used to neutralize dangerous criminals. He realizes it must have been slapped on him during that last energy clash, which is exactly what the MC planned after raiding his dad's secret gear drawer. Now completely nerfed, the high-ranking elite collapses while the kid catches his breath. The protagonist is exhausted, but he still manages to mock the guy for falling for it. Seung-hyun is left totally defenseless, his mana pool locked away by the stolen tech. The kid does not waste any time, closing the distance to finish the job once and for all. Sora and the other girls watch from the sidelines, completely floored by the violence. They can't believe the quiet student they knew is capable of being this brutal, but the mood gets even heavier as he prepares to land his final words. He tells the broken hunter that even the smallest dreams should not be looked down on, and that dismissing others based on rank was his biggest mistake. A final, crushing strike connects as he declares they are fundamentally the same, leaving the elite hunter unconscious and the duel officially over. Seung-hyun can barely process that he actually lost to a kid using a simple gadget, but the victory triggers a deep memory of when the MC had nothing left. Back then, the entire world felt like it had completely ended for him. This flashback reveals the real reason why he refuses to ever back down now. Years ago, he was just a lone kid wandering through the ruins of a massive disaster, running through the aftermath until his legs finally started to give out on him. There was no end to the wreckage or the heavy silence in the ruins. The distant city lights looked like a world he no longer belonged to at all. He spent that night wondering what kind of sick fate put him in this hell. While things were getting brutal on the ground, the sky stayed completely indifferent. The stars just kept shining while he struggled through the dirt completely alone. Eventually, the kid hit his breaking point and collapsed into the cold debris. He could not understand why nobody was coming to pull him out of the mess. Every plea for help went ignored as the world around him stayed totally silent. Professional hunters were actually in the area, but they did not care about a lone survivor. They walked right past the tragedy like it was just another day at the office. Not a single person reached out a hand to help him stand back up. Watching them leave, he realized the hero system was fundamentally broken from the start. If hunters were not actually going to save people, then the title was a total lie. That is when he vowed to become the one hunter who would never leave anyone behind. MC promises to never let another person suffer through that kind of isolation again. Whitehair is not buying the sentiment and insists their paths could not be more different. The kid hits him with the hard truth about wasting such overwhelming potential, asking why someone with that much power would only ever look out for themselves. He demands his opponent finally start taking the path of a hero seriously, because the weight of that responsibility actually means something in the real world. Even though he does not know the guy's past or the trauma he is hiding, the kid is ready to learn what it means to be a hunter starting right now. That is the whole reason he signed up for this academy in the first place. Just as the tension between them hits its peak in the arena, a sudden interruption breaks the flow of their conversation and shifts the mood. A gunshot rings out across the training grounds to signal a change in the trial. And a strange, glitching silhouette manifests right in front of the two students. MC is completely thrown off by the sudden arrival of this new presence, staring at a digital phantom that does not belong in this training simulation. The entire atmosphere shifts as their training session gets hijacked by an external force, leaving both fighters grounded while the simulation around them begins to warp. Someone has clearly pulled the plug on their private duel before a winner was decided, forcing them to face a mysterious entity that should not even be active. Now the kid has to figure out if this is a surprise test or a deadly system error. The kid demands to know who this glitching intruder is, but the story takes a quick step back to explain how things got this bad. Rewinding just a few seconds before the interruption, the other students are watching the clash from the sidelines. They are completely baffled by the sheer scale of the fight, especially when they realize Purium is right in the middle of it. Nobody knows why these two are already going at each other's throats, and shouting for them to stop does not do a single thing. The fighters are too locked into their own world to hear the crowd, making the onlookers realize that someone is going to get seriously hurt. One of the girls is ready to jump into the fray to break them up, but her friend tries to talk some sense into her before she gets killed. He points out that stepping between them is like walking into a gunfight, which actually gives her a pretty radical idea for a solution. She thinks they should just treat these powers like guns that need confiscating, suggesting they find a way to strip their abilities away entirely. It sounds like a total suicide mission given the destruction so far, but the risk of doing nothing is starting to outweigh the danger. Spectacles decides he cannot just stand around and watch the chaos. So he tells the others to stay back while he gears up to intervene. Spectacles finally pulls out a high-tech magic device, deciding that a literal gun is the only way to stop this madness. The onlookers are stunned by the sudden escalation of force, but the threat is enough to make the combatants finally stand down. Both fighters are completely drained and gasping for air, giving the glasses kid the chance to finally get their attention. He stands over them like a disappointed hall monitor, immediately launching into a lecture about how they have been ignoring him. The duelists are mostly just confused by the weapon in his hand, especially since he is more worried about them damaging the ship. They are forced to just sit there and take the verbal beating while he complains about the constant stream of troublemakers he has to manage. He singles out Sun Purium for causing the biggest headache, reminding everyone that magic devices are strictly banned on this voyage. Now all three of them are looking at serious disciplinary action, which makes the blue-haired kid realize they have really messed up this time. Once the situation finally settles down for the day, the blonde guy starts moping about his perfect record of trouble being ruined. Spectacles later admits a professor actually authorized him to bring the weapon, leading the group to realize the faculty is just as unhinged as the students. Spectacles warns them that the fallout from the duel is going to be a total pain, before ordering everyone to split up and head to their assigned dorms. Modan realizes for the first time that the group is being split up, but the guys explain the island is actually covered in various housing complexes. Her only goal is to avoid being placed with a specific terrifying upperclassman, while Jinsung checks the list and finds out they are headed to Ingsak Hall. They start dragging their gear toward the new living quarters, double-checking the room assignments on their phones to make sure they are right. That's when they run right into the white-haired rival they were just fighting, who's also standing there with his bags packed and ready to move in. The realization hits him at the exact same time it hits the rest of them, and the look on his face says he's just as thrilled about the pairing as they are. It turns out their luck is bottom tier because they're officially dorm mates, forcing the former enemies to play nice now that they're sharing a roof. Their supervisor On Doyen pulls up in a flashy car to greet the new arrivals, immediately making the group feel like kids with her overly cheerful attitude. Modan plays it cool with a few compliments while feeling like she dodged a bullet, since a new girl pops up to confirm she is also staying at Ingsak Hall. Doyen tells them to load up the trunk so she can personally drive them over, and while the girls are thrilled, the guys realize this semester is going to be exhausting. A century ago, the world fell into total chaos, leading one man to realize people with powers needed a proper education. During the Japanese occupation, he secretly built a facility on a remote island, which eventually became the legendary Seonghan Ability Academy. It might look like a backwater school from a distance, but the entire island is actually a massive high-tech school city. They've got the best gear and information money can buy, backed by infrastructure that rivals most major world capitals. Every aspiring hunter on the planet dreams of getting in, but one student managed to enroll without knowing any of that. Modan joined up without a clue about the school's prestige, mostly just celebrating the fact she can finally tie her hair back alone. Jinsung checks in to make sure she is actually moving. Since they need to head out for the big entrance ceremony, it's officially day one of the first semester and the energy at Ingsak Hall is already picking up. Bro is waiting out front for the rest of the crew, noticing that one of their new roommates is already missing. Apparently, Subin headed out early to prep for the event, leaving the guys wondering what kind of prep an entrance ceremony actually needs. Subin takes the stage as this year's freshman representative, leading over 600 students in a pledge to uphold the academy's rules. Jinsung finds the whole following policy thing a bit ironic, considering he already got a warning before the first bell even rang. But being the rep means she officially had the highest entrance score in the class. That water blast back on the ship was easily a rank level output, and Jinsung knows if he had not brought a sealing device, he'd be the one on the ground. If he's going to make it into the student council like his dad wanted, he has to figure out how to survive in a grade full of monsters like her. Meanwhile, Modan is just vibing and enjoying the fact she actually got in. She's hyped to start learning hunter stuff the second the ceremony wraps up, but a teacher stops her to say she's heading back to the dorms instead. Confusion sets in until the kid points out her very specific situation. Since she has not actually finished elementary school yet, her morning schedule looks a lot different than the other freshmen. While the rest of the class is training, she's stuck studying for her JED. The list of subjects includes everything from math to social studies, and the reality of academic life hits her way harder than any monster could. Bro hands her off to the teacher and asks her to look after his sister. Leaving Jinsung to realize the feeling of mutual hatred is officially starting to set in, we move over to Yunhing Hall where the freshmen are settling in for their first official lecture. Jinsung is scanning the syllabus for a class called Hunter Ethics, wondering what they are actually supposed to learn in a place like this. Right as the clock hits noon, the lecture hall doors fly open with a loud bang, instead of a normal teacher walking in. The sound of wheels rolling across the floor grabs everyone's attention. Total confusion spreads through the room. As a man in a trench coat drifts in on a hoverboard, looking like he has not slept since the last century, he glides all the way down to the podium and finally steps off to address the new students. He keeps the introduction short and sweet, telling the class his name is Hajiwara Jin. But before the lesson starts, he has a confession to make. This man absolutely hates this school, along with pretty much every other educational institution on Earth. To him, cramming 40 different ability users into one room to teach them the same boring material is just peak inefficiency. Jin doubles down on his obsession with efficiency and kicks things off by asking the class a fundamental question. If modern military power can easily take down most monsters, why are humans the only ones being sent into the dungeons? The room goes quiet while everyone tries to find a deep answer. But the reality is much simpler, it is just more cost-effective. Tanks and missiles are expensive enough to wipe out any profit from magic stones, while an ability user only needs a meal and a nap to stay in the green. At the end of the day, the entire profession is built on the bottom line, which is why they are called hunters instead of heroes or saviors. This logic applies to the battlefield too, where stamina is a finite currency. Combat requires using the minimum amount of power with the most efficient movement, because putting too much into one swing is a quick way to die from exhaustion. To him, judgment is the single most important quality a hunter can possess. He immediately puts this to the test by calling out a student in the front row. The kid nervously reveals that he is a construct-type user, but the professor wants to know if he actually understands his own limitations. When asked if he can break down chemical compounds, the student freezes up. Jin hammers him with questions about weight limits and manipulation speed, and since the kid does not have the numbers, he gets failed on the spot. Jin quotes Sun Tzu, basically saying self-knowledge is the key to surviving any fight, because if you do not even understand what you can do, you are useless at planning. The class is dead silent under the pressure, especially with Jin's intense gaze scanning the room for the next victim. He singles out the curly-haired kid in the back and demands to know what kind of ability he's working with. Seunghyun just stares back blankly while the professor waits for an answer, clearly sweating as the seconds tick by in front of everyone. Finally, the kid admits he has no idea what his type actually is, which is a massive red flag for someone in a top-tier academy. Jin looks ready to blow a fuse over the incompetence, while the rest of the class is stunned by the rookie mistake. Once the lecture wraps up and everyone spills out into the hallway, Seunghyun's friend catches up to him, absolutely losing his mind. He thinks the kid is just trying to look cool by acting mysterious, accusing him of showing off on the very first day of class. But Seunghyun is dead serious. He's never heard of types or constructs in his life. That realization stops the friend dead in his tracks, as it becomes clear that this guy is a total blank slate. Annoyed, the friend just tells him to go figure it out on his own. Seunghyun notices the vibe in the halls has shifted, and he can feel the eyes of every student following him. Something is definitely off after that awkward display in class. He decides to seek out some actual answers from a pro. Professor Key is buried in work when the kid knocks. But Seunghyun is not there to just chat, he needs a crash course. Admitting that he's already falling behind the other students, the rookie explains that everyone else seems light years ahead. Even with all his reading, the terminology just is not clicking. Key stops him to ask for his official ability certification, only to lose his mind when Seunghyun says he does not have one. It turns out the kid could not get the paperwork signed as a minor, which leaves the professor absolutely floored by the situation. He realizes Seunghyun's dad was intentionally sabotaging his hunter path, but then wonders how his sister managed to get by without it. A quick check reveals that his sister is just as clueless as he is, proving the lack of common sense runs deep in the family. Seunghyun hopes he can just fix it once he hits adulthood, but Key screams that he is already way behind the curve. Apparently, just doing physical drills with his brother was not enough. Key clarifies that Seunghyun's brother was not just being vague on purpose, it's that he literally was not allowed to explain how abilities work. See, the second someone gets their official certification, they're forced into a magical pact that gags them from talking to uncertified people. It's essentially a massive spiritual oath linking every authorized user on the planet. This is why everything you find on the internet is either fake or just surface level, because even a weak ability can be a lethal, invisible weapon if used correctly. Without these strict controls, public safety would have collapsed long ago, leaving Seunghyun to finally realize why his brother's training was so limited. Key is not just impressed by the kid's rare power anymore, but by the fact that he has such sharp battle instincts despite being a total amateur. He's satisfied with his eye for talent, noting that students here are provisionally qualified anyway. To help him catch up, the professor hands over a specialized blue cube. This thing grants access to a private network containing the real secrets of the hunter world. Seunghyun is told to grind that site for info until he actually knows his stuff, while keeping his mouth shut about his lack of knowledge in the meantime. Since he's aiming for the student council at a school this elite, he cannot afford any slip-ups. The pressure of keeping up appearances is already starting to weigh on him, but he promises to stay under the radar for now. Meanwhile, his sister is back home wondering if her own cube can run mobile games. Soyeon is still convinced her cube is just a fancy game console, but her friend encourages her to just give it a tap and see what happens. The device reacts immediately to the touch, syncing up with her personal data and officially recognizing her as a student. Turns out this thing is a magical search engine that can answer almost any question. When the cube actually starts talking back, the girl nearly jumps out of her skin. Once the initial surprise wears off, she decides to use it for something serious. She wants the truth about the Mapo Gate incident that went down 7 years ago. It is a dark piece of history that clearly still haunts her family. So she asks the AI to explain exactly what happened that day. The system does not have enough data to go on and asks for more specific details. Soyeon mentions it involved her father and a death, trying to narrow the search only for her friend to step in before things get too personal with the AI. Rather than digging into family tragedies, they decide to check the school forums first. They log into the academy's general board to see what the other kids are talking about, expecting some high-level hunter secrets or serious training tips. Instead, it is just a bunch of normal students complaining about lunch and lost ID cards. But as they keep scrolling, a thread about today's hunter ethics class catches her eye. The thread explicitly names Gi Seunghyun as the guy who knows absolutely nothing, and Soyeon realizes her brother is already at the center of a massive school scandal. Seunghyun is walking and studying the basics, trying to fix the knowledge gap everyone's talking about, but a mysterious voice nearby suggests it is time for an investigation. Two students from the academy's newspaper club suddenly pop out to corner him. They zero in on him immediately, confirming he's the famous freshman from all the forum rumors. As soon as he admits his identity, they call for the cameras and start their ambush. These guys claim to be the school's premier gossip reporters, and they're moving at lightning speed, grabbing his hand to force a strange ring onto his finger before he can protest. It's a specialized device that measures mana output on the fly, and the reporters are way too excited to see the final result. The ring shows a pathetic 1-bar reading, confirming he's functionally at the bottom of the barrel. They laugh in his face because he does not even recognize a standard rank scanner. Seeing the F-rank result on screen is exactly the scandal they were hoping to catch, and they're already celebrating because a weakling in the elite hunter department is a massive scoop. Hyunsu shoves a mic in his face and demands to know how he cheated his way in. The questions get aggressive fast, with accusations of school bribery flying left and right. They start theorizing that he's either a rich heir or some legendary hunter's kid pulling strings. Seunghyun finally has enough of the harassment and tells them to shut the whole thing down. He orders the camerawoman to stop filming, and his change in tone actually makes her flinch. But the lead reporter is not done and refuses to hand back the ring without a fight. He laughs and challenges Seunghyun to a duel, claiming it is the only way to kill the story. Hyunsu keeps barking about the F-rank reveal, thinking he's caught the scandal of the century. This guy is basically losing it, laughing like he's already won the lottery. The reporter quickly changes his tune once Seunghyun gets physical, begging to give the ring back. Dealing with these clowns is a massive headache, especially with the student council election coming up. Seunghyun starts wondering if his reputation is already too trash to even make the cut. Even after the reporter stops screaming, the mockery still feels like it is echoing in his head. The guy practically begs for mercy, promising to bury the story just to stay in one piece. It's exhausting having to handle people who only care about rankings and viral clicks. All this drama makes his transition into school life look like a total uphill battle. But things are about to get much more dangerous than a few annoying school reporters. The next class starts with a bombshell as the instructor orders everyone to form teams of 3. Seunghyun tries to group up, but everyone is already pairing off with their own friends. Being the new guy with a bad rumor attached makes him an instant social pariah. One group even checks his rank, making it clear they will not carry any C-rank dead weight. Standing there as an official F-rank is basically a death sentence for his social life. He eventually gives up and tells the professor that nobody wants him on their squad. Instead of helping, the professor just tells him to take on the trial solo. Going alone against a team-sized threat sounds like a great way to get yeeted out of school. A massive purple monster spawns in, and it's way bigger than anything an F-rank should handle. The creature swings immediately, leaving him zero time to complain about the unfair matchup. Seunghyun takes the zero on the chin like he's used to it, but the academic side of things isn't going any better than the combat trial. The professor puts him on the spot with a dungeon strategy question he cannot answer, and after a couple of bad guesses, the guy basically asks why he's even enrolled. Apologizing doesn't make the awkwardness go away, so he retreats to the cafeteria for some peace. Peace is hard to find when he's busy fuming over the professor's blatant bias. Asking about the specific weaknesses of monsters from the 80s feels like a personal attack. And his mood only drops further when he sees his sister across the room. She notices him sitting by himself and tries to head over, but the kid knows exactly how this looks to the other students. Her friends end up dragging her away before she can make a scene, pitying her for having a brother who's such a social disaster. Seunghyun actually prefers it this way, since keeping her at a distance keeps her from being associated with his failing reputation. Being the lonely guy is a role he's been playing for a long time, and honestly, not much has changed since his days in middle school. The real problem is his plan to join the student council, because nobody is going to elect a guy with 0 scores and 0 friends. Just as he's thinking about how to turn things around, another student interrupts his lunch, and it looks like his solitary mealtime is officially over. Seunghyun is not exactly popular after his 0-score stunt, but this visitor is not here to bully him. This guy has something specific he needs to discuss, and it turns out Seunghyun is not the only one in the family having a rough time at the academy. Hearing that his sister Mauden is struggling immediately kills his appetite, and he demands to hear every detail about what has been happening with her. The white-haired student starts laying out the situation from the previous day, revealing a side of the academy Seunghyun has not seen yet. During their mock combat class, Mauden was basically a statue while her team fought off monsters. Her teammates were furious that she was not pulling her weight, especially since she was not even attempting to use her weapon. They called her out for refusing to use her abilities, leaving her with nothing but apologies. One student tried to play mediator by saying she covered the gap, but the tension in the group did not just disappear. Mauden apologized again as the weight of the failure set in, including to the same guy who's currently sitting across from Seunghyun. It turns out she has not been the same since a specific incident in their past. She's been completely unable to tap into her magic out of fear of losing control again. The faculty even told her that Seunghyun would be the one forced to step in if she ever snaps. This mental block seems tied to whatever happened 7 years ago. Back when an S-rank gate opened in Mappo and changed everything for their family, Mauden is hitting a wall and even the dorm matron is dodging questions about the blue cube incident. The stress of keeping it all together is clearly getting to her, and she's starting to wonder if school is really supposed to be this exhausting. Her body finally gives out in the middle of a lecture and she ends up passed out at her desk. By the time she snaps back to reality, the room is already mostly empty. Sleeping through the entire class is a total disaster, especially since she did not manage to write down a single note for the day. She looks around for anyone she can borrow from, but her classmates are already heading for the door. Seunghyun walks right past her without a word, leaving her completely on her own to deal with the fallout of her nap. The girl tries to work up the nerve to chase after someone for help, but the opportunity slips away before she can even open her mouth. Alone in the hallway, the weight of her constant failures finally starts to sink in. She's beating herself up for being so careless and weak when a voice suddenly breaks the silence to ask if she's crying. A massive student looms over her out of nowhere, and his intense expression makes him look way more intimidating than he probably means to be. It turns out he caught on to exactly why she's so upset. Instead of giving her a hard time, the guy offers to share his own notes to bail her out. He tells her to follow him to get the info, and she is quick to accept the unexpected lifeline. Junil leads Mauden into another lecture hall to find a student named Yunbai. Instead of handing over his own work, he immediately demands to see her notes from earlier. Yunbai's friend is caught off guard, realizing he was never actually offering his own help. Yunbai points out that she already did him a supposed final favor the last time he asked. The guy quickly pivots, claiming he's only asking because the new freshman did not get anything down, even though it is clear Mauden is just a convenient excuse for his own laziness. Junil starts getting desperate, complaining that his entire year is cooked if he fails again, and he tries to guilt-trip Yunbai by asking if she really wants to see him flunk out. Sensing the awkwardness, Mauden speaks up and says it's fine if they do not want to share, making it clear that forcing someone to give up their work against their will is a problem. Junil takes offense to the call-out, acting like he's being painted as some kind of bad guy, and claims he was only trying to be helpful and does not appreciate the attitude. The tension in the room spikes as he asks if what he's doing is actually wrong, while Yunbai's friend decides she has had enough of the drama and prepares to head out. He just starts laughing it off like the whole confrontation is a joke, which is enough for the girl to turn her back and try to walk away, but a rough grip on her arm brings her departure to a dead stop, and the rest of the class can only watch as things turn physically aggressive. Junil is fuming because she's making him look shady in front of his peers, and he demands she stay right there to fix the misunderstanding he caused. The girl tries to wrench herself away from Junil's grip, throwing a desperate elbow to force some breathing room. The strike connects with way more force than anyone expected, and the rest of the classroom just freezes in place. Even she seems caught off guard by the result of her own swing, while blood starts dripping from Junil's nose onto his hands. He realizes that as a body-type user, he should not be taking damage like this, leading him to demand if she is hiding a combat ability. It's impossible for a regular student to bypass his physical resistance, so he reaches the most dangerous conclusion he can think of. He labels her as a secret returnee in front of the entire class, making him realize he's potentially dealing with more than one of them. The thought of another power player in the room sets him off, especially with the bad reputation returnees have for causing trouble. She tries to explain it was an accident, but Junil is already done talking. Junil decides to stop holding back and finally settle the score, throwing a heavy punch meant to end the confrontation instantly. A crystalline barrier suddenly materializes and stops the blow cold, just as someone else walks into the middle of the chaos. Mauden steps in to block the hit and mockingly repeats Junil's own words back to him. Mauden continues mocking Junil's speech, throwing his own words right back at him. This catches the senior off guard as the freshman stands firmly in his way. Subin adds that only someone who has witnessed real injustice would give such an answer, and with the tension peaking, the confrontation moves into a new phase. Junil demands to know who this is, but Subin just introduces himself as a freshman. Still obsessed with his theory, the senior claims the girl used a hidden ability. He keeps shouting that she attacked him, trying to justify his aggression to the crowd. Subin cuts through the noise and calmly addresses his senior, questioning if a single person in the room actually saw her use an ability, and since nobody saw anything, he asks what the big deal is regardless. Subin lists Junil's screw-ups from the physical assault to the public outing. To him, using a power is more civil than the senior's thuggish behavior. Being lectured by a first year only makes the senior more aggressive, but something about the kid's presence makes him freeze up mid-sentence. A massive wave of pressure starts pouring off the freshman, making it clear he is not just some random student making a scene. Subin looks him dead in the eye and accepts a duel on the spot. The challenge is officially on the table and the rest of the class is stunned. Junal struggles to maintain his composure under the weight of the aura, only able to curse under his breath as the situation spirals out of control. Subin shifts his focus from the duel to his personal life. Sitting down with his brother to discuss the fallout of the recent scene, he warns that while avoiding his sister might be easy, he still needs to look out for her. Now that the whole school knows she is a returnee, her reputation is going to take a massive hit. The brother is already drowning in his own problems, watching her eat alone and realizing he's in no position to protect anyone right now. Just as he starts spiraling over what to do, a third student chimes in with a potential solution. This new guy somehow managed to join their table without making a sound, leaving both of them completely baffled by his sudden, stealthy entrance. Instead of explaining his ninja skills, he starts ranting about the state of the cafeteria food. He's hung up on how the noodles were tastier and the broth was thicker last year, mourning the loss of the previous cafeteria lady like it was a genuine tragedy. Subin tries to snap him out of it and focus on the conversation. But the guy is still stuck on the disaster of the current lunchroom menu. Once the mystery student finally gets to the point, the brother asks for the actual plan. The kid explains that the only way to fix their family's standing is to improve their reputation. If they can manage to look good in front of the school, the sister's life will finally stabilize. This all hinges on the upcoming observation class happening in 2 weeks. It is a massive event where parents come to watch the students perform, featuring high-stakes duels between the freshmen and the elite upperclassmen. Correcting the rumor about parents, the upperclassman explains that unqualified people cannot even enter the hall because the real observers are high-level pros scouting for new talent. We're talking industry legends, top-tier hunters from the biggest guilds, and influential managers who all show up to see which freshmen are worth the investment. If Subin can pull off a dominant performance in front of a crowd like that, his current trash reputation will vanish overnight, and he will finally prove he is not just some lucky fluke. Curious about the logistics, the brother asks how the school actually organizes these fights. Since they usually group students by their ID numbers, the upperclassman suggests picking a fight with a D-rank senior, giving him a chance to show off without taking too much of a risk. When Subin asks for names of weaker targets, the upperclassman refuses to help him hunt for easy wins. This pushes the kid to take matters into his own hands and aim for a much bigger challenge. Heading over to the Seonghan Library later that day, the kid makes a move to get into the restricted document viewing room. The goal is to see student combat footage, which is usually off-limits to everyone but faculty. A quick swipe of a borrowed professor's ID card gets him past the security gate, opening up total access to the school's private archives. If the group assignments follow the same ID-based pattern as last year, then at least one of the other high-profile returnees will be in his specific bracket. The plan is to study their fighting styles now and challenge them to a duel during the observation class. Subin's plan is to use his chains to subdue a returnee right in front of the pro scouts. Elsewhere, a secret meeting is taking place late into the night. This muscular student is still fuming after being completely humiliated by someone named Gi Soyeon. He's dead set on using the upcoming observation class to get some payback and teach them a lesson. His companion is not exactly convinced he has what it takes to win, reminding him that he went down with a single nosebleed the last time they crossed paths. Even though she agrees that Soyeon is a problem, she offers to step in and handle the returnee herself. The offer catches him off guard, but a deal like this always comes with a price. She will take care of the fight if he agrees to owe her a favor down the line. He warns her that even with her skills, trying to hunt a returnee is a massive gamble, but she's already figured out a specific way to neutralize their experience. Looking at it from a different angle, being a returnee actually makes them a predictable target that's easier to trap. Meanwhile, Subin is finally geared up and heading toward the staging area. After all the research and training, his preparations are officially finished. The doors slide open to reveal a massive arena packed with pro scouts and rival students. Stepping into the spotlight, the kid realizes this is the moment he finally gets to prove his worth to the world. With the stage set and his strategy ready, the observation class officially begins. Subin stands in the middle of the arena with the pressure of the scouts weighing on him, and he knows this is the only shot he has to finally make a name for himself. Meanwhile, the regular classes are wrapping up for the day, but Soyeon is feeling completely useless after barely keeping up with the lessons. Her slump gets interrupted when the professor pulls her aside for a private trip, offering to personally show her where the observation class is actually going down. They head out past the normal school grounds into a scenic mountain path, leaving Soyeon wondering why a classroom would be out in the middle of nowhere. She starts realizing there's a lot more to this academy than just textbooks, especially when they reach a random elevator standing solo in the landscape. This is just one of the many hidden routes leading down to underground Building 13. As they descend, the professor notes she's never seen the school's subterranean level, which is not surprising given how deep they are actually going. Turns out this place started as a top-secret facility back in the day, meaning the majority of the campus is buried safely beneath the surface. The doors open to reveal a massive high-tech city hidden under the dirt, looking exactly like the kind of secret hideout every gamer dreams of finding. The professor admits she is not far off as they keep moving toward the facility's core. He explains that anything too dangerous for the public stays down here in the dark, from cursed magical artifacts to unstable dungeon zones that could blow at any second. And they've even got high-tier monsters locked up for research purposes, essentially turning the basement into a high-security zoo for nightmares. The professor mentions there are even secret rooms he is not allowed into, while the kid struggles just to keep up with his walking pace. They eventually reach the main hub of the underground city, where he takes a second to check in on how school is going. He asks if she is finding the curriculum or the environment too difficult, leading her to admit that social life is not exactly her strong suit. She's managed to bond with Mo Dan despite the rocky start, and even the upperclassmen like Purium and Woojin have been welcoming. Even Subin went out of his way to help her out with class notes. But the rest of the student body treats her like a ticking time bomb. She's terrified that her powers will spiral out of control again, haunted by the memory of the last person she accidentally hospitalized. The professor tells her she does not need to carry that weight alone, promising he will be there to shut things down if it gets dangerous. Hearing that her brother is watching over her helps settle her nerves, as the professor guarantees that history is not going to repeat itself. They finally arrive at the arena where a massive crowd has already gathered, catching up with Subin and the others just as the main event kicks off. Professor Han calls out Seunghyun for being precisely a minute and 42 seconds late, immediately diving into the rules for the high-stakes observation class. This massive underground arena is a special facility sponsored by UJ Magical Industries, designed specifically for 10-minute duels between senior and junior pairs. Han activates a remote to kick off the technical demonstration, revealing a high-tech system that links the students directly to the surrounding environment. The custom suits everyone is wearing sync their physical bodies to those stone statues, which serves a much bigger purpose than just looking like fancy decorations. Han initiates a demonstration to show exactly how the safety system functions, catching the students off guard as a direct hit connects with a test subject. While the impact looks lethal, the physical damage is instantly redirected away from the body, shattering the linked stone statue instead of the person standing in the arena. This setup allows the students to fight with every bit of their power without holding back, since the risk of permanent injury or accidental death is effectively removed from the session. The professor tells everyone to stay calm and treat this as a simple learning opportunity. But the reality of the situation is making the students anything but relaxed. They are not just fighting each other, they are performing for a gallery of elite hunters, turning the observation class into a high-pressure trial for their future careers. Seunghyun confirms that scouts from the industry giants Shinsung and UJ are in the house, meaning the two biggest names in the hunter world are watching their every move. The stands are packed with heavy hitters from the world's top two guilds. Shinsung and UJ are not just here to watch, they are here to shop for talent. Oh Gangho and Mateo represent Shinsung's interests today while Gu Jihwan and Du Jinwook are scouting for the rival UJ guild. Mateo wonders why they're wasting time on a bunch of freshmen, prompting Gangho to remind him how this observation actually works. To an outsider, it looks like a standard sparring session between grades, but the smart students know this is their biggest shot at a career. It's essentially a live-action job interview where the stakes are life-changing, and Gangho warns his team not to blink for a second. If they are not careful, the UJ crew will poach the best talent right under their noses. Down on the field, the upperclassmen are already picking their targets, with one senior eyeing a freshman he thinks will be an easy meal. Suddenly, a girl with a massive gear case interrupts his hunt, demanding that he duel her instead of his original target. The senior can't help but laugh at the sheer audacity of the challenge, leaving the rest of the students wondering if she's actually lost her mind. They all know this guy is the famous one for a reason, a monster that most people in this school would go out of their way to avoid, and yet she just keeps staring him down without blinking. The kid starts heading toward the center of the arena, while his friend freaks out about him actually trying to take on a returnee. He is not worried because he thinks his chains are the ultimate equalizer, believing his sealing device gives him enough of an edge to suppress anyone. This logic worked for him in the past against powerful foes, but the senior mentions that he actually picked the smartest possible target. Apparently, the girl he challenged is considered the weakest of the bunch, mostly because she stopped using her actual returnee abilities altogether. This news catches the kid completely off guard. And he realizes he was missing a pretty massive piece of information. Since the end of last year, she's been relying strictly on magical gear instead of her own power, leaving him to face an opponent who's essentially fighting with her real stats hidden. High above the arena, the scouts are watching the carnage unfold, as the other students trade blows in a desperate attempt to get noticed. It's a chaotic mess of energy and steel down on the field. But the real threat is that girl's signature weapon, a sword called Hongyeon. It looks like a standard blade, but it has a gimmick that breaks the laws of physics. Most swordsmen have to aim their strikes, but this weapon shoots energy in any direction, meaning she can swing forward and still hit someone standing directly behind her. Hearing this for the first time, he finally understands why she is so dangerous without her skills. The kid finds out this non-ability rule only started last semester, and even the senior's high-tier sword was a school-sponsored handout from earlier this year. Since the academy is not exactly handing out free loot, he's told he'll have to take gear from the local bullies instead. While he is processing the lack of support, he is interrupted by a familiar face as Mo Dan pops up to check in on his progress for their observation class. She casually mentions she has already picked her opponent, and it is Shin Miju. This news hits Woojin like a freight train because he knows exactly how dangerous that girl really is. Apparently, the sister convinced Mo Dan she was just being misunderstood and asked for a friendly duel. Woojin tries to warn her that the sweet version of Miju she met was definitely a hallucination. He tells the brother his sister is about to get snatched by a ghost while debating if he needs his own magic gear. The announcer cuts the chatter short by calling for the second duel of the day. It's Mo Dan's turn to step up, but her opponent isn't the girl she was expecting. She's hyped to get into the ring, but her friend points out a major problem with the matchup. Instead of the friendly match she was promised, she's facing a guy named Go Junal. He looks like the kind of guy who enjoys the bullying part of the school's gear policy a bit too much. Mo Dan does not seem to care about the intimidation factor, even as Junal makes it clear he's not planning on playing nice with a junior. The guy stomps onto the field with enough force to make sure everyone knows he is the heavy hitter. Before they can start swinging, they have to register their weapons on the arena's scanner. It's a standard safety protocol, but the tension is already through the roof before the first strike lands. Registration wraps up as the final countdown for the duel begins. Junal makes sure Dan knows she's about to get crushed by a pro. He pulls out his sword like it's some legendary loot drop from a high-level raid. This dude starts shouting about his corporate sponsorship from the Shinsung group and identifies his blade as a high-end piece named Echo. The announcement catches the faculty by surprise because they never authorized an outside group to provide student gear. Miju looks completely unbothered, having clearly arranged this whole setup herself. It becomes obvious that Junal is just a walking billboard for a massive corporation. He brags that the blade is going up for auction in a few weeks for a fortune. Dan is not interested in the price tag, focusing instead on his combat style. She realizes he's a body technique user based on his heavy reliance on that sword, reminding her of the lecture on the 5 main job categories. The flashback kicks in as she recalls how energy types are sorted. Every awakened person is assigned a role based on their specific power flavor, which determines their career path and how they actually fight. Body technique users are the frontline warriors, essentially the RPG tanks of this world. If a guy is obsessed with sword mastery and physical buffs, he fits the profile. Junal is definitely that type, meaning he's going to rely on raw physical pressure. With the timer hitting 3 seconds, Dan braces for the opening charge. The timer hits 2 as she recalls that body technique users are all about raw physical stats, but with 1 second left, the golden rule is clear. Getting into a melee with him is suicide. The duel officially kicks off and Junal immediately closes the gap with a massive high-speed swing. Instead of backing off, Dan dives right into the danger zone to meet his blade head-on, making him realize his expensive sword is actually getting held back by her basic gear. Junal doubles down with a heavy vertical smash that literally shatters the arena floor beneath them. The impact rattles her, proving that he is not just relying on the sword's quality for power. Miju watches from the sidelines, realizing the physical gap between the two is wider than she thought. Strategy dictates avoiding close combat, but Junal is already forcing the issue with every step. He lets out a shout and keeps the pressure high, forcing her into a desperate defensive rhythm. Every swing is designed to overwhelm her guard and break her stance through sheer force, yet Dan stays locked in, searching for a single opening while the wind from his blade cuts. It's a constant struggle to stay upright as Junal uses his superior reach to corner her. She manages to deflect another heavy blow, frustrating him as she refuses to just go down. The metal screeches as their weapons lock up again, turning the duel into a test of endurance. Despite the power difference, she plants her feet and absorbs the impact of his heavy overhead. The crowd starts to realize this is not going to be the quick stomp they expected from the senior. Observers are baffled that she can maintain a solid defense from such a disadvantaged position. A sudden surge of energy ripples through the air as the momentum of the duel begins to shift. And Junal overextends his follow-through, giving her the first real opening to turn the tables. The crowd cannot believe what they are seeing as the momentum of the duel takes a sharp turn. Junal is busy trying to figure out why his previous strike just bounced off thin air. That blade seems to have a built-in reflection effect that triggers without Dan even moving her arm. Despite the weird mechanics, the senior is actually impressed by how much her presence has changed. Dan warns him not to get too comfortable since she has not even started her real offensive yet. The atmosphere shifts as she prepares to demonstrate the true power of her unique armament. Strategy guides usually say to stay far away from body technique specialists to avoid getting shredded. Summoners are the rare exception to that rule because they do not fight with standard gear. By manifesting their own unique weapons, they bring variables into a fight that raw stats cannot account for. Each summon tool has its own broken ability that can completely bypass a physical advantage. It's the ultimate equalizer for a lower-ranked fighter looking to take down a high-tier opponent. Junal is not ready to back down yet, still confident that his speed will be the deciding factor. He thinks he can just outpace whatever gimmick she's trying to pull, but the math is not adding up. Spectators are starting to catch on that Dan is not just holding a weirdly shaped sword. The senior feels the weight of the situation the moment their weapons meet for the second time. This is not a normal exchange of blows as the energy from her blade begins to vibrate through his own. Suddenly, the speed advantage he was counting on starts to evaporate under the pressure. Dan moves in for the kill, swinging with a level of force that should not be possible for her rank. A single moment of lost focus is enough for her to find a hole in his defense and drive it home. The sound of the impact echoes across the floor, signaling that the underdog just landed a massive hit. Junel is still reeling from that heavy trade, as the energy from that weird spoon resonates through his guard and Dan refuses to give him a second to breathe. Despite the impact, the senior is still wearing that confident grin, stabilizing his stance just as she disappears into another dash. Dan stays on the gas, using her mobility to stay in his blind spots. Closing the distance again with a high-speed maneuver, she unleashes a relentless barrage of strikes that Junel can barely track, finally landing a massive clean hit right against his jaw, but the physical feedback from the impact is all wrong. Dan is certain she put everything into that swing, yet Junel just stands there like nothing happened, reaching up to check the spot where she landed the blow. His skin literally squishes under his fingers like wet clay. And the mystery of her summoned weapon finally comes to light. Junel realizes this is not a power gap issue but a specific ability, where the spoon turns anything it touches completely soft, making even the toughest muscles feel like a bowl of pudding. Reinforcing his body with mana will not help him here because one touch makes his entire defense totally irrelevant. Dan knows her advantage is completely gone now that the secret's out. Especially since she only managed to land that last hit by pure luck. The spoon and fork just are not going to get the job done here, but her system only allows her to summon one piece at a time, forcing her to manually cycle through the entire inventory mid-combat. Swapping weapons leaves a massive window where she is left completely defenseless, and it's been a long time since she managed to pull out the knife. Her mind drifts back to the day her powers first manifested at school. Cornered in a hallway while the local bullies had their way with her. They left her on the floor covered in trash and discarded food, but something shifted in the dirt during that moment of absolute desperation. Instead of another piece of harmless plastic cutlery or a dull spoon, the system finally handed her a sharpened serrated knife for the first time. The group was still laughing as they started to walk away down the hall. Totally unaware that the girl they just mocked was already back on her feet. One guy turned around to throw out one last insult at her, only to find her closing the distance before he could even blink. The entire hallway became a chaotic blur of screaming and rapid motion, ending with all of her tormentors face down on the tiles in a pool of blood. And that was the day she realized just how lethal her gift could truly be. Back in the present, Dan's adrenaline is still spiking from that dark memory. This duel between high-level ability users is finally reaching its boiling point. Her opponent decides he's done with his sword and tosses it aside, leaving everyone watching to wonder what his next play could be. He's going all out now, betting that he can force a total victory by constantly battering her armaments until her energy reserves hit zero. Dan just tells him to go ahead and try breaking her gear. Before launching her massive polearm directly at his head like a missile, the man prepares for a heavy impact, but the trajectory shifts as the giant weapon suddenly shrinks down into a regular dinner fork. This mid-air swap completely throws him off his timing while the small utensil begins circling him like a guided projectile. Before he can even figure out where the fork is going, Dan is already closing the distance to catch him in a blind spot. She summons a glowing spoon for the follow-up strike, and the two of them collide in a massive burst of raw energy. He tries to block the hit with everything he has left, barely managing to hold his ground against the sudden pressure. That's when the true nature of her knife's ability finally kicks in. The strike actually lands, but the force immediately veers off and flies away. Junel is left completely wide open by the strange physics of the last redirected hit. And Dan realizes this is her perfect window to finally end the training match. She moves in for a high-speed double slash to settle things once and for all, utilizing the unique power of a soul armament born directly from her own imagination. The impact lands with a heavy thud, but the feedback is not what she expected, as the specific mechanic of her knife's summoning ability finally starts to reveal itself. The blade technically makes direct physical contact with the target's defense. But the kinetic force is immediately redirected and flies away into the distance. This constant redirection keeps her target guessing while she resets her combat stance, which gives the girl the momentum needed to commit to a finishing blow. The double slash is finally unleashed with everything she has left in the tank, aimed directly at the opening she worked so hard to create during the exchange. Both fighters trade positions in a high-speed blur across the central arena floor, resulting in a massive shockwave that looks like it is splitting the training room in two. One of them is finally sent crashing down as the momentum of the strike breaks, and the girl skids across the floor while desperately trying to stay upright. The blue-haired student and the rest of the class are left completely speechless, as Dan ends up on her knees while the guy remains standing above her. The referee finally steps into the ring to make the official call on the match, declaring Go Junel the winner of this surprisingly close and intense duel. Junel cannot believe he actually pulled it off, but the pros watching from the sidelines know it was just a raw power gap. Even though he's celebrating the win, Dan is the one who left an impression. She's busy apologizing to her friends for the loss, yet they're all hyped about how well she actually performed. The blonde student is still annoyed that the jerk who insulted her sister won. But our guy points out that Dan is the real winner here. This takes the upperclassman by surprise, so the kid explains that in an observation class the scoreboard does not matter. The whole point of these duels is self-promotion for the big shot scouts. From that perspective, Dan showed way more potential than her opponent. She stayed calm against a stronger fighter and completely controlled the flow, even baiting his attention to land a clean hit when it mattered. Meanwhile, Junil just relied on brute forcing his way through her gear, while Dan demonstrated she could adapt her entire strategy on the fly. The fact that a senior struggled this much against a freshman is a huge red flag. No high-ranking guild is going to recruit someone who plays that sloppy. Insight is the most valuable trait when dealing with the chaos of a dungeon. The school is testing who can actually read the essence of a fight. And Junil was way too obsessed with his weapon to realize he was failing the test. Hanul realizes Junil's behavior goes beyond just being a bad fighter. The suspicion is that Shinsung Group pulled the strings behind the scenes. Since these duels serve as a giant job fair for the students, corporations treat the arena like a high-stakes tech showroom. Shinsung likely offered a recruitment deal in exchange for a product demo. The goal was to market the gear to the high-ranking scouts in the crowd, obsessing over the sword's features instead of the actual combat, which explains why he refused to adapt when things went south. The instructor is stunned that a student clocked the school's business model. Even the arena they are standing in is a sponsored piece of UJ hardware. This kind of corporate politics is usually hidden from new enrollees. Hanul did not need a tip from his dad or an insider to see it. He just read the entire power structure of the academy on the spot. That level of situational awareness is starting to feel a bit scary. The instructor decides it is time to put that brain to better use. Hanul gets pulled aside to help clear up a separate mystery. Meanwhile, things are getting tense in the back hallways. Someone is getting chewed out for failing to hold up their end of a deal. A girl corners the senior to discuss his pathetic performance. The contract specifically required him to showcase the Echo sword properly. Junil is losing his mind trying to justify why he tossed the promotional sword mid-fight. To him, winning was the only way to save face, but the girl is not buying his excuses. Miju snaps that in a demo class, the outcome of the duel is secondary to the performance of the gear. Hanul strolls right into the middle of their argument, ready to stir the pot. He backs her up, confirming that the data from the weapon was the whole point of the display. This girl is not just a student, she's the daughter of the Shinsung Group chairman, and she clearly does not appreciate a freshman poking his nose into her business. When she tries to shoo him away for interrupting a private talk, he just drops the details of their deal. He spells it out. Junil was supposed to push their brand in exchange for a guild recommendation. The senior tries to play it cool like he does not need any favors to get ahead, though he quickly realizes how much money he just threw away by being an idiot. But Hanul realizes a guild spot was never actually on the table for someone like him. There's no way Miju would let someone this incompetent into her family's elite guild, which means there must be a different prize at the end of this contract. The real target was not just a successful demo, but a specific opponent. And since Soyeon was the one originally scheduled to fight, the pieces finally start to click. Both of them are desperate to shut him up before he can finish that thought out loud. Other students are beginning to notice the commotion as the argument gets louder, so Hanul cuts straight to the point and asks if she's planning to pull the same stunt on the kid. The silence from the pair is basically a confession that they have been caught red-handed. Hanul watches from the sidelines as the confrontation in the hallway heats up and realizes that the senior is not going to let this slide easily. Woojin does not hold back, demanding to know if Soyeon is their next target. Miju immediately plays the victim, acting like the accusation is a personal insult. She tries to lean on their long history together to deflect the lack of hard evidence, but it is clear the childhood friend card is not going to work this time. Woojin keeps the pressure on, refusing to let her dodge the real issue. He wants to know the motive behind her obvious grudge against the girl. Even when she repeats her denial, the guy stays locked in on her reaction. Miju finally claims it is just about strategy and picking easy wins for the guild, insisting that Soyeon being the opponent was nothing more than a coincidence. Then she tries to flip the script by questioning why he is so protective of her. After seeing them together earlier, she is fishing for any dirt she can use. Woojin realizes that explaining the truth would just expose the kid's weaknesses to a predator, so he shuts the conversation down and lets her believe whatever she wants. He dismisses the whole thing by calling her a child and walks away with a warning. Miju is left fuming, her manipulative play failing to land the way she planned. Watching from the shadows, Hanul processes the shift in the group dynamic. The realization of how deep these personal grudges run is a lot to take in. With the group splitting up, the temporary truce is clearly hanging by a thread. Since word got out about his sister being a returnee, Seunghyun knew friction with the other students was going to be inevitable. The timing could not be worse since her opponent is the daughter of the Shinsung Group's chairman, and he is already drowning in his own issues while trying to figure out a way through this. Hanul points out that since the girl does not even want to be a hunter, it might be smarter to just have her forfeit the match and avoid the drama. He warns that once Miju sets her sights on someone, she'll use any dirty trick to crush them. Remembering the other kids who were ruined after crossing her path, Seunghyun realizes the stakes for his sister are way higher than just a school match. Before he can dwell on it, he gets called down to the floor by one of the instructors, confusing him as he is pulled away from the stands right before the start, but the official leads him straight toward the entrance of the arena. It turns out he is actually going inside with her during the duel. Since it's a returnees match, a specific rule allows a guardian to intervene if things go south. The goal is to prevent any what-if scenarios like her losing control and going berserk again. Plus, having her brother right there should keep her from cracking under the pressure. They find her pacing and clearly panicking about the upcoming fight, but when he finally steps up to her side, the relief is almost instant. He asks if she's actually ready for this, and she tries to put on a brave face, promising him that she's going to give the match everything she has got. She brings up some advice she got from Subin a while back, catching Seunghyun off guard as she starts to explain what it meant. It goes back to when Subin was returning a borrowed notebook. But the conversation quickly shifted from handwriting to something much heavier. He told her that she needed to develop a much stronger heart, warning her that being looked down upon would only lead to a repeat of the past. It was not just about her either, because her weakness put everyone around her at risk. The thought of her friends and family paying the price for her mistakes hit hard, and Subin made it clear that without strength, she could not protect anyone. That realization has been weighing on her ever since, and now she's determined to make sure Seunghyun never has to suffer on her account. She's ready to put in the work to prove she can actually handle being the older sister. Seunghyun listens, but he's not exactly comforted by her sudden burst of motivation. He tells her flat out to forfeit the second things start getting too painful. From his perspective, her working hard should not involve her being miserable or getting hurt. And she finally nods, appreciating that he's always got her back regardless of the outcome. The moment of peace is cut short when the announcer calls for the 8th duel. It's time for Gi Soyeon to face off against the notorious Shin Miju. Both girls step into the center of the arena as the crowd starts to roar, and they lock eyes, ready to settle this once and for all. The countdown hits its final seconds as both fighters prepare for the clash. Soyeon tries to keep things civil by offering a polite greeting to Miju before the clock runs out, but the suggestion to give it their all is met with a look of pure mocking disgust. As soon as the signal to start echoes through the arena, the atmosphere shifts instantly, as Miju finds the idea of doing their best a complete joke and does not bother hiding her contempt. This sudden wave of hostility catches Soyeon completely off guard, leaving her wondering what she even said wrong. Miju starts laying into her, accusing her of playing a childish, weak character just to manipulate people, believing that everyone sees through the helpless act Soyeon uses to get others to do her work. While the verbal assault continues, the audience grows restless, confused as to why no one is actually fighting. Soyeon stands there frozen, completely blindsided by the personal nature of the accusations. A weak attempt to ask what is going on is cut short as Miju begins to manifest her true power. Invoking the threads of fate to weave a specialized technique that feels incredibly heavy. Energy surges from her charms, twisting into something far more dangerous than a standard school duel, and it coils around her fingers, responding to her command as she prepares to force Soyeon's hand. With a massive burst of aura, a giant nightmare-fueled teddy bear construct towers over the arena, as Miju demands that Soyeon finally drop the fake persona and fight back with her real strength. The pressure in the air is suffocating, making it clear this is not going to be a fair match. Up in the stands, the professional observers realize the situation has taken a dark turn, especially when one of the seniors reveals some crucial intel about Miju being an experienced returnee. Considering that massive power gap, he openly wonders if Soyeon has any hope of surviving this encounter. Even with the monster teddy bear out, the observers in the stands are focused on a different kind of pressure. They notice another spectator whose presence is completely shifting the atmosphere of the stadium, someone who looks way more dangerous than a typical student and seems to be tracking every movement. The energy in the room spiked the second the match was called, making it clear this is not a normal school spat. When the younger scouts start panicking about the power gap, the veterans tell them to calm down. This bearded pro actually thinks Soyeon still has a path to victory despite the overwhelming odds. He points out that even a returnee is still human, meaning their mind can be exploited just like anyone else's. It turns out Soyeon is a curse user, a class known for winning through attrition and indirect methods. If she can survive the initial onslaught, she has plenty of ways to turn the table on a physical powerhouse. But survival is easier said than done when the pressure in the arena reaches a breaking point. Miju decides to keep it simple for now, opting to test the waters with some physical strikes. She launches a high-speed assault that forces Soyeon into a purely defensive position, and the sheer force of the impact leaves the crowd wondering if the girl can even handle one hit. Soyeon is sent skidding across the floor as the weight of the attack starts to settle in. Instead of trying to counter, she just stays focused on the incoming movements of her opponent. The teddy bear construct does not give her any room to breathe, following up with a massive aerial slam. Looks like a one-sided beatdown as the ground literally shatters under the weight of Miju's power. Another direct hit lands, and the audience is starting to get uncomfortable watching Soyeon get tossed around. Watching from the sidelines, the guys cannot understand why she's just standing there and taking the punishment. Miju is getting frustrated too, demanding to know why a supposed returnee is not doing anything to dodge. Soyeon takes another heavy hit, but her mind is actually drifting elsewhere. She's trying to figure out why Miju is coming at her with so much genuine hatred. Looking back, she wonders if she accidentally stepped on some toes during her time away. Her memories drift to a recent hangout where she was getting pretty comfortable around Woojin. At the time, she did not realize being friendly with the guy everyone's watching would paint a target on her back. Back in the arena, the pieces finally click together in her head as the next strike arrives. The girl stops the fight to call Miju out, claiming this whole beatdown is just because Woojin likes her. The accusation lands like a physical blow, completely throwing Miju off her rhythm. Instead of a comeback, the powerhouse of the academy starts turning a very bright shade of red. Soyeon keeps pushing, convinced this bullying is just a jealous reaction to them spending time together lately. Pointing out the blush as proof, she makes sure everyone in the stadium can see the reaction. Up in the stands, Woojin and the rest of the guys watch the combat turn into a soap opera. They are totally lost on why the most intense match of the day just became a shouting match about dating. Trying to de-escalate, Soyeon swears that Woojin is just a gaming buddy and nothing more. She promises her lips are sealed, which only makes the whole situation sound even more suspicious. It's a genuine attempt to help, but she's just digging a deeper hole for everyone involved. Woojin looks like he wants the ground to swallow him whole as his personal life gets broadcast to the school. Even the surrounding spectators are starting to feel the second-hand embarrassment from the middle of the field. Soyeon turns to him for backup, hoping he will help her smooth things over with his supposed admirer. But the peace offering backfires, pushing Miju past simple frustration and straight into a murderous rage. Miju finally snaps, screaming Soyeon's name as her summon goes into overdrive. The arena practically explodes under the weight of the doll's massive strikes. Woojin notices the giant summon is actually losing its edge and slowing down. That's the catch with curse users who rely on mental manipulation, because if their own headspace gets messy, their powers start to tank. Soyeon takes advantage of the opening, weaving through the chaotic energy. The spectators realize she's been holding back this entire time. A specific mark starts glowing in her eye, signaling a shift in the fight. It is the sign of the lion, which means things are about to get physical. Back during her evaluation, the experts were already losing their minds over her kit. The data confirmed she has access to 4 distinct zodiac-based techniques. She's got Pisces for aerial mobility and Aquarius for raw energy blasts. Leo acts as a massive physical buff, turning her into a powerhouse. Then there's the final card in her deck. A move so destructive it literally cracks the space around it. Sagittarius is her ultimate armor-piercing shot for when she needs a finisher. Even with those 4, she's still missing pieces of her memory from the other world. Fragments of her time in the fairy kingdom are still locked away behind a mental fog. Apparently, losing some memories is just a side effect of bringing that much power back. But even with a partial moveset, one of her skills stands out as a total game changer. Soyeon kicks off with Pisces, launching herself high into the air to take control of the sky. Miju cannot react in time to the sudden change in elevation, leaving the observers wondering why she kept her flight ability hidden until the very last second. She does not give her opponent a moment to breathe before unleashing a massive Aquarius surge. The scale of the energy blast has everyone in the observation room on edge. Miju is forced into a defensive shell as the blue energy washes over her. And her curse summon starts taking massive structural damage from the pressure. The mechanical beast is literally being torn apart by the constant electrical discharge. It looks like a total one-sided beatdown that's finally nearing its conclusion. Seeing the dominance, Soyeon's brother finally starts to relax his guard. He's convinced that his sister is just on a completely different level than the competition. The finishing blow is primed and ready to end the match right here. But right at the peak of her momentum, something causes her brother to do a sudden double take. The entire attack just stops dead in its tracks for no apparent reason. Soyeon's body completely locks up, leaving her totally vulnerable midair. Her offensive pressure vanishes as she struggles to move even a single muscle, while Miju watches from below with zero concern for the previous damage. A smug look returns to her face as she confirms that Soyeon fell right into her trap. It turns out the brother's sense of relief was premature now that the tables have turned. The brother is still riding high on the belief that Soyeon is untouchable, even though the robot summon is soaking up more damage than she anticipated. Soyeon decides to shatter it before Miju can finish that ominous new chant, pouring every ounce of her power into a blast meant to end the fight. Once she lands and the dust settles, the atmosphere in the arena shifts. A dark energy begins seeping from the wreckage as the match takes a turn. Miju is not fighting back anymore and just huddles helplessly on the ground. Seeing her opponent in that state triggers something buried deep in Soyeon's mind. A memory of her mother suddenly flashes back with overwhelming clarity. Her heart starts racing as the reality of the tournament begins to warp. The promise of a safe environment feels like a lie as the scene changes. She was told no one would get hurt, but the blood on the floor feels too real. This is not the arena anymore, it is a nightmare from her past coming to life. Seeing a loved one mangled and bleeding breaks her focus entirely. Guilt starts to swallow her whole as she blames herself for the carnage. The trauma is paralyzing her more effectively than any physical spell ever could. Every heartbeat feels like a hammer as the red mist takes over her vision. She is completely lost in the conviction that this disaster is all her fault. While she is stuck in this mental fog, the rest of the world keeps moving. Miju takes full advantage of the breakdown and strikes while she is wide open. The impact from Miju's counter sends Soyeon flying into the ground with enough force to shatter the arena, and she's left gasping for air as the dust settles around her. A voice tells her to get it together, but her head is still spinning from the mental shock. Miju does not give her a second to breathe, closing the distance while the kid is still disoriented, and mocks her for letting her mind wander when her life is literally on the line. Soyeon is completely out of it, seeing things that should not be there and missing what is right in front of her. She looks toward the stands and asks if everyone is safe, which makes zero sense to the spectators. Her brother is rightfully freaking out at the weird behavior, but the expert next to him sees the truth. This is the specialty of a curse user, and Soyeon has fallen hook, line, and sinker for a massive illusion. It's a trick that hides the user's primary weapons, making Miju's dolls totally invisible to her target. Soyeon is basically fighting ghosts now, unable to see the threats closing in from the shadows. She barely has time to flinch before another unseen force comes screaming toward her, and it is a direct hit that she could not have blocked even if she tried. Taking invisible damage is a quick way to lose a fight, but the pain finally starts to clear the fog in her head. She starts moving purely on reflex, trying to put some distance between herself and the invisible brawlers. The realization hits her like a truck that the world she's seeing is not the real one, and she manages to narrowly dodge a strike that would have taken her head off. The plan now is to ignore the ghosts and charge the caster directly to break the spell. But the guy in the stands looks like he knows something she does not, because this illusion might be far more dangerous than just hiding a few summons. Soyeon is still struggling to find her footing while the crowd realizes this is not just a basic trick. The spectators note that the illusion is far deeper than they initially thought, and Miju's smug look suggests she has found the perfect way to exploit Soyeon's past as a returnee. Apparently, being a returnee comes with a specific set of mental scars that are easy to pick at, and Miju is diving straight into that psychological trauma to break her opponent's spirit. She's digging up memories that Soyeon probably spent a long time trying to bury deep down. The question of whether she is killed before flashes through her mind like a neon sign, which leaves her wide open for another massive energy blast that sends her reeling back. It's a total mess of blue sparks and invisible force, and Soyeon is barely holding on. Miju is not letting up for a second, planning to stack illusion upon illusion until there's nothing left. The girl is being haunted by her own history while getting physically thrashed in the real world. Gasps for air are not a good sign when the mental warfare is this brutal, and every time she tries to counter, she just gets tagged by another invisible strike. Her teammates are starting to panic in the stands, wondering if they should just throw in the towel. Seeing her get cooked like this is hard to watch, and the calls to stop the duel are getting louder. However, the mentor figure is not moving an inch, claiming the fight is not over just yet. Even though the scoreboard looks like a disaster, he insists there is more to this than a simple loss. He tells everyone to look closer at the way Soyeon is actually handling the pressure. Despite the absolute beating she is taking, she still has not pulled out her trump card or released her full power. Soyeon is clearly waiting for the right opening, because giving up is definitely not in her vocabulary. Seunghyun is still looking for a reason to end the match early, but the instructor reminds him that everyone here has something they're fighting for. Apparently, his sister is trying her best to adapt to this new world without leaning on him. And giving up now would mean throwing away all the progress she's made on her own. Forcing a stop would only ruin the class dynamic and make life harder for the students later. Seunghyun starts feeling like a total hypocrite for telling her to forfeit, especially since he's the one who said every goal matters regardless of the hierarchy. He's standing there watching her suffer while he tries to take the easy way out for her. While back in the ring, Miju is absolutely relentless with her magical barrage. Soyeon is getting tagged from every direction and her brain is starting to short-circuit, and Miju keeps digging into her psyche, asking why she's even bothering to hurt people like this. All the girl wants is to belong, but the mental pressure is making her lose sight of the fight. She tries to force herself to focus before the next hit lands, but Miju senses that something about the atmosphere is shifting. Suddenly, the mentor grabs Seunghyun and calls him out on being a world-saving returnee, asking if all those stories about him facing a literal queen were just a bunch of lies. That specific word triggers a massive reaction from Soyeon in the middle of the arena, and the mana around her starts freezing over as she taps into a different level of power. The memory of that queen is not just a story to her anymore, it's her actual identity, and the real boss of the battlefield has finally arrived. Soyeon finds herself tiny and vulnerable in a vast, dreamlike space, where a massive staircase leads up to a mysterious seated figure. This sudden shift in reality marks the next stage of their magical showdown. Meanwhile, the mentor is still aggressively grilling Seunghyun, demanding the truth about the queen he supposedly faced in the past. Hearing that specific title triggers something deep inside Soyeon's mind, and the word echoes until it consumes her entire consciousness. The figure on the throne finally speaks, claiming to be the very queen herself. Looking down at the little girl, she acknowledges how far the child has come, but the conversation takes a sharp turn toward cold judgment. From the queen's perspective, Soyeon is currently in a pitiful state. Fighting her now would be pointless, like trying to snuff out a dying ember. Instead of continuing the battle, the ruler waves her hand and alters the void, manifesting a massive banquet table right in the middle of the arena. Soyeon is ordered to take a seat and enjoy the feast before her. The girl is completely lost, wondering if this is a hallucination or a dream, or perhaps just another one of Miju's complex psychological illusions. It could even be a long-lost memory finally making its way to the surface. The queen does not wait for an explanation and starts eating her meal, leaving Soyeon to sit in stunned silence while the real world fades away. The queen admits that breaking into this throne room is a massive feat, something that has not happened a single time since she first took power. But she notes that Soyeon only made it here because of the fairy Xian and her other allies, and without them to back her up, she asks if the girl really thinks she can win alone. Soyeon is forced to admit she does not know. Because looking at the shadows of her past, the names of her friends are a total blank. She cannot remember a single person who helped her reach this point, leading the queen to point out that she's forgotten the very people she relied on. Losing those bonds means losing her greatest treasure, which is why she feels so empty. That reality finally sinks in as the weight of everything she has lost hits her at once. She starts to wonder what the point of magic or being strong even is. Especially when the world feels this frightening and she is completely isolated. It feels impossible that a version of her ever managed to defeat the queen, or that she was even capable of protecting the world in the first place. The ruler explains that protecting the world is never a solo job, and that Soyeon had to borrow the power of fairies, the rocks, and even the grass to succeed. Her individual strength was actually insignificant on its own, making the massive gap between her and the queen undeniable. Yet despite that overwhelming difference in raw power and her current state of mind, the queen confirms that she really did save the world back then. The queen clarifies that Soyeon did not use the magic of this world, but a unique human magic that was powerful enough to rewrite history. Confused, the girl tries to process what that actually means for her, but the queen is done explaining and sets her utensils aside. Since the meal is finished, it's time for a live demonstration. This sudden demand catches her off guard as the atmosphere shifts. The ruler wants to see that legendary human magic in action immediately. Fragments of her past self start surfacing as she searches for strength, reflecting on the hero she supposedly was in her previous life. Even if this world feels like a lie, she genuinely wants to be that person, someone capable of protecting others instead of just being a victim. Comparing her current helpless state to that memory is a bitter pill, yet she remembers that her greatest victories were never won alone. That single thought changes the entire dynamic of the confrontation. Seeing Seunghyun standing there provides the emotional anchor she needed, fueling the hope that he'll step up to protect her once more. The presence of a reliable ally finally begins to break her paralyzing hesitation. Determination takes over as she finally faces the queen head-on. Realizing that having someone by her side means she can stop running, this burst of courage translates into an immediate strike as the battle begins. The queen cannot believe her eyes as the invisible doll misses its mark, leaving her wondering how someone could possibly dodge a hidden threat. It turns out the illusion had a fatal flaw born from sheer desperation. Soyeon's relentless pressure forced the queen to rush her incantation, which left the spell incomplete and much more vulnerable than intended. The cracks in the illusion start showing as the battle intensifies, and the queen realizes her control over the sensory field is slipping. Specifically, her influence over Soyeon's hearing was never perfect, a detail that normally would have been obvious if not for the paralyzing fear. But with that mental block finally shattered, the advantage shifts completely. The terror that once clouded the girl's judgment has vanished. Recognizing that her trick has been exposed, the queen tries to pivot, thinking she still has the upper hand as long as she can find an opening. She bets on the girl, hesitating for a split second before the next strike, preparing a silent spell to finish the job during that expected gap. However, there is no pause or second guessing in the coming attack. She charges right through the threads, defying the queen's logic. The realization that her trap failed hits the queen harder than any weapon. This is not just raw strength, it is magic specifically fueled by overcoming fear. Armed with pure courage, she closes the distance to deliver a massive blow. Soyeon's strike lands with enough force to shatter the queen's defenses, and the feedback is so severe that the royal's hands completely lock up. Realizing her connection to the statue's power has been permanently severed, she is left with absolutely nothing to fight back with. Seeing the writing on the wall, the queen finally chooses to forfeit. That official call marks a massive upset for everyone watching. Gi Soyeon is declared the winner, completing her transition from prey to predator. The shock of actually pulling it off does not even hit her until the announcement. She rushes over to her brother, desperate for some immediate validation. He gives her a nod, but she has already moved on to checking for photographic proof. Finding out he did not record the win is the only real low point of her day. But the adrenaline that was keeping her upright suddenly evaporates, and the toll of using that much courage magic sends her straight into a deep sleep. Her brother is left to carry her as the stadium falls silent. Just as things seem to be settling down, the queen approaches with a massive chip on her shoulder. She claims the rules were broken and that outside interference is the only reason she lost. This logic does not sit well with the kid, especially after watching his sister risk everything. The queen doubles down, insisting she would have dominated if he had not been watching. He cuts her off before she can dig the hole any deeper, laughing at the idea that she even considers what happened to her a battle. Seunghyun is not buying any of the queen's excuses about a fair duel, calling her out for using cheap illusion tricks to try and end the fight early. She just laughs in his face, acting like the mechanics of her power are way over his head. Before walking off, she tells him to stay in his lane like the useless nepotism hire she thinks he is. His teammate has to physically hold him back from snapping right there, reminding him that with all these cameras around, a public meltdown is a bad move. The queen makes a clean exit, completely unbothered by the bridge she just burned. In her mind, the match was a success regardless of the scoreboard, because she got exactly what she wanted out of the performance. She managed to showcase her special sword's true power to the entire audience, and even if she only stayed in the arena for a few minutes, she considers her demonstration a total win before heading out. The problem is that she provoked the absolute worst person possible, and Seunghyun is not the type to let a personal insult like that slide. While the next round of fighters prepares for their own opening battles. Subin rushes over to congratulate the group on the big victory. She realizes pretty quickly that Soyeon is dead to the world from magical exhaustion, so Seunghyun hands his sister over and asks his friend to keep an eye on her. He's heading straight for the magical device storage room to borrow some gear, and it is pretty obvious he's planning a very personal follow-up with the queen. Subin is getting annoyed because Seunghyun is not picking up any of her calls. But she does not have much time to worry about it before the next round begins. The 13th match is officially announced, pitting Subin against the returnee Jeon Woojin. While she is heading toward the arena, Seunghyun finally arrives at the equipment storage room. He runs into Purium, who's currently busy managing the school's massive inventory of magical gear. Purium is confused why his senior is skipping observation class just to go weapon shopping. And he nearly has a heart attack when he hears Seunghyun is planning to fight a returnee. Seunghyun just ignores the freakout and stays focused on the task at hand. He spots the specs for the weapon Hongyeon and admits it's a high-quality piece of equipment, noting that it is rare for the school to support a student with such advanced tech. Even so, the blade has a massive tactical blind spot that Seunghyun immediately identifies. The sword is famous for its 360-degree strikes that can hit anything in range, but Seunghyun points out that it cannot actually fire backward without hitting the user. He figured the magic would allow the projectile to skip over the user's physical space, so he's actually pretty disappointed that the real-world engineering is so basic. This strikes a major nerve with Purium, who refuses to let his department be slandered. He argues that expecting a projectile to phase through a human body is physically impossible, insisting that even the most powerful magical devices are still limited by the people who built them. The kid cannot believe anyone would complain about such a masterpiece of craftsmanship, and he ends the conversation with a full-blown rant about why the engineering department is superior. Purium explains that magical engineering is basically like programming with capacity limits, which means even a reflecting sword has to follow fixed logical principles to function. It is not some perfect object that can just bounce back every single attack indefinitely, and Seunghyun stops dead as he realizes exactly how to exploit that specific logic. He calls out to Purium and asks for a huge favor regarding the storage inventory. Seunghyun wants to know if they can find a very specific item buried in the back. Purium looks over the request and says it should not be too difficult to track down, but he's genuinely confused about why anyone would ever need something like that. Seunghyun admits he just remembered a way to finally win this high-stakes game, and since he's figured out a way to actually beat a returnee like Woojin, he figures he might as well screw over another rival in the process. Seunghyun is fully committed to the scheme, regardless of how twisted it looks. Purium cannot believe the brilliant but terrifying logic behind the plan Seunghyun just cooked up. While they finish in the back, the arena countdown hits the 5-second mark. Subin and Woojin face off in the center as the crowd waits for the barrier to drop. The tension peaks as the system begins the final 3-second countdown sequence. Magic starts swirling around the stage as both fighters prepare their opening moves. Only 1 second remains before the match officially goes live for the audience. The signal hits and the arena immediately explodes into a massive, high-impact collision. Woojin goes for the kill, but things are already getting more complicated than he expected. The opening exchange is massive, but the real story starts before the whistle. It is time to see if these two live up to the hype surrounding them. Rewinding to a few minutes before the duel actually kicked off. Subin shows some rare gratitude to Woojin for accepting the match. Most of the seniors were dodging him because of his top student status, just trying to survive the day without ruining their own records. Subin is genuinely curious why Woojin decided to break that trend and if he was just the only opponent left on the board. To him, being a hunter means throwing the idea of safety out the window. He thinks all the plotting and overthinking people do is a waste of time, since reality rarely cares about whatever plan you've cooked up. While he is talking, the real masterminds elsewhere start sneezing, almost like they can feel someone trashing their strategic approach. Subin's whole philosophy is to never avoid a fight no matter the odds. That's his definition of a hunter, and he is not deviating from it. In his mind, there is no such thing as a hierarchy when it comes to your goals. Woojin actually likes what he's hearing and respects the kid's directness. Back in the stands, the students are already debating the winner. One guy is putting all his chips on Woojin taking this one home, though the matchup between a repeater and the top freshman is a total toss-up. Most repeaters are known for having zero actual skill, but Jeon Woojin is the one massive exception to that rule. The only reason he's still a first year is a long list of disciplinary strikes, otherwise he'd already be ranked as the best physical fighter in the grade above. He proves it instantly by closing the gap with an explosive burst, catching everyone off guard with his sheer speed. This guy's body technique is on a completely different level than the rest, and he launches a heavy kick intended to end things right here. The force behind the strike looks like it could snap a person in half, yet somehow Subin manages to get a defense up just in time. It is a clean block that leaves the crowd absolutely stunned. Because nobody expected the kid to have those kinds of reflexes. Even the spectators are questioning how he could possibly track that movement, since the speed should have been way beyond his visual range. The truth is that Subin did not actually see the attack coming at all, and as a spirit user, he physically should not be able to keep up with this pace. However, the mechanics of his power work differently than typical doll manipulation. Because spirits possess their own self-awareness and do not need constant manual control, instead of being puppets, they're more like trained partners that react on their own, meaning the spirit blocked that kick autonomously before Subin even realized he was in danger. Woojin is absolutely loving this level of high-stakes competition, and the adrenaline from the exchange is clearly becoming contagious. Even Subin cannot help but feel the rush of the battle. But there is not much time to enjoy it as a massive blast comes his way. Subin barely manages to evade the core of that massive impact, which catches the attention of the spectators watching from the sidelines. They notice that Woojin's strikes have become significantly sharper and more precise, far exceeding the power he displayed during their previous encounter on the ship. Woojin is not letting up for a second and follows through with a relentless barrage, forcing his opponent to burn through stamina just to stay in the game. The kid is weaving through a storm of energy projectiles like his life depends on it, because one clean hit from these could end the match instantly. A sudden shift in momentum puts Subin right back on his heels, and the sheer pressure of the assault is starting to crack his composure. Woojin seems to be scaling his output higher with every passing second, leaving everyone in the arena wondering how much more he's holding back. A heavy follow-up strike carries enough weight to level a building, and the look on the kid's face says he was not ready for this jump in intensity. The duel has shifted into a desperate test of survival, especially as Woojin closes the distance to deliver a blow that could shatter his defense. The crowd can barely keep up as Woojin shatters yet another of the kid's spirits, treating these high-level defensive summons like they are made of cheap glass. Subin is losing his primary line of defense at an alarming rate, and Woojin is clearly enjoying the fact that he is completely outclassing his opponent. Since these spirits are programmed to protect their master automatically, Woojin's simple solution is to just brute force his way through every single one of them. To him, things like strategy and planning are just crutches for people who are not strong enough to win outright. The kid is gasping for air, finally admitting that the top admission student really is a monster, but Woojin is not interested in compliments and asks if there's one spirit left. Pushed into a corner, Subin realizes he does not have a choice anymore. He mentions a last resort method he usually hates using, and suddenly the energy in the arena shifts as he pulls out a hidden ace. Even Woojin is caught off guard by the sudden spike in power, especially when the observers realize he has somehow managed to manifest two spirits at once. This is not just a desperate move, it's a total shift in the flow of the battle, and the look in his eyes says he is finally ready to stop playing defense. He launches a massive technique called Rapid Current, flooding the stage with enough raw energy to catch everyone in the blast radius. The impact is so heavy it nearly blows the spectators out of their seats, and Woojin is left wondering if this guy was actually hiding his true rank this whole time. Subin admits he messed up by underestimating his opponent, and the system finally drops the truth that this kid is actually an S-rank spirit user. The arena starts filling with a massive surge of spiritual energy, turning the entire stage into a literal aquarium in a matter of seconds. Woojin finds himself suspended in the deep end of a massive water cube, wondering if he's actually been transported to the middle of the ocean. A dolphin pops up out of nowhere making high-pitched squeaks, and it starts bumping into him while he tries to process the sudden shift. The creature's noises sound like complete nonsense at first, until it suddenly tells him to pull himself together and get a grip. That snap back to reality triggers the arena's automated safety protocols, manifesting a high-tech diving suit to keep him from drowning immediately. This respirator is the only thing keeping him in the fight, but it comes with a catch. If the air inside that suit runs out before the water clears, he's disqualified. It is a race against the clock now because fighting underwater is a total nightmare, especially when Subin's power can maintain a massive pressurized cube like this. This was the plan all along since Subin's contract lets him ignore water physics, allowing him to move and breathe as if he's still standing on dry land. Woojin is stuck on a strict timer while his opponent has all the time in the world, but the kid is not planning to wait around for his oxygen to hit zero. Subin is not letting up, keeping the pressure high while Woojin struggles to even stay upright, and every move he makes is sluggish against the weight of the entire arena's volume. It's becoming clear that trying to close the gap is basically impossible in this environment, especially since Subin has turned the stage into a personal domain where physics do not apply to her. With the whole area submerged, Woojin's natural strength is heavily nerfed while she remains at full power. This rank difference is starting to feel like an impossible wall, marking what looks like a perfect checkmate. He finally realizes she probably held this back at the start as a weird form of professional courtesy, knowing that if she dropped this cube immediately, the match would have ended before he even landed a hit. This is her way of being considerate, giving him a chance to show off before the inevitable conclusion. But there's no cover to use and nowhere to run in this giant glass box of water, and Subin is confident she's already won just by keeping the water active until his air runs out. Even the spectators are struggling to process the sheer scale of the ability she's manifesting right now. The crowd is losing it because they've never seen a low-rank fight escalate into an S-rank terrain shift. leaving everyone wondering how a student is supposed to handle a situation that is clearly out of his league. Despite the overwhelming disadvantage, Woojin is just standing there instead of panicking or trying to swim away. Seol Subin starts questioning why he's just waiting around instead of throwing in the towel, and people in the stands are starting to whisper about why he's stalling for time like this. They think he's just being stubborn, but the blue-haired guy knows Woojin is not the type to give up. While everyone else sees a cornered animal, our protagonist is actually locking in on a solution, because that look in his eye says he's found the one crack in this perfect checkmate scenario. The atmosphere in the stands shifts instantly as people start realizing something is very wrong, and the blue-haired guy is the first to catch on that Woojin is pulling a literal suicide move. He grabs his teammate and tells him they need to clear the area before things get ugly. Because he knows whatever is coming is not just for show. Submerged in the center of the sphere, Woojin stops his stalling and finally prepares to strike, admitting that he actually underestimated Subin's ability to keep this domain held together. It's a rare moment of respect, but he follows it up by saying he's got a few tricks of his own, specifically a high-level body technique that changes the entire nature of the fight. His hand starts vibrating at a frequency so high it's literally warping the light around his arm, and even the announcer starts panicking when he realizes the kid is about to blow the arena apart. The energy is radiating out so fast that it's starting to affect the structural integrity of the barriers, forcing the ref to scream at Subin to drop her water domain before someone actually gets killed. The girl is completely blindsided, thinking the warning was meant for the guy trapped in her trap. But one look at Woojin's face tells her that she's the one who's actually in danger right now. Even the faculty members are scrambling to understand how a student is manifesting this kind of power, realizing he's using natural frequency to turn the water itself into a ticking time bomb. If he matches the vibration of the domain, the pressure will become too much for the container to hold, leading to a total collapse that would shatter everything in the immediate vicinity. This is not just a punch anymore, it is a structural failure waiting for a single point of impact, and Woojin is finally ready to let that vibration loose and tear this whole match wide open. Woojin targets the arena barrier, realizing it is just another object he can shatter with frequency, and he pours everything into one final vibration to disrupt the physical structure of the field. The resulting resonance causes a total collapse of the domain, sending a massive shockwave that tears through the water and the surrounding energy walls. Subin and the crowd are left soaking wet and dazed as the stadium turns into a splash zone, but the sudden release of pressure leaves everyone gasping for air. Looking around at the floating droplets, the scene is almost peaceful compared to the previous chaos, making Subin completely forget she's in the middle of a high-stakes duel. She is genuinely mesmerized by the sight of the water raining down like diamonds, and even the audience is momentarily stunned into silence by the scale of the destruction. Woojin catches his breath while standing amidst the wreckage of the barrier, knowing that Subin drained her entire energy pool just to maintain that massive volume of water. This should be his perfect victory since she has absolutely nothing left to fight with. But then the announcer drops a bombshell and declares Subin the winner instead. Woojin is losing his mind trying to figure out how he could possibly lose after that performance, only to get yelled at for foul play by a ref who clearly has an agenda. It hits him that the rules were rigged against him from the very start, leaving him standing in a broken arena while the crowd processes the robbery. Before he can even protest the decision, the faculty steps in to wrap things up, ordering both students to hand over their weapons and end the match right there. Subin is fuming about how much water she swallowed during the chaos, cursing Woojin for not playing as nice as she expected. The arena gets cleared out while the faculty moves on to the next event, as Woojin realizes he's being sidelined by a single disciplinary mark. The 15th match is announced immediately to keep the schedule moving, pitting the loudmouth Gi Seunghyun against a girl named Yona. Seunghyun's sister gives him a desperate pep talk from the stands, but the rest of the students are already mocking his choice. They call him a parachute who's about to get wrecked by a returnee, leaving Woojin to ask around about why this girl is so feared. It turns out Yona is the most dangerous student in the returnee group, having completely lost control at the end of the previous year, and single-handedly blowing up an entire building on campus. Woojin wonders if his friend has finally lost his mind, knowing Seunghyun usually avoids serious trouble at all costs. However, the guy has a secret plan involving an ability-sealing device. Both fighters step up to the platform to surrender their gear, and Seunghyun looks more focused than he's ever been in class. He asks for a moment to speak before the duel officially begins, revealing his primary weapon, Hongyeon, to the entire arena. Seunghyun drops a bombshell that catches everyone off guard, claiming he spent his time analyzing every detail of the returnee's combat style. Since she relies entirely on her sword rather than raw magic, he had a friend in engineering whip up a perfect replica of her weapon to level the playing field. Yona does not buy the bluff for a second, reminding him that gear doesn't replace years of surviving a world where death was a daily occurrence. Regardless of the trash talk, they both submit their weapons for the official scan, letting the system register the hardware for the upcoming duel. The processing takes a few seconds as the arena prepares for the clash while both fighters wait for the final green light. Once the notification pops up confirming the registration is complete, they grab their respective blades and step back into the combat zone. Yona takes her position with a focused silence, and the 20-second countdown starts ticking away. It turns out Seunghyun's Hongyeon is built to fire off projectile sword strikes, while her blade, Echo, is designed specifically to reflect those attacks right back. Junil and the other students are stunned by the reveal, wondering if the support Seunghyun received was way more extensive than they realized. This level of preparation goes way beyond a simple gear upgrade. Leaving the rest of the class wondering what else the guy is hiding up his sleeve. Junil is losing his mind because Yona is holding the Echo blade he originally owned, even though he knows for a fact he never lent it to her. It turns out Seunghyun approached him earlier while he was still sulking about his gear, asking if he could borrow the sword for the upcoming duel. The kid had overheard Junil complaining about not getting enough screen time for the weapon, and suggested that he could be the one to finally put it on display. His logic was that if a low-ranked student performed well with it, the promotional value would skyrocket, and it might even force the senior to start taking him seriously for once. Junil realized there was zero downside to the deal, which is the secret behind how Seunghyun actually got his hands on the blade. But the plan went even deeper, involving a request for a sword bag identical to Yona's, so they could pull off a switch during the official registration process. While everyone was distracted by the equipment being processed on the belt, Seunghyun was already setting the stage for his next move. The registration system locked onto the items, but the swap had already been finalized with his chains. Back in the present, Yona realizes she's been baited into using the replica, and the rest of the spectators are just now catching on to the deception. Junil still doesn't get why the kid didn't just give her a total dud, but Seunghyun had a very specific strategic reason for the switch. Forcing her to use her returnee skills would have left her wide open for a chain counter. Countdown is ticking down with only a few seconds left before the duel officially kicks off. Seunghyun knows that as an F rank, he has to pull off some dirty tricks just to stand a chance, and he moves forward with the high-risk plan Junil told him to give a try. The signal for the start drops and the atmosphere shifts instantly as the first move is made. Yona does not hesitate, unleashing a massive strike that covers the entire floor in an instant, and while the raw power of the returnee is on full display, the kid is already looking for his opening. The initial blast hits hard, but the way the energy behaves suggests something is already working in his favor. Junil notices that the attack was reflected right away, confirming the sword is doing exactly what it is supposed to do. But Seunghyun is already moving faster than expected, having finally found the rhythm of the duel. Claiming he's got the feel for it now, he lunges forward to take the fight to her, and he shocks everyone by closing the distance while wielding what should be a ranged weapon. This aggressive rush is a total curveball that the spectators did not see coming from a low rank. Yona prepares to meet the charge head-on, ready to end the match with her next swing. But the moment their blades clash, the physics of the fight take a very strange turn. She commits to a follow-up attack, fully expecting the usual reflection to trigger on contact, only to be left completely exposed when the weapon does not behave the way it just did. The strike connects in a way that catches her totally off guard and leaves her defense wide open. Even the professional observers are stunned by the sudden shift in the duel's momentum. Yona is left spiraling, unable to understand why her strike was not sent back at her this time. And the crowd is left wondering how a clear deflection could lead to such a bizarre and unexpected outcome. Spectators are losing it because they just watched an F-rank do the impossible, and even Yona is shaken that a low tier actually managed to touch her. Seunghyun does not waste the opening and wraps his chains around her blade, pulling the bind tight to limit her movement while he has the advantage. Neutralizing one of her arms is a huge win that completely shifts the dynamic. This move stems from a secret lesson about switching styles without being caught, which happened just as the academy was prepping for the gate observation. Everyone was gathered at the portal for the start of the observation class, and his mentor was ready to see if the kid could actually deliver. He knew the kid's real strength would not show up on any official ranking, and urged him to stop pretending to be a weakling for the sake of a quiet life. It was time to step out of the shadows and show everyone his true rank. Back in the present, he takes that advice to heart and lunges forward again, forcing Yona to react to a level of speed she did not think he possessed. Seunghyun presses the attack, refusing to give her a second of breathing room. Their blades meet in a high-speed exchange that leaves the crowd breathless. The sheer force behind their duel is starting to crack the arena floor. Yona gets more aggressive, determined to prove her status as a returnee. She puts everything into a massive strike to break his defense once and for all, but a keen observer in the stands finally realizes the truth behind the reflection trick. The secret is out, and it turns out Seunghyun is actually using the Echo Blade's own logic against it. Yona is starting to feel the pressure as her trump card begins to fail, especially since a true reflection should not have felt that sluggish during the last exchange. That mushy impact was the first clue that the sword's mechanics were being tampered with. It all comes down to the basic principles of magical engineering, which is basically just mana-based programming. Every device has a hard limit and a specific logic it has to follow to function, meaning it is impossible to build a weapon that can perfectly counter every single type of ability. Instead of trying to break the reflection, the kid decided to rewrite the rules of the engagement. He's literally programming his movements to exploit the way the blade processes incoming data. With the logic mapped out, he plants his feet and prepares for one final decisive gamble. Seunghyun lunges in with zero hesitation, forcing a direct confrontation that Yona cannot avoid. She braces for the impact, not realizing that her opponent has simplified the entire problem. As the chains fly and his blade swings, he is not just trying to land a lucky hit. The plan is to time his own strike to perfectly sync up with the moment their steel meets, firing off a massive burst of energy right as the echo blade attempts to trigger. But instead of aiming at her, he directs the initial force toward himself, essentially tricking the weapon into thinking he is the target of his own attack. The blade absorbs his strike, processes the direction, and then automatically reverses it toward the enemy. Yona realizes too late that she's being hit by Seunghyun's power boosted by her own sword's mechanics, and the resulting explosion sends her flying across the arena as the crowd watches in total disbelief. Seunghyun is fully locked in, knowing this is his only shot at winning. Memories of being looked down upon drive him to push past his limits, ignoring the fatigue to keep the pressure on and refuse her a second to breathe. Yona is forced onto the defensive as the sheer intensity of the assault keeps her pinned. Even though she is the high-ranking returnee, she is the one struggling to stay upright. Seunghyun knows his F-rank status means he cannot win a long war of attrition, reminding himself of the years spent in the shadows while everyone else moved ahead. That desperation is exactly what is fueling this reckless offensive. This strategy has to work immediately before his stamina hits zero and he collapses. Every strike has to be frame perfect to keep the weapon's logic looping against her. If he misses the timing by even a fraction of a second, the counter will kill him instead. Focusing everything into this one exchange, he blocks out the noise of the crowd. The energy builds to a breaking point as the echo blade prepares to fire again. This is about more than just a match. It is about validating every hour spent grinding in secret. Up in the stands, the scout who's been tracking him realizes he's found a monster. Seunghyun lets out a roar, putting every ounce of his will into the final push. The scout watches the explosion, confirming that his initial hunch about the kid was correct. He sees the genius in how the boy turned Yona's greatest strength into a fatal flaw, creating a logical contradiction where her own protection becomes her biggest threat, and now that she's lost the weapon's advantage, she is left completely wide open for the finish. Yona is panicking because the plan worked perfectly, forcing her into a corner where she has to use her real power just to survive. Seunghyun is not backing off though, keeping that same terrifying focus he has had since the start. Up in the stands, his sister is being told that even with handicaps, a returnee is still a monster, but Soyeon can see the toll this is taking on him. And it is not the victory everyone else is watching. She's just wondering why her brother looks so broken while he is winning, like every move he makes is fueled by some deep-seated sadness. This pressure finally pushes Yona to her breaking point, and she starts chanting in a language that should not even exist in this world. Dropping the facade, the returnee lets her raw power flood the arena, causing a massive shockwave that nearly levels the stage. This is the moment the scout has been waiting for as she fully manifests her war goddess armor in a burst of golden light. But back when this fight was being planned, a friend had one major concern. He did not understand how forcing a returnee to go all out counted as a winning move, especially since Seunghyun mentioned someone was going to get screwed over. That quiet look on his face back then says it all, and now the trap is finally ready to spring as the two powers collide. Mateo gets a sudden tap on the shoulder from his assistant, who insists they need to shut this duel down immediately. The suggestion catches him completely off guard, but the stakes are too high to ignore. He cannot believe they'd suggest quitting when the company's reputation is on the line, especially since that sword is their flagship prototype that has not even hit the shelves, and seeing it get handled like this is a PR nightmare in the making. The crowd is full of high-ranking hunters who are losing faith in the brand by the second. Mateo realizes the damage control needs to start before the match officially ends. The project manager on the other end of the line is frozen in shock as he barks orders for her to intervene before their stock prices completely crater. If a returnee of her caliber loses while using their top-tier gear, the market will tank. The call ends abruptly, leaving her to face the grim reality of the situation. This project was a test from her father to see if she could handle the family business, and failing this publicly means her future within the company is effectively over. She will lose everything he has ever promised her if the Echo brand is destroyed here. A terrifying thought starts to take shape as she watches the fight unfold. And she begins to suspect that giving Yona the Echo Sword was a massive setup. If Seunghyun's goal was just a simple win, he would not have targeted the equipment, but he is aiming for something much bigger than a victory in the arena. Seunghyun is using this fight to bankrupt everyone who dared to stand in his way. Mateo's team is already scouting the arena's infrastructure to find the circuit breakers, suggesting they could even stage a fire to force an immediate emergency evacuation. The assistant questions if they are crossing a line with this level of corporate sabotage, warning Mateo that there are some boundaries they simply should not step over. He responds with a cold stare, questioning where the line between right and wrong even exists. Back in the arena, the duel hits a fever pitch as the bad move episode begins, and Yona starts channeling a massive amount of energy into her weapon. Seunghyun braces for impact, recognizing the sheer scale of the power she's gathering, realizing this is the same overwhelming force he's seen her use in the past. It's a familiar pressure that signals a world-ending attack is imminent, so he keeps his eyes locked on her to time his next move perfectly. Bro is ready for the projectile to fly, but the release never comes, and the sudden delay throws off the entire rhythm of the fight. The crowd starts whispering as the energy just keeps building without being fired, looking confused as the girl remains frozen while holding a literal ticking time bomb. Instead of shooting, she's just standing there while the flames lick at the air, and even the spectators in the back realize something is breaking down. Watching her struggle, Seung-hyun realizes he made a massive mistake in his logic, having assumed she was actually in full control of her special abilities. In reality, she is paralyzed because she is terrified of the destruction her own power could cause. Seung-hyun finally connects the dots and realizes why she's been silent this whole time. Looking back, it's clear why her situation was so different from other returnees, since most people who get dragged to other worlds come back with a built-in translation skill. Whoever is in charge of those transfers usually makes sure everyone can understand each other. But in Yona's case, that specific ability did not just vanish, it got completely warped. Instead of being a bridge, it locked her into only using the language of the world she left behind. It's a tragic bug in the system that left her totally isolated from everyone around her. To fix this, the recruiter suggests a different way for her to communicate, offering her a spot at his academy where words are not the only way to connect. The man tells her to just take his hand and trust the process, promising to show her that true understanding goes way deeper than just talking. This led her straight to the Seonghan Special Ability School, where she could finally be around people who understood her situation. For the first time, she was not an outlier, seeing other students who had also been through the ringer. Realizing she was not alone finally gave her a sense of belonging, and she started trying to move forward with the rest of the student body. Things seemed like they were finally looking up for her, but that peace did not last through the end of last year. Everything came crashing down when she lost control and leveled an entire building on her own. That trauma is the anchor holding her back because she knows exactly what happens when she lets go. The static in her head keeps flashing back to that day, reminding her of the person who pulled her out of the rubble she created. Back then, she was told that a hunter's most important trait is not power, but the judgment to know when and how to use it. That means not putting artificial caps on what you're capable of and ignoring any imaginary lines that keep you from acting. Back in the present, the heat is becoming too much for her to handle because she knows this hesitation is only making things worse. Guak Chial-su watches her stall and realizes a win here would be meaningless. Feeling like taking the victory against a statue would just be pathetic. The audience can feel the awkward tension building in the arena, and even the instructors are starting to wonder if this match is a bust. Chial-su finally snaps and decides he's had enough of the waiting game, dropping the tactical approach to force a real reaction out of her. He tells her that if she's too scared to use her powers, then they'll just settle this with hands. This direct challenge catches her completely off guard, shifting the weight of the duel as he closes the distance. With only 60 seconds left on the clock, the fight is not about points anymore, turning into a desperate sprint to see who breaks first. 1 minute remains to see if she can push past the fear before the buzzer sounds. The arena falls into a confused silence as the two fighters simply stare each other down, leaving everyone in the crowd with a million questions about the actual purpose of this match. Even the spectators cannot make sense of the weird energy building in the ring, especially since Yona's powers are still completely locked up behind her trauma. On top of that, Seung-hyun just threw away his biggest advantage by ditching his sword entirely. It's a move that leaves the crowd and even the instructors completely baffled by the situation. And honestly, the two fighters are probably just as confused by their own instinctive choices. Yona cannot figure out if he is doing this out of pity or if he is just as desperate as she is to finish this, while Seung-hyun realizes his impulsive decision to fight fair did not have to be her burden to carry. But all those nagging doubts get shoved to the side for the remaining seconds of the match, because neither of them is willing to just stand around and let the clock run out. They finally collide in a raw, physical exchange that has absolutely nothing to do with points or rankings, trading heavy, unrefined blows that echo through the entire arena with every impact. Seung-hyun is not holding anything back now that they have reached this point of no return, and Yona is matching his raw intensity even without her usual magical fire to back her up. This is the first time she has actually pushed back through the fear and engaged him head-on, forcing Seung-hyun to work harder to find an opening in her surprisingly stubborn defense. He finally connects with a heavy blow that should have sent her reeling back to the edge, but she just grits her teeth and keeps the pressure on like her life depends on it. They're locked in a brutal slugfest where every punch serves as an answer to the questions they could not verbalize. Yona finds herself caught off guard by the sheer intensity of the exchange, and the two dive back into a flurry of strikes that is getting faster by the second. Neither fighter is giving an inch as they trade blows across the center of the arena, with Seung-hyun desperately determined to keep up with her sudden surge of aggression. This is not the one-sided beatdown it started as, but a genuine fight for dominance, and for a moment, they both look like they have completely lost themselves in the rhythm of the brawl. Yona finally finds a gap in his defense and connects with a massive kick that launches him back, as she looks down on him to criticize his weak energy and lack of rank, treating him more like a disappointing training dummy than a genuine rival. Before he can even recover, she binds him with a sudden surge of magical energy, leaving him completely baffled by her weird, cold-hearted insults as he tries to break free. She does not give him the chance, following up with a brutal overhead strike that hammers him down, while the crowd watches in silence as the momentum of the match shifts entirely, and Seunghyun is sent crashing into the arena floor with enough force to shatter the stone, hitting the ground hard with the wind knocked out of him as the dust starts to settle. Struggling to even keep his eyes open, he realizes he's pushed himself way past his limits. While Yona stands over the crater like she has already decided the outcome of the match. Up in the stands, the onlookers are finally starting to piece together what is actually happening to her, but Seunghyun is too busy trying to keep his consciousness from slipping away to care about theories, and the massive stamina cost of maintaining this level of focus is finally catching up to him. Seunghyun is running on fumes and knows he's only got 1 or 2 chain uses left in the tank. Regret hits hard because putting down the sword earlier is starting to look like a massive tactical error. His mind drifts back to a time when he was just a kid getting patched up after another brawl, and even back then he was stubborn as hell, picking fights with anyone who said he'd never be a hunter. People warned him that his attitude would leave him totally alone, but he did not think he needed friends to reach the top. That loner mindset was his entire world. And he was convinced that the only person he could rely on was himself. Now, watching Yona's combat style, he's realizing how much he underestimated what his sister was capable of. She was confident in her skills too, which makes him wonder if he ever really understood the people around him. Sitting alone in his thoughts, he starts questioning every choice he has made up to this point, remembering how he tried to protect Dan and keep everyone away from danger. Or the way he risked everything to pull his sister out of a deadly illusion. He cannot quite figure out the logic behind why he put his life on the line so many times, especially when he claimed he did not need anyone else in his corner. Back in the crater, the physical toll of the fight is finally hitting a breaking point, and Yona looks just as spent, staring him down as they both weigh the cost of continuing. It's a silent conversation between two people who have nothing left to give. But then the memories of the people he's met along the way start to flood back in. He realizes these connections were not just distractions from his goal, and suddenly the math of who wins or loses does not matter as much as just standing back up. Yona takes a second to thank him for the respect, specifically for waiting for her to gather what is left of her strength. Seunghyun is not looking for a long conversation and signals for the fight to continue. So she resets her stance for what looks like the final exchange. They collide with even more intensity than the start of the match, and the boy begins moving with a level of precision that shocks the girl. His heart starts racing at a pace he cannot quite explain, forcing her into a desperate defensive position as the pressure mounts. Up in the observation deck, the instructors are visibly shaken by what they are seeing, while Seunghyun finds that the pain from his wounds is suddenly vanishing. He is fully locked into the rhythm of the duel now, capitalizing on every opening she leaves behind. As he lands another heavy strike, the crowd starts asking who this kid even is, only to find out he's officially listed as a lowly F rank. Despite the beating she is taking, Yona feels a strange sense of clarity, finally understanding the joy of pushing herself to the absolute limit. Seunghyun realizes his old "I work alone" mantra was just a shield to avoid being hurt. And that he's actually been searching for an equal like this his entire life. He stops running from himself as a blue energy chain manifests to seal the win and steps in to deliver the final blow. Just as Seunghyun moves to end the fight, a sudden counterforce catches him off guard. The boy barely has time to react as the momentum of the battle shifts. Yona's left hand is suddenly back in play despite her earlier injuries. It seems she was either hiding her recovery or pushing through the pain for one last gambit. This realization hits him a second too late, and he is forced to admit he's been completely played. Despite the heavy exchange, he manages to steady himself for one final interaction. As they face each other down, the air between them feels completely different. He catches her by surprise by offering a genuine thank you. She's stunned into silence by the sudden change in his tone. The kid finally realizes he was able to speak a clear sentence without his usual stuttering. With that mental weight finally lifted off his shoulders, he lets out a massive roar and commits everything to one last push. The impact is absolute, sending her crashing into the far wall of the arena. Spectators can only watch in disbelief as the dust settles around her crumpled form. Even the instructors are left speechless by the raw power and F rank just displayed. Seunghyun stands in the center of the crater, completely spent and catching his breath. The buzzer finally rings to signal that the time limit for the match has been reached. Exhaustion finally starts to win out as he struggles to stay on his feet. The head instructor steps onto the field with a microphone to give the official verdict. The announcer finally shouts the verdict everyone was waiting for. Gi Seunghyun is officially declared the winner of the duel. While the massive crack in the arena wall proves just how hard he hit, crowds erupt as the underdog pulls off the impossible victory, leaving Yona completely dazed and unable to process the loss. Scouts from the Udge Guild are already marking him as a top prospect, but they notice the representatives from Shinsung have suddenly vanished. The kid ignores the glory for a second to help his opponent back to her feet. Professor Jin signals for the staff to drop the protective barrier. But Professor Ki realizes the system has been completely locked out. The arena wall will not open, trapping everyone inside the combat zone. The staff starts bickering over the controls while the situation turns south until a deep grinding sound starts coming from beneath their feet, and massive cracks begin spiderwebbing across the reinforced floor. The instructors finally realize this is not a technical glitch, as the scouts realize those Shinsung bastards were planning something much darker. It looks like they have sabotaged the entire exam for a surprise attack. A massive armored hand suddenly bursts through the rubble, completely shattering the stage as a monster forces its way into the arena, and the victory celebration turns into a total nightmare for the trapped students. Seunghyun is completely frozen by the sudden shift in the arena, while the girl beside him barely has time to react to the new threat. The monster does not wait for a formal introduction before it starts swinging, sending shockwaves that threaten to level the entire stage. Professor Key tries to keep the situation from spiraling into a massacre, but even he struggles to stand his ground against the raw pressure. He recognizes the beast immediately and knows this was not an accident, identifying the creature as a high-level experimental weapon. This thing is called Usura, and it was supposed to be in a high-security lab, not tearing through the floor of a student combat exam. The professor is livid that someone would release such a monster on purpose. Just as the crowd starts to lose it, Professor Jin steps in with a mental link, using a high-tier curse technique to bridge the gap between every mind in the room. He's literally forcing his thoughts into the heads of everyone present, warning them that he's about to download the emergency protocols directly. It's a massive data dump compressed into less than a second, explaining that the experimental monster was released and they need to run. The skill even handles the translation so the foreign students are not left behind, allowing Jin to coordinate the top-tier hunters while everyone else flees. He's drawing a line in the sand, students evacuate and pros prepare for war. Jin clarifies that any hunter without specific orders needs to prioritize the student evacuation. While Professor Ki and Io Yona are pulled aside for a more specialized role, their main objective is keeping Gi Seunghyun alive until the arena walls finally open. With the chess pieces finally in place, the signal is given to move out. Jin pushes himself to the limit to keep the mental link active for every person in the stadium, ensuring everyone knows exactly where to go as the hunters initiate the engagement. The assault begins, but the monster is already proving to be a nightmare to pin down. This thing is a relic from an Arank Gate discovery back in 1991, and the data Jin shared reveals it is one of 2 experimental monsters from that era. Its physical traits include infinite arm flexibility and high-speed regeneration, giving it an attack range that covers almost the entire arena floor. But the real problem is not the reach, it is the fact that these things are walking bombs. Usura is designed to self-destruct the moment its heart stops beating, a trait that previously wiped out an entire elite hunter squad during its first discovery. If the hunters kill it right now, the resulting explosion will vaporize everyone in the barrier. Seunghyun realizes the stakes are higher than just surviving a fight, as guards start herding the crowds toward the exits in a desperate rush. The plan relies on the hunters outside using a resonance technique to crack the barrier, allowing them to extract the student before they commit to the final kill. Once the kid is clear, they'll drop the hammer on Usra with everything they have got. The senior shouts for Yona to summon her golem immediately because it's the perfect tool for pulling the monster's aggro. As those tentacles lash out across the entire floor, he begs her to hurry before the situation spirals out of control. Yona is already pushing her limits and feels her mana starting to spike, leaving her convinced that she will not be able to handle the strain. But he snaps her out of it by screaming that she is not responsible for the outcome. He takes full ownership of the consequences as the adult on the field, and that promise of protection gives her the push to finally act. Refusing to let anyone die, she triggers her secondary ability, drawing in every loose rock in the vicinity to form a defensive line. This skill lets her construct multiple golems simultaneously, turning the surrounding debris into an automated army. There's a catch to managing this much mass at once, though, as the golems get smaller and more difficult to coordinate as their numbers grow. She ignores the technical risks and focuses on a specific design, leaving the torso empty to prioritize speed and power in the legs. The construct slams into the beast with enough force to stagger it, giving the senior the perfect window to move back into melee range. Now he just has to dismantle it enough to win without triggering the self-destruct. The battle keeps escalating as the team struggles to find a rhythm against the monster's massive limbs. Yona watches from the sidelines, realizing the creature is way faster than they initially anticipated. Seunghyun gets caught in a direct clash, leaving him wide open for a brutal follow-up. One of the observers realizes the timing is off and the kid is about to pay for it. A heavy strike sends him reeling back, breaking his stance and leaving him vulnerable. The situation turns critical as the monster refuses to give him a second to breathe. Standing there completely exposed, the team realizes he's essentially a sitting duck with no defense left. Even the senior hunters are starting to panic because they cannot reach him in time to help. Just as he tries to reposition, a frantic warning shout echoes across the battlefield. They realize that any sudden movement will just paint a bigger target on his back. The instruction is simple: stay absolutely still and wait for the beast to lose interest. The monster's massive hands hover right over his head, searching for any sign of motion. It's a high-stakes game of hide and seek where one flinch means getting crushed. Instead of playing along, Seunghyun decides to bet everything on his own offensive power. He charges up a concentrated blast of energy to force his way out of the trap. The beam rips through the monster's arm, catching the creature completely off guard. This sudden burst of power is exactly what he needed to flip the script. With the monster's limb shattered, the immediate threat of being crushed has finally passed. Rather than running back toward the professor for protection, he summons a red energy blade, leaving the team stunned as he dives right back into the center of the storm. Seunghyun lunges for Echo, the blade sitting forgotten in the middle of the chaos. While his allies are currently occupied with the beast, the kid realizes he's actually the one holding them back. They can't go all out as long as they're worried about his safety. He does not need to slay the thing, he just needs to stop being a liability. Seeing the massive power gap between them is starting to take its toll, forcing him to acknowledge the physical limits he's been ignoring. The sheer fatigue from this marathon battle is finally catching up, and the weight of the situation is heavier than anything he's ever faced. This massive wave of stress should have been enough to break him, yet the desire to break through this wall is still there. That refusal to give up triggers something deep within his system, pulling out a hidden potential to keep his body in the game. He moves to intercept a direct hit, putting every ounce of strength into a desperate counter. Reclaiming his weapon was the only way to stay alive, and the team is stunned to see him actually deflecting the blow. But one successful parry is not enough to finish the job, and he's going to need a miracle to survive the next exchange. The monster realizes the tide has finally turned as Seunghyun accesses a reservoir of power that should not be possible. He lashes out with those chains, locking down the massive beast's every move. Every strike lands with crushing impact, forcing the once dominant creature to scream in agony. This is no longer a desperate defense but a full counteroffensive. Teammates struggle to process the massive jump in his stats, jokingly asking if he's using some kind of illegal enhancer. But this is not a temporary rush, his physical limits are fundamentally shifting. The squad wonders if they're seeing a rare reawakening, the legendary second surge that breaks a user's permanent ceiling. Most ability users are stuck with their initial rank for life, but this phenomenon allows them to evolve into a higher tier. Still, the veterans notice something is fundamentally different here. The typical energy signatures for a rank up are completely missing, even though the raw power output is off the charts. While Seunghyun rewrites the rules of the battlefield, others nearby are growing impatient to make their move. They're forced to stay back for the students' safety, watching the chaos unfold. The team outside is told to hold off for just a few more minutes. Even under pressure, Seunghyun is performing way above his supposed F-rank status, but the observers are starting to lose their patience with the waiting game, feeling like they're just standing by while people are in danger. The tension among the backup crew is clearly hitting a breaking point. Some think they should trust the students, but others think that's way too optimistic. A pro in the group decides he's seen enough and prepares to jump in. The others warn him that breaking the barrier now would put every student at risk, though he claims to have a plan that makes the gamble worth it. Back on the battlefield, Ki Jae-hyung's distraction strategy is failing as the boss finally realizes that the distractions are just a bluff. It knows the golems are not a real threat and ignores them to focus on the team. Seeing the shift, Yona decides it's time to change the scale of the fight. She pulls every scattered fragment into one place to build a single giant golem. This massive summon was too dangerous to use while Seunghyun was in the way, but with the path finally clear, she does not have to hold back anymore. Seunghyun keeps the pressure on by amping his energy output to the limit, launching a barrage of reinforced chains to pin the monster down. They're banking on this combined assault to break through the enemy's defenses as the chains successfully lock onto the target for the final phase of the fight. Yona's golem holds the boss in place while Seunghyun goes for the kill, and the blade connects with a massive impact that tears right through the monster's defenses. Jae-hyung is hyped by the display, telling Seunghyun he'd get a perfect score for a move like that. As the combined force of the team's mana finally overwhelms the enemy, Seunghyun pours everything into this one moment to ensure the boss stays down, and the creature finally collapses, leaving the battlefield silent for the first time. They regroup around the fallen enemy, though nobody is ready to drop their guard just yet. Jae-hyung asks if it's finally over, but the others tell him to shut up before he jinxes it. The plan now is to keep slicing off any limbs that try to regenerate while the boss is incapacitated. With the immediate threat neutralized, they realize they can finally break the barrier and get help, but the physical toll of that last strike hits Seunghyun all at once, leaving him completely drained and unable to handle the massive recoil. Just as they think they have a breather, the boss's body starts warping and swelling unnaturally. It is not trying to heal its wounds, it's concentrating all its remaining energy into a single point. The team realizes too late that the monster is attempting to self-destruct while it still has mana left. Seunghyun is stuck right in the blast zone and he is far too weak to even crawl away. The energy reaches a breaking point as the monster's shell begins to crack open, and Jae-hyung screams for him to move as the ground begins to shatter. Seunghyun can only watch as the entire area is consumed by a blinding light, as a massive pillar of mana erupts from the center, signaling a total collapse of the battlefield. The explosion should have leveled the entire area, but a massive containment field snaps into place at the last second. Shinbeek's voice echoes through the chaos, reminding the kid of his duty to protect his sister, while Seunghyun struggles to stay conscious as the mana stabilizes. His father suddenly manifests in the center of the wreckage to add a new condition to their deal. This unique construction art means he needs to start prioritizing his own survival too. The higher-ups are worried that opening the barrier will let Usra escape, so Shinbeek proposes a surgical hole just big enough for a single person. They argue that no one can analyze a corporate-grade barrier system that quickly until it clicks that the man standing before them is not an ordinary user. Realizing he is the only one capable of such a feat, they have no choice but to let him try. He focuses his energy on the barrier's complex internal structure and successfully manifests inside the blast zone to shield the team from the fallout. Seunghyun cannot believe his eyes when he sees his father standing right there, and his first instinct is to ask if the man was finally watching his fight. Shin-beek confirms he saw everything. But he immediately drops a reality check by saying the kid is still far from the student council's level. It's the same cold discouragement Seunghyun has heard his entire life, yet he still manages to smile because his dad finally admitted his power actually works. The heavy silence that follows proves there is still a massive wall between their expectations. Seunghyun is barely holding on after the fight, leaning on Jae-hyung as they finally clear the area. Official reports downplay the monster incident as a minor mishap, even though the scale of the destruction suggests otherwise. While the students recover from the shock, Seonghyun is already facing a massive PR nightmare. Public backlash over safety protocols starts hitting the school hard. Inside the conference room, the faculty gathers to find answers, and Professor Hajiwara drops a bomb by claiming this was no accident. He's convinced the monster's rampage was a calculated move. Professor Ryu stays skeptical until the data shows a conflict, proving that Hajiwara's own curse arts were blocked by an outside force. This means another high-level user was already pulling the monster's strings. The investigation results point toward a suspect with the right talent, leading straight to Hunter Mateo from the Shinsung Guild. Hearing his guild's name triggers an immediate reaction from Oh Gang-ho, but the UJ representative does not hesitate to escalate the tension. He accuses Shinsung of sabotaging the event to protect their brand, claiming they deliberately broke the arena to ruin the school's reputation. Gang-ho cannot believe the audacity of the guy as the meeting turns hostile. National Hunter Gi Shinbeek steps in to clear the air, claiming Shinsung actually has a solid alibi. He explains that the timing of the incident does not line up with the accusations, recalling a conversation about pushing limits and ignoring traditional boundaries. The idea was to stop worrying about who belongs where and just get the job done, which leaves the rest of the room wondering what he is actually getting at. Shinbeek clarifies that he was not just watching from the sidelines, revealing he'd already detained the suspect before the rampage could even begin. This news catches everyone off guard since it means the real threat might still be at large. Principal Yoon Jin-seok finally shuts down the bickering to get the meeting back on track. He's not interested in guild politics right now, framing the entire incident as a direct act of terrorism against the school. His goal is to force Shinsung and UJ to stop pointing fingers and start cooperating on security, reminding them that they were not invited here just to start a shouting match. When he notices Shinbeek's hesitant expression, he asks for his honest take on the situation. Shinbeek does not hold back, suggesting the real problem is a spy hiding within their own walls. The accusation immediately shifts the mood as the faculty tries to process the idea of a traitor. Even if the culprit is not a teacher, he's convinced an informant had to be feeding them intel. His logic is simple: controlling a monster like Usura requires knowing exactly where it was hidden. Since that location was a high-security secret, the person pulling the strings has to be someone with deep access to the school's private records. The Shinsung guy on the phone thinks he just got lucky with a weird misunderstanding, unaware that he's actually chatting with the person who framed him. The mystery caller confirms the ship leaves at 3, setting a hard deadline for their next move. Back at a dark hideout, the real culprit is casually relaxing while a captive hangs on by a thread. His partner in crime checks if he's finally done talking so they can get back to work. Picking up the conversation where they left off, he asks the victim how it felt to be a puppet. Controlling a beast like Usura while Shinbeek was watching wasn't exactly easy, but being a returnee gives him access to powers that normal hunters cannot even dream of. The man in the chair can barely focus through the blood and the confusion, mostly because the woman was specifically ordered to keep him alive until this very moment. With the interrogation finished, the villain gets a good look at his victim's face one last time. Using a specialized copying ability, he literally memorizes every single detail of the man's identity. This guy is genuinely excited to step into his new role as a guild member named Mateo. They needed a Shinsung identity to move around the school, and this poor guy was the perfect target. Now that he's claimed the name Mateo de Sika along with those monster control abilities, the fake Mateo decides it's time to head out and begin the real infiltration. He tells his accomplice to have fun finishing the job as long as she keeps the noise down. As he walks away from the torture room, the victim's final screams echo through the halls. His ultimate goal is to use this disguise to flip the entire Hunter school upside down, leaving the faculty completely blind to the threat currently walking through their front gates. The kid stops the intruder right in his tracks, demanding to know if he remembers the face of his victim. The man does not flinch, just staring back with total indifference. The boy cannot even get more than a few words out before the weight of the moment hits. This is the same person who ruined his life years ago, and he is not letting him walk away without acknowledging what he did. The silence between them is thick as they wait for someone to make the first move. It triggers a sudden rush of memories from a day of absolute carnage. Replaying the sounds and the chaos of a tragedy that never truly ended, he can still see his sister's face during the attack, alongside the terrifying figure responsible for destroying his world. The man finally speaks up, admitting that he suspected this encounter would happen. He identifies the boy as the lone survivor of the massacre, confirming they share a bloody history. Even with the identity confirmed, there is a heavy air of unfinished business between them. The kid has been holding on to one specific question since the day his life fell apart. The stranger gives him the floor, seemingly curious about what he has to say. It starts with a simple why, a question fueled by years of trauma and a desperate need for closure. Finally, the boy screams out, demanding to know why all those innocent people had to die. But the man just counters with a cold question of his own, wondering if he really wants the answer. The kid is at his breaking point, demanding an answer right here and now. He wants to hear the truth from the man's own mouth, and he's not letting him walk away without a real explanation. After a tense moment of staring him down, the man takes a breath and prepares to reveal the secret. He starts by explaining the nature of the threat that day. The man looks him in the eye, finally ready to drop the act. He adjusts his grip as the memories of that day resurface. It turns out there was only one monster responsible for the carnage, an S-class nightmare with a name that still carries weight. Legion possessed the ability to infinitely divide and regenerate, meaning the single creature had turned into thousands in minutes. Since every kill caused more to split off, he decided to level the entire district. He calls the mass destruction a rational choice for the greater good. The kid rejects that logic, yelling that a true hero would have saved everyone. He's done with a system that justifies killing innocents for convenience. This is exactly why he's working to become a top-tier hunter, so he can eventually tear down the world this man represents. That burning conviction reminds the villain of a face from his own past, and since their ideals cannot coexist, he knows there's only one way this ends. The protagonist starts by demanding a real apology for everything that happened, questioning if this guy even feels a shred of guilt for what he did. The demand is simple: he needs to apologize for what happened to his sister. But the man in the hat gives a cold, immediate refusal. It is clear there is absolutely no common ground to be found here. He explains that a real apology is built on 3 specific pillars, starting with admitting you were wrong and feeling genuine remorse for the sin, and ending with a promise to never repeat the mistake ever again, which is exactly why he refuses to say the words. If a situation ever called for sacrificing an entire city to save the majority, this man admits he'd happily repeat the massacre without a second thought. Raising his glowing crystal, the kid tells him he will have to fight for that stance, just like another hunter once forced him to do years ago. The tension finally snaps as the talking phase comes to an end. Since words will not work, force is the only language left between them. Neither side is willing to back down an inch as they clash. And a massive star-shaped beam of energy erupts across the clearing, forcing the villain to move so fast his hat barely stays on. The kid is stunned that his opponent can react that quickly, especially since the man has not even bothered to draw his weapon yet. Before the kid can process the speed gap, the ground beneath his feet ripples like water, launching him into the air before he can stabilize. This opponent is not just fast, he is manipulating the environment. Several heavy metal pieces fly out of the dust, so the hunter throws up a defensive barrier. The man cuts through the crystals like glass, leaving the kid defenseless as the smoke clears. Those flying metal pieces turn out to be shackles, snapping onto his limbs and pinning him down. A crushing blast of water pressure slams into him, and the villain notes the boy lacks combat experience. A pro constructor does not need a book to land shots, and he warns that next time he will use a lethal strike. Despite being immobilized, the kid refuses to stay quiet, realizing how badly he's actually outclassed right now. Staring up, he cannot help but wonder about the man's logic. If someone has this much power to do good, why choose a path that leads to so much death? The villain does not answer, his eyes showing only indifference. The constructor drops a card, offering an internship to educate the kid. Bro is not having it and demands to know why he'd ever go to him, and suggests the villain should just focus on training his own son. But the man just walks away, telling him not to be picky about opportunities. Left pinned and helpless, the protagonist is forced to chew on that advice. Meanwhile, deep in the woods, a different pair is dealing with their own issues. The girl is walking away while literally chained to her companion. He's trying to get a straight answer on where they are even headed, but she remains completely silent as she leads the way. It seems like communication is not exactly their strong suit. He asks again, clearly not getting the hint that she is not talking. She stays stone-faced, keeping her focus strictly on the path ahead, and the silence only makes the mystery of their destination feel heavier. Cutting back to yesterday at the Gam family building, things are much louder. A massive training monster gets absolutely shredded in a single, precise strike. Seunghyun checks the results and sees a near-perfect score of 98. The rest of the team is hyped, unable to believe how easily it went down. They are dying to know how he pinpointed the creature's weakness so fast. Out of breath from the effort, he claims it was just a lucky find in a paper, and it looks like these training sessions are finally putting an end to the bullying. The vibe at school has completely shifted, with classmates actually being nice for once. One girl even offers a sincere apology for how things were handled before, leaving him a bit confused about when exactly she turned over a new leaf. Even that troublesome senior, Shin Miju, has been keeping her distance lately. Ever since he threatened to expose her secret about the blue cube, she hasn't reached out. Life is definitely easier now, but that does not mean the pressure is gone. There is a much bigger problem on his mind as he heads back to the training room. Under the watchful eye of his mentors, he tries to tap into that raw power again, but straining against the chains feels like trying to move a mountain with a toothpick. The effort is so intense that his coach cannot help but make a gross joke about his straining. He hits the deck in frustration, wondering why that spark from before will not just come back. The instructor reminds him that he definitely absorbed Yona's power during their last encounter. Implying his ability allows him to claim the strength of returnees he's taken down. It is the only logical explanation, but knowing the theory does not make the practice any easier. Unlike other classes that have centuries of textbooks and established techniques to follow, summoning is a manifestation of the soul, meaning there is no one-size-fits-all manual. Mastery can only be found through his own senses, not through a lecture. Yona checks in to see if he is joining the group for a post-training meal, but he turns down the offer of fried chicken to stay behind and keep grinding. He's still too clunky with his energy, and he is not stopping until he catches up to the rest. Yona leaves him with a casual reminder to visit in the evenings, effectively wrapping up the social side of his night. Seunghyun stays behind to grind, but his focus is already starting to slip. He realizes he spent every waking moment in this hall since the semester started, and honestly his life was not much more than a training loop before he enrolled either. The mental fatigue is finally catching up to him, making solo practice a lost cause. He decides to pack it in and head back to the dorm for some actual rest, but the quiet is broken by someone else entering the hall. This particular senior is the last person he expected to see here this late. Her presence immediately kills his plan to leave, putting him back on guard. She does not say a word, just locks eyes and keeps the vibe heavy. Seunghyun starts overthinking their history, wondering if she's holding a grudge. He knows his previous victory was not exactly by the book. Before he can even open his mouth to clear the air, the senior closes the distance in a blur, forcing a split-second reaction. He instinctively summons his chains to create a barrier between them, bracing for an actual fight in the middle of the empty training room. The aggression stops as quickly as it started, leaving him completely confused. Instead of a weapon, she's holding out a small piece of paper as if she was just making a delivery. Seunghyun is completely caught off guard when she follows up the note with a random pop quiz. The senior is not interested in small talk, demanding to know exactly what day it is. Her questioning gets even more specific, covering the month, date, and day of the week. Bro starts fumbling over his words while trying to process the weird interrogation. Instead of just giving an answer, he makes the mistake of trying to correct her phrasing, explaining how she should have asked the question properly to be grammatically correct, which leads to a long, heavy silence as she just stares him down. The senior tells him to drop the advice and just die, making him realize she's not in the mood for a lesson. Seunghyun quickly shifts gears to apologize for their previous clash during the observation class. She considers the apology for a moment before deciding she'll forgive him only if he agrees to do her a favor. The demand is simple: meet her at Poppy Hall tomorrow during lunch. Back at the dorms, the supervisor is completely out of commission after a night of heavy drinking. The girls watch the aftermath, wondering if the teacher even survived the binge. They're already planning to grab some hangover cure to help the situation, but the conversation is cut short when someone knocks on the door. Soyeon goes to check who's visiting this late, finding the blonde senior standing there as if she belongs. It takes a second for the recognition to kick in, as they realize this is the girl Seunghyun managed to beat in their last match. Seunghyun's friends are caught off guard by the senior's sudden appearance, and naturally they are worried about what she wants with their friend. The idea of him getting bullied by an upperclassman starts to feel very real, so the girls decide a little bit of espionage might be necessary. It's a risky plan, but they aren't about to let him walk into a trap alone. Meanwhile, at Poppy Hall, the senior gets straight to the point of her request. She needs Seunghyun to act as a verbal anchor so she can finally talk to a friend. It turns out she suffers from a condition that only lets her speak clearly, so she needs to be physically touching the chains Seunghyun controls to talk. He wonders if she could just write down what she wants to say instead, but apparently a simple note does not cut it for a real conversation. Their private meeting is interrupted by the sound of someone approaching through the trees. The senior recognizes the footsteps immediately as her friend Yona, but she's not the only one showing up to this secret rendezvous. This newcomer is Si Kia, a third-year elite with the rare status of a returnee. Back at the dorms, the girls are fully committed to their mission and decide to throw on some low-budget disguises to keep their cover. The stakes feel high as they prepare to trail the duo into the woods. They've got the look down, even if they are standing out more than they think. There's just one major problem: they've already lost sight of where Seunghyun went. The girls are not worried about losing sight of him since they can just track his energy, explaining that everyone emits subtle waves that ability users can pick up on. It's a skill that allows them to pinpoint anyone even if they're hiding their presence. Though the comparison to a tracking dog makes the whole process sound a lot less cool. Meanwhile, deep in the woods, the main duo finally reaches the end of the trail, and Seunghyun is surprised to find that they've already reached the meeting spot. Waiting for them in the clearing is a girl leaning against a tree, but she's definitely not a normal student from the look of those pointed ears. The sheer pressure coming off her is enough to put Seunghyun on guard immediately. Because he can tell right away that this person is not human. She stands up to greet them with a presence that feels completely out of this world, focusing her attention entirely on Yona's arrival. The senior is still using the chains to keep her speech distortion at bay, and finally managing to say hello leaves the newcomer stunned. It's a rare treat for Kia to hear her friend speak Korean so clearly. This is Kia, another high-ranking returnee who knows exactly who she is looking at. Having heard all the rumors about Seunghyun's ability to seal away powers, his monster-slaying feats on the school bulletin board have made him a local celebrity, though he'd much rather the entire site was scrubbed from the internet. The pleasantries take a backseat as Yona prepares to fulfill the promise she made. Kia pulls up an old photo of Yona from her days as a prize-winning singer and immediately asks for a live performance, but the answer is a hard no. Yona explains that she walked away from music the moment her life changed, as the returnee curse makes it impossible to control her lyrics or her pitch. She scribbles her thoughts down while the elf leans in close, hoping to strike a bargain for a future performance. Kia promises that if they ever find a way to break this curse, the senior will finally have to give her a private concert. Seunghyun watches from the sidelines while the two friends reconnect. Though Yona is still wondering if she can ever return to the girl she used to be. That version of her feels a world away from the blood-stained warrior she has become, yet the warmth from her friend is enough to make her reconsider. She decides to give it a shot right here in the woods, starting a rendition of a classical aria called Lasya Chio Pyanga. The choice of music catches Seunghyun completely off guard. And while the melody is there, the language distortion starts fighting her immediately. This curse twists the lyrics into something unrecognizable as she sings, ruining the tone and the pitch until the masterpiece becomes a total mess. Even with the heavy atmosphere and the tragic history behind the moment, Seunghyun does not sugarcoat anything and tells her she's actually terrible. Yona pushes through the remaining lyrics of the aria, even as the curse continues to twist every word she utters. Despite the technical mess, the weight of her history carries the performance to a close. The song clearly hits close to home for Kia, who claps and offers some sincere thanks for the effort. Yona tries to brush it off by saying she's out of practice, but Seunghyun surprisingly changes his tune. He actually calls it a good performance, giving her the validation she needed, and Kia takes a moment to realize how much this moment truly mattered. She turns to Seunghyun to express her gratitude for everything he has done, explaining that for a few minutes, the trauma of their new lives actually disappeared. Getting to feel like her old self again was a gift she never expected to receive, though the guy keeps trying to play it off as him just having the right skills at the right time. This claim of being replaceable does not sit well with Yona, who steps in to correct his view on what he's actually accomplished. She points out that the world sees returnees as nothing but walking weapons, and people rarely look at them as human beings who deserve help or compassion. By treating them like friends rather than tools or threats, he is doing something that most people would not even consider. This realization seems to hit him a lot harder than he expected, and he finally stands up as the weight of his impact on them sinks in. The mood stays light for a second as Kia gives Yona some genuine props on her singing, noting that she actually has a pretty good voice when she is not trying to sound like a banshee. But the compliment backfires when Yona realizes just how much they heard, and her face turns into a terrifying warning. She threatens to end them if a single rumor gets out, causing the group to scatter as the observation class arc officially wraps up. Then the vibe takes a massive nosedive into a dark future where Seunghyun is pushed to his absolute limit. He's left wondering how things managed to spiral this out of control so fast, especially with a massive, pitch-black armored juggernaut looming over him like a death sentence. As the monster's presence practically crushes the air out of the room, the weight of a terrible choice sets in. He cannot stop thinking that he never should have followed his sister into this mess, yet the situation is already well past the point of no return. Staring down the shadow of a creature that should not even exist, he tries to piece together where it all went wrong. The dread of that moment hangs heavy as the story jumps back to see how this disaster actually started. Just a few hours earlier, things were actually peaceful back at the house, with his sister Soyeon showing off her questionable life skills by eating egg rolls without utensils. It's a typical chaotic breakfast until she mentions that she's heading out for the day despite it being Sunday. She's all dressed up for a club tour, which immediately sets off some red flags for her brother. When he asks which club could possibly be recruiting on the weekend, she drops the name of the newspaper club. Trying to play it cool, he keeps eating while the name triggers a specific warning in his head. The memory of the Seonghin newspaper club flashes back, and they are definitely not just writing school papers. He slams the table in a total panic, knowing those bastards are the last people his sister should be hanging out with. Seunghyun refuses to let his sister walk into the psychojournalism club alone. Soyeon checks if the whole group is actually following her for support today. The team confirms they're staying together to make sure nothing goes sideways during this tour. The club's reputation follows them as they head toward the meeting location. Although Soyeon claims they're safe as long as they were officially invited, they eventually arrive at the coordinates provided for the suspicious meeting. The school building looks like a typhoon ripped right through the halls recently, and the girls immediately vote Seunghyun to be the first one through the door. A sudden shout from the darkness stops the group in their tracks. Seol Subin is also waiting at the site and seems equally out of place. He confirms the club reached out to him with a similar invitation as well. The group's presence in one spot starts to look like a setup to Seunghyun. The kid starts noticing a pattern that the others are completely missing. He whispers to his friend about how strange this specific lineup of guests is. Every person invited today is actually from the exact same dormitory as him. They're all people who failed to make the cut for previous newspaper features. Seung-hyun suspects the club is trying to use his friends to investigate him further. Realizing he's the real target means he can't just sit back and watch. His partner agrees that the club's intentions are definitely more than just journalism, and their history of preying on students suggests a trap is about to spring. The conversation about school bullies takes a back seat to the eerie vibe of the hallway. They reach a dead end and realize the door ahead is electronically locked. Subin figures out the scanner and gets granted access by the automated system, but the entrance shuts tight the moment he crosses the threshold. He is left alone in a dark corridor while the others wait their turn outside. The system calls for the next person on the list by name, and Soyeon follows the instruction to scan her id and head inside. Seunghyun waits his turn, but the mechanical precision of the door feels like a trap. The remaining members are ushered in one by one until only he is left. Red warning lights begin to flash as the scanner processes his presence. The machine starts flagging him as an uninvited guest over and over. It eventually gives up and invites the intruder to enter along with the others. Seunghyun warns everyone to be ready to smash their way out if things get ugly. A welcome message plays, claiming the club is all about swift and accurate reporting. It clarifies that while uninvited guests are not usually welcome, exceptions can be made. To prove they belong, everyone present has to undergo a mandatory admission test. The idea of a formal exam for a simple school club catches the group off guard. Subin points out that clubs in this school are really just about building elite networks. These groups act as a pipeline for keeping powerful players close for post-graduation benefits. If they cannot prove their value right now, the club will not have any use for them. The floating mascot announces that the admission process consists of 5 different exams. They only need to clear 3 of them to be recognized as official journalists. But there is a strict 2-person limit per room, preventing the group from sticking together. Seunghyun tells the voice to stop hiding behind screens and show its face. The club mascot claims they are not hiding, they are just revealing the truth. Shutter decides he's done talking and tries to bash his way through the wall. His heavy swing connects, but the facility is built to handle much worse, and a ceiling-mounted turret drops down to remind everyone that property damage is prohibited. The exit is officially sealed, leaving the group with no choice but to move forward. Seunghyun is stunned that a simple school club has access to high-end military weaponry, but the mascot dismisses him, claiming that real journalists have no limits on their tools. With a literal gun pointed at their heads, the group has officially lost all leverage, and fighting back now would only lead to a bloodbath they are not ready for. The main man is clearly frustrated by the lack of direct combat options. Whitehair points out that playing along is their only rational path to getting out, so the team reluctantly agrees to split up and tackle the exams as requested. Seunghyun vows to find whoever is pulling the strings the second this test ends, unaware that security monitors are already tracking their every move toward the trials. Meanwhile, someone is watching the feeds from a dark, cluttered office in the back. Noting that 2 uninvited guests have managed to slip inside the facility undetected, Seunghyun and the crew decide to stop stalling and just take the test. This entrance exam officially marks the start of the Ultra Psycho arc. Looking at the layout, Seunghyun realizes the 5 doors represent different combat types. Each door is color-coded, ranging from body arts to curse and summoning styles. The group quickly confirms that the symbolic colors match the school's classification system. Seunghyun guesses the division is for mock battles using the school's hologram tech. And since each room only allows 2 people, the difficulty is likely scaled for pairs. A system alert cuts their planning short, giving them only 3 minutes to pick a room. The white-haired kid starts getting aggressive with the staff, but Seunghyun shuts him down. The pairs split up, with the Gi siblings taking body arts while Mo-dan handles curses. Mo-dan gets a quick check-in from the others to see if she is ready for the solo run. Curse arts have a reputation for being nasty to experience, but she is not worried. Her plan is to use her speed to blitz the trial before any slow-cast curses can activate. Subin faces similar questions about choosing the red room since construction is also notoriously slow. He argues that high-level users are plenty fast, which is exactly why he picked this path. The kid wants to prove he can outmaneuver the very types people usually underestimate. Entering the construction room, he is greeted by a system message confirming the trial type. Seunghyun's prediction was spot on, as this zone is built around object manipulation. These trials usually feature wide-range attacks that are nearly impossible to dodge normally. But instead of a monster duel, Subin realizes he is stuck in a high-speed obstacle course. The system breaks down the mechanics, warning Subin that touching red blocks drains his health bar, but he will get a head start since yellow warnings appear right before the dangerous zones spawn. With a 10-minute clock ticking and only 3 lives to spare, Subin asks the obvious question, specifically what kind of nightmare scenario happens if he actually runs out of hearts. The system stays tight-lipped, claiming journalist confidentiality is more important than his peace of mind. It is not the high-octane brawl he expected, but the trial officially begins anyway, and as the blocks start drifting in, the kid realizes the movement speed is painfully slow. Clearing this in 10 minutes seems like a walk in the park compared to his usual training. Meanwhile, Mo-dan steps into the room of curses only to find a completely different vibe. Instead of hexes, she's met with a newspaper-themed prompt about uncovering the truth from rumors. Things get weird when the system forcefully outfits her in a classic detective getup. setting her objective to identify a criminal among a lineup of 5 suspicious-looking suspects. The scenario involves a pickpocketing victim and a 5-minute window to solve the case. Modan has to subdue the right target quickly, or the system counts it as a fail. There is a penalty for guessing wrong too, since attacking an innocent person just jacks up the difficulty. The girl is totally lost on how a whodunit mystery has anything to do with curse magic, but apparently reasoning is a survival skill in dungeons that she does not think she possesses. She even admits that logic is not exactly her strong suit before jumping into the investigation. Starting with the victim, she asks for a description of the thief and the stolen pink wallet, but as she turns to the suspects, the group is already trying to play it cool. Modan starts her interrogation, but the suspects are not exactly cooperative, acting like busy people who do not have time for a detective. She tells them to pipe down and wait their turn to speak, turning her attention back to the victim for a description of the thief. The big guy in the group loses his cool and grabs her by the collar, offended that a little punk like her is trying to talk down to them. This sudden physical threat sends her into a total screaming fit. And her reaction is so intense it actually catches the thugs off guard. To make things worse, the victim suddenly claims she cannot remember any details. Just as a random businessman tries to walk right through the crime scene, he completely ignores the investigation while talking on his phone, handing over a business card before trying to bail on the whole thing. Modan is baffled by how unhinged this entire scenario is becoming. And even the suspects are annoyed that the new guy is ignoring them too. It hits her that these NPCs were specifically designed to be zero help, realizing this trial is meant to test her mental strength and patience. The suspects decide they've had enough and start heading for the exit, but as the big leader tries to brush past the girl, his partner notices something is seriously wrong with his buddy. The man's body starts to warp and melt as the trial's curse finally takes effect. The big guy's body starts breaking down as the trial's curse takes hold, and even though the situation is getting weird, Modan decides to take full control and orders everyone to stay put for an inspection. She warns the businessman that running is useless because she's way faster, but the red-haired suspect starts yelling about her lack of authority. Since thinking too much is giving her a headache, she decides to try a simple solution. Declaring the melting guy innocent right as the difficulty spikes and a gun comes out. This is not just some harmless hologram either, it's a fully loaded lethal handgun. He demands she fixes his partner immediately before he decides to pull the trigger, but Modan just looks him in the eye and tells him to go ahead and shoot. It's a bold move considering bullets usually end people, but she's confident she can just swat the projectiles right out of the air. She gives them a count of 3 to surrender and start walking over slowly, and by the time she hits 2, the suspects realize they're completely outmatched. Just as she's about to finish the countdown, the girl who is supposed to be the victim lunges at her with a knife from behind. Modan catches the blade, realizing this was the real twist the whole time. The trial never actually stated which person was the victim, and she only assumed it was the girl because she happened to be standing there. Now she is rethinking the whole scene, wondering if the real target was someone else entirely. The assassin is stunned that Modan actually saw her coming, but Dan did not even need a reason to suspect her because the plan was to drop everyone in the room regardless. With that brutal efficiency, she clears the room of curses in just over 2 minutes and heads for the exit. Meanwhile, the journalist is stuck in a completely different kind of nightmare involving a massive grid of floating cubes. He knows that for a reporter, speed is everything, but this trial is pushing his mobility to the absolute limit. The intensity is ramping up fast, and he's clearly struggling to maintain the pace required to survive, and the physical toll of the constant maneuvering is starting to weigh heavy on his body. This is not just about dodging a few blocks. The number of obstacles is growing exponentially by the second. Every time a new path opens up, more red and yellow cubes spawn in to shut it down. Just trying to map out a route through this chaotic mess is draining his mental focus. But the real hurdle is not the mental fatigue or the shifting environment. It's the simple fact that his physical body just is not built for this kind of high-stakes agility. Unlike the combat specialists who spend every waking hour grinding their physical stats through training. Support types like him often neglect their own conditioning because they rely so heavily on their spirits. He's realizing the hard way that having powerful summons does not mean a thing if the summoner is a glass cannon. If the master is the weak link, even the most elite spirits in the world are basically useless. No matter how much power he commands, he's always going to be the target that brings the whole team down. The memory of past failures is hitting him hard, and he is sick of being the one who always ends up losing. Something finally clicks as he refuses to let this trial be another repeat of his old mistakes. He spots an opening and calls out for his water spirit to change the flow of the game. He orders the water spirit to blast him directly, using the high-pressure spray as a makeshift propulsion system to close the gap. The force of the impact is massive, yeeting his body across the room at speeds his physical stats could never hit naturally. This improvised mobility trick is absolutely brutal on his conditioning, but it's the only way to keep up with the terrain shifting around him. He eventually crashes onto a platform, barely holding it together, and realizes how far he still is from the real monsters like Dan to her. This level of movement would be a total cakewalk, and even the other top-tier guys would have cleared the trial by now. Standing there drenched, he starts doubting his own worth as an S rank. especially since the ground is now a literal slip and slide. His own water turns the floor into a death trap that breaks his footing, and the system is not wasting any time mocking his apparent lack of stamina. It warns him the blocks will not wait for a breather, which triggers a sudden, desperate realization about how to handle the physics. If he cannot run, he can use the lack of friction to glide across the room, but the timer hits 0 before he can even test the new theory. The system drops the hammer with a sarcastic "you are out" notification, and just like that, his run ends in a total and humiliating failure. Watching her vanish from the grid completely changes his perspective as the journalist tries to wrap his head around how she pulled off that disappearing act. It finally clicks that he's been overlooking a very simple concept this whole time. He'd been so focused on the physical blocks that he forgot the core nature of his own element. The breakthrough is not about making a bigger splash, it's about utilizing the natural fluidity of water to glide effortlessly through the room. Checking the clock, he analyzes the efficiency of her movement compared to his previous failures. Soyeon was not just summoning her spirit for show, she was using it as high-speed transport. With his eyes finally open to the strategy, he prepares to replicate the move. He dives in, letting the water spirit's momentum carry him across the gaps like a surfboard. This massive surge of power turns the entire trial into a high-speed slide. By turning the spirit's kinetic energy into his own, he clears the remaining obstacles with ease. Mastering this technique proves he finally understands the true potential of his S-rank status. But while he finds his footing, the story shifts back to where Soyeon's journey truly began. Long before the current trials, she was searching for a place where she actually fit in. Her choice to join the newspaper club was actually driven by a deep sense of social discomfort. Even her peers noticed she was different, claiming she did not feel like a typical returnee. That label only makes her feel more like an outsider looking in on a world she does not recognize. Even when they try to move past the comment, the feeling of alienation remains stuck in her mind. She realizes that no matter how hard she tries, the world will always treat her with a subtle distance. The people around her are cautious and fearful, even if she does not understand the discrimination yet, leaving her with a weird kind of discomfort that follows her everywhere. She tries to get answers about her father and the incident from 7 years ago, but her friend shuts the conversation down, claiming some things are just too hard to talk about. Even her own brother keeps her in the dark, telling her she is just too young to know. He promises to explain everything once she is older, but that does not help with the feeling of being left behind. That's when the newspaper club enters the picture as a potential way to bypass the secrets. A recruiter mentions that the club president was impressed by her and wants her to visit. The real hook is the claim that the club has access to high-level intel about the hunter industry. Rare info that isn't available on the public internet or the regular databases is their specialty. Soyeon jumps at the chance, realizing this might be the only way to uncover the truth about her dad. If no one else is going to tell her, she will just have to do the digging herself, which is exactly how she ended up facing off against a massive golem for her entrance exam. Facing off against a monster for a journalism trial is definitely not what she or her brother expected. The rules are simple enough. She gets 10 attempts to beat the golem to the punch. A ball will spawn somewhere in the room once the countdown hits 0, and all she has to do is touch it before the golem does without any fighting involved. It sounds straightforward, but the speed of this giant makes the margin for error tiny. The timer starts ticking down from 3, putting her reflexes to the ultimate test, and as the 0 hits, the race for the first point is officially on. Soyeon moves with explosive speed and snatches the ball in a literal heartbeat, leaving the onlookers struggling to even track her movement. She officially passes the physical portion of the test with flying colors, finishing the entire round in a staggering 0.1 seconds. However, the exam is not over because she is not the only one trying to join. The brother steps up and demands his own chance to prove himself, pointing out that it is only fair for both of them to take the trial. The golem resets and warns him that it operates with the speed of an rank hunter. Instead of being worried, the kid seems to recognize the tech being used, finally pinpointing these people as the same group that once targeted him, specifically the ones who held him at gunpoint in the past. This realization shifts the entire mood of the test into something much more personal. There's a sharp intensity in his eyes as he locks onto his opponent. The observers watch from the sidelines, curious if he can match his sister's feat. Round 2 comes with a strict set of prohibitions to keep the results honest. Since Soyeon already cleared the room, she's officially barred from assisting him, and any interference like blocking the golem is strictly against the rules. The machine emphasizes that this is a pure test of physical ability, not tricks. Fed up with the chatter, he tells the golem to just shut up and get moving. Round 2 is officially live, and he's ready to show them exactly what he can do. The final countdown ticks away as Seunghyun locks in his focus, but before he can even register the start signal, the speed golem crosses the entire floor in a literal blink. A record time of 0.7 seconds flashes on the board, leaving the spectators stunned by the impossible speed of the machine. The kid did not even have a chance to twitch before the round ended. Despite the massive gap in performance, he agrees to go again immediately. But as the next round begins, he just sits down on the floor. His sister thinks he's giving up, but he's just done playing their game. Trying to outrun a machine head-on is a guaranteed way to fail, so he starts mapping out the golem's patterns for the remaining rounds. While everyone else panics about the clock, he stays perfectly still, calculating how the cramped room limits the golem's mobility to a 2-second window. If he can bridge that tiny gap, the physical disadvantage disappears. The goal shifts from winning a race to simply stalling for 2 seconds. Before the next attempt, he calls a timeout to propose a change in setup. He casually walks up and takes a position in the center of the room. The kid points out that the golem starting in the middle is an unfair head start. To level the playing field, he has Soyeon move back to the wall. Standing back to back with the monster, he forces the organizers to accept a new starting line. Round 7 kicks off with the golem mocking Seunghyun's supposed observation skills. The countdown begins while he stays completely locked into the new center position, and the second the timer hits 0, the blue ball finally spawns in. It appears directly in the golem's reach, leaving no room for a real chase. The machine snatches it instantly, ending the round before the kid even blinks. Soyeon is losing her mind over the repeat failure, but her brother is not flinching. Even as the golem laughs about its lucky spawn, the vibe in the room shifts. Seunghyun just agrees that it was bad luck with a weirdly calm expression, and the golem suddenly realizes he did not even try to move for the ball. Our guy calls for round 8 immediately, treating the loss as part of the plan. The machine starts to suspect something is off about his sudden lack of effort. He's actually been analyzing the golem's operating system through every single failed attempt, knowing that unlike humans who get tired and suffer from performance fluctuations, this opponent is just a rigid AI that follows perfectly uniform behavior patterns. Most of the time it runs at a constant speed in a straight line, but Seunghyun caught a tiny fluctuation in its catching speed during the earlier rounds. The delay only happens when the ball spawns directly behind the golem's back, forcing a turnaround movement that is the only thing making the machine lag, which is the entire reason he insisted on standing back-to-back in the center. Until Seunghyun chooses to move, he is effectively locking the golem's turn radius. Seunghyun thinks he has locked the golem into a physical stalemate, banking on the rule that prevents them from actually harming one another. He supplements the block with a massive wall of spirit chains. Even though he knows they're way too fragile to stop a real hit, the whole point is to create a psychological distraction to buy a split second, and for a moment it looks like he's finally going to snatch the ball. But the golem is already a step ahead and snags it right out of the air. Seunghyun cannot even process how he just got beat to the punch, especially after setting up the perfect trap to exploit that turn lag. The machine admits it saw right through his plan to target the time gap. So it just used a high-level body technique to grow an eye on its back. It basically turned into a biological cheat code to bypass the need to turn around. By jumping straight back without rotating, the golem completely invalidated his strategy. Seunghyun starts to spiral, thinking his best ideas are useless against this level of AI, and he is ready to label himself a total failure for missing such an obvious counter, just as he's about to give up on his own abilities entirely. Soyeon steps in and tells him to start absorbing her power instead. She wants him to use that weird explosive technique he pulled off against the monster, but the golem immediately flags her for trying to interfere with the exam. She argues that thinking together should not be against the rules, and the machine surprisingly agrees. Soyeon tries to snap him out of his spiral, insisting they tackle the problem as a team. Her ideas for a carry or taking the ball get immediately shut down by the system rules, leaving her frustrated that the golem is blocking every creative solution they have. Seunghyun tries to push her away again, insisting he needs to handle this himself because he still thinks this trial is his responsibility alone. She quickly shuts that main character attitude down with a literal chop to the head, reminding him that their friends are all in this together. And that clearing this trial is not just a solo mission for him to gatekeep. This reality check leaves him completely speechless as he processes her outburst. She starts getting emotional, thinking he is ignoring her because he looks down on her intelligence. Tearing up, she admits she knows her own social standing is not great at school, yet having real friends around actually made her life feel a bit more manageable. Seunghyun finally explains that he only kept his distance to avoid being a burden during his social exile. He admits he was terrified of falling behind and dragging everyone else down with him, but she screams back that she has no way of knowing his struggles if he keeps them a secret, and that he should have just been honest with her from the start. All she ever wanted was to share the worry with him because they're supposed to be family. The narration shifts, noting that true strength is not about being a one-man army, because even the top hunters rely on guilds to clear the hardest dungeons. Seunghyun finally drops the act and asks to borrow her power, finally ready to work as a team. Seunghyun claims he's finally cracked the code to beating this test and credits Soyeon for helping him remember how to actually win. The instructor is completely thrown off by this sudden burst of confidence. While the bot watches, the kid begins a systematic search of the room. He measures the dimensions and logs every coordinate into his phone. 3 minutes of obsessive scanning later, Soyeon still is not sure where she fits in. The instructor decides to observe for now but warns against any outside interference. Seunghyun hands over the device and tells her she's in charge of the timing. She's stunned by the weird request, but he has a very specific role for her. He knows her agility is high enough to catch a ball in 0.1 seconds. It's a job that only she can handle, and she finally agrees to help. With the plan set, the heavy tension between them finally starts to lift. Seunghyun remembers her simple request to just be around more often, promising they will sit down for dinner and talk properly once they are out. That small bit of reassurance is all she needs to lock in. The golem steps back into position as the atmosphere shifts back to combat. The plan is simple since she will not actually be touching any of the targets. Seeing they are just collecting data for round 10, the instructor lets the clock run. Round 9 officially kicks off with the siblings standing side by side. They distance themselves from the center to avoid the previous round's trap as the countdown hits 3. The countdown is ticking down as Seunghyun tells himself to make this run count. As the clock hits 1, he launches forward, but chains erupt to bind him instantly. This trap is designed to completely blind and deafen him just as the round starts. It's a clever counter, but he's not just relying on his eyes to track the ball. Physical experts like him have senses that go way beyond basic vision, allowing him to maneuver through the chaos and pinpoint the ball's location by sound. The impact is coming fast, and he knows exactly where it's going to land. These chains will not last long once the ball makes contact with the target, but just as he's about to make his move, he realizes Soyeon is right in the path. Even the golem seems confused by her sudden appearance in the middle of the danger zone. The timing is razor-thin as every element of the test converges on one spot. Soyeon did not expect him to be right on top of her this early in the round. He's got a split-second choice: slow down and fail or keep his momentum. Charging ahead means he's going to plow right through his own sister, and while the instructor thinks the run is over, Seunghyun is not stopping. Thinking back to their promise, he refuses to let her presence be a hindrance. She's shouting for him to keep going, refusing to be the reason he fails the test. Seunghyun adjusts his trajectory at the very last possible moment to bypass her. He argues that she's only there as a timer, which does not violate any rules. If they collide, it's his fault for hitting her, so he just has to make sure he does not. Seunghyun realizes high-speed combat is just as much about mental agility as physical power, especially when the golem shifts its strategy to cut off the path to the objective. The construct is not just a mindless tank and tries to outplay him by changing tactics, extending its reach to snatch the ball before the kid can even get close. It funnels every scrap of mana into a single arm to guarantee it touches the target first. Seunghyun spots the massive opening created by that moment of desperation, knowing that overcommitting energy to one limb leaves the rest of the body vulnerable. Since the golem drained its lower half for that reach, it cannot brace against the chains he wraps around its legs. The construct is caught completely off guard as its balance vanishes into thin air, sending it crashing down while the path to the finish line opens wide. This is the moment Seunghyun pulls out his signature move to seal the deal. Even Soyeon is stunned to see him using his primary technique with such precision, especially since he's prioritizing her safety over just getting a high score. He secures the objective with a clean snatch to end the round before anyone gets hurt, officially clearing the room of body arts test in record time. The final clock stops at just over 6 minutes, leaving the proctor in disbelief at the efficiency. Soyeon cannot wrap her head around how he predicted the ball's location in the dark, but the secret is in the device she's been holding the entire time. It turns out she was not holding a stopwatch, but a digital notepad he used to track the patterns. Seunghyun hands her a real timer for future rounds so they can keep their data accurate. Soyeon finally reads the message on the screen. Realizing the instructions to move were specifically tailored for her agility, the timing strategy Seunghyun mentioned earlier was just a clever smokescreen designed to let him block the golem's path before it even started moving. This blatant exploit has the proctor screaming about a foul, but Seunghyun points out that rules are subjective when there is no surveillance. He tells the guy that as long as they are not caught, it counts as a win. The evaluator snaps and tries to attack the kid for his arrogance, swinging with enough force to end the evaluation right then and there. Soyeon is not about to let anyone touch her brother though, and with the threat neutralized, the system officially grants them the pass. A sudden burst of laughter breaks the silence from a hidden corner of the room, leaving Seunghyun wondering how anyone saw them if there are no cameras around. This newcomer admits he knew Seunghyun would not clear the test the normal way, leaving the siblings confused about how this stranger already knows their names. Without warning, a massive physical force grabs Seunghyun and yanks him away, pulling both siblings through a portal into an entirely different location. They find themselves in a messy office filled with stacks of old papers, where they meet Jeon Woojin, the president of the newspaper club. He gives them a cryptic welcome and says they need to hurry. Starts with a lackey begging to keep his limbs while losing his mind. This guy is clearly sick of being the designated victim and starts snitching. Back in reality, a massive invisible force takes hold, dragging the siblings through the air at breakneck speeds. They crash land into what looks like a junk pile, and Seunghyun is left gasping for air after the sudden flight. The confusion only grows as he realizes they are not alone, especially since Soyeon is currently using the Pisces constellation to keep him steady. A voice calls out from the shadows of the messy office, admitting that all this setup was specifically for their arrival. Seunghyun immediately recognizes the tone of the guy who's been stalking them. Standing amidst the wreckage of his own club room, Jeon Woojin introduces himself as the president of the newspaper club. He starts digging through the clutter for some supplies, casually offering tea or coffee like they did not just get abducted. Seunghyun is not in the mood for drinks and demands to know the catch. Woojin just laughs, revealing the entire entrance exam was rigged and fake. He basically let them pass on a whim despite their actual performance. When asked about his true scheme, the president just plays it cool, right as the terrified lackey from the start walks in with a guest. The terrified lackey bursts into the room begging the president for a rescue. But the mood quickly shifts to casual tea time and strawberry milk. Woojin explains that the newspaper club is actually a hub for student investigation requests, admitting the stalking was just a job he took on before apologizing for the hassle. He introduces the rest of the crew, including Emily Montague and Kang Yujin, while maintaining that he only reached out because they seemed like close friends. In his eyes, the only people who would join this club are S-ranks who do not care about grades. Pointing at his current members as the perfect examples of that chaotic energy. Since Soyeon does not have a club yet, he considers her completely free to join, even though she claims she's busy grinding for specific materials in the Darkland. Moving on to business, the president mentions the club's biggest perk is exclusive information. It is a tradition that anyone who passes their test gets to ask for one specific secret. And he is not talking about school rumors or trivial gossip from the Blue Cube. This is high-level intel regarding guild power shifts and secret techniques used by elites. Seunghyun starts questioning how a bunch of students could possibly have that kind of reach, which is when the others reveal that Woojin's father is the legendary Jeon in Seok. The name carries enough weight to stop the conversation dead in its tracks, because that man is the current chairman of the massive UJ group. Having the successors of both UJ and Shinsung in the same department is a massive power play, but Woojin just thinks it's funny that Gi Shinbeek's son is the one acting shocked. Now that the group knows they are dealing with a top-tier chaebol heir, Soyeon is ready to trust his intel, but she has one burning question. She wants to know exactly what their father was up to 7 years ago. This immediately sets off alarm bells for Seunghyun, who tries to shut her down. But she is not having it, calling him out for keeping her in the dark. She's tired of being the only one left out when it comes to family secrets. The brother is clearly rattled by the sudden confrontation, while the others watch the sibling drama unfold in silence. Since she was asleep for so long, nobody ever filled her in on the details. It's a heavy topic that seems to carry a lot of dark history. Seunghyun looks like he's about to break under the pressure. Remembering his father as he was back then, the tension in the room is thick enough to cut with a blade, as the mystery of 7 years ago hangs over everyone's heads. Woojin observes the fallout with a completely unreadable expression while the siblings struggle to keep their composure in front of the club. Even the other club members realize they've stepped into a private minefield. The entire meeting has taken a massive turn into serious territory. Mentioning that some of this was already hinted at during their time on the ship, Woojin decides to tell them everything since they will be seeing each other around school anyway. Woojin starts dropping details, which is honestly kind of annoying to the others. He's acting reluctant to talk about the incident from 7 years ago, but he gives Soyeon two choices. Option O or Option B. Option B is the real truth that the rest of the world has no clue about. Hearing that there's a hidden version of history catches everyone off guard. It's a heavy decision, so Woojin puts the ball in Soyeon's court. She does not hesitate for a second and chooses to hear the hidden truth. That's the cue for Woojin to stop holding back the details. To understand what happened, you have to look at how the public sees hunters. Everyone focuses on S and A ranks because B ranks have a hard ceiling on their power. Back in 2019, a certain dungeon raid turned into a total disaster. A hunter was trapped inside, struggling just to survive the encounter. It looked like the end of the line against a gate that was way too strong. The situation was completely hopeless for a standard ranker until something fundamentally changed in the system. Even though her father was officially only a B rank, he possessed a skill that did not make any sense for his level. His actual combat power was famously on par with S-rank hunters. Usually, your rank is locked in the moment you awaken and never changes, but there are always those rare cases that break the logic of the world. Masters of the craft can bridge the gap between ranks through sheer experience, utilizing high intelligence and proficiency to take down threats that should be impossible, effectively erasing the power difference between themselves and high-level monsters. Gi Shinbeek was the gold standard for this type of veteran hunter, serving as the captain for the nation's elite first rescue team. After finishing a raid that left other guilds in total shambles, his team vents about the constant requests to bail out low-quality hunters, wondering why so many rookies are getting in over their heads lately. While the rest of the crew blames these failures on simple bad luck, Shinbeek sees a much more fundamental problem with the current system. He rejects the idea that dungeons are just unavoidable disasters, arguing that even the deadliest monsters have weaknesses for those who look, provided they have the common strength to actually observe the battlefield. To him, the world does not just need more rankers, it needs real warriors. This intense professional outlook usually stays hidden behind his quiet mask, leaving his subordinates completely stunned by the sudden lecture. They've never seen the captain speak with that much conviction before, but he is already heading out early to check on his wife's condition. Apparently, the man was a total psycho back in his student days, and meeting his wife was the only thing that finally made him human. The past starts crawling back into Shinbeek's mind, reminding him of the day his world fell apart. It all began with a dark house and an empty room, and his son asking where the rest of the family went. Seunghyun had no idea where his mom or sister were, forcing a desperate dash toward the emergency room. They eventually found the girl hooked up to machines while his wife sat by the bedside looking completely drained. Apparently, Soyeon suffered a seizure in the middle of the night, and the medical staff could not believe the mother got her there alone. She had carried the child through the streets in a total panic, pleading with the doctors to do anything to save her daughter. The family has been living in that nightmare ever since, as 5 years have gone by without Soyeon ever waking up. His wife is finally losing the strength to keep hoping for a miracle, yet she will not even entertain the idea of hiring help for the house. Shinbik is still haunted by the choice to let the girl sleep alone, convinced that being by her side would have changed everything. He blames himself for every second of their daughter's condition. And he refuses to just call it bad luck and walk away. Real disasters do not work like a video game since there is no final boss to kill or a labyrinth to clear. Shinbik is left rotting in a hospital bed with no clear objective, forced to endure a tragedy that lacks any rhyme or reason. This is not a quest he can just grind his way out of, and the physical recovery is the easy part compared to the mental toll. Seeing his daughter in that hospital bed breaks every rule he lives by, leaving the entire family paralyzed by a loss that offers zero hope. Over at the Gangbuk Monster Control Agency, the atmosphere is strangely heavy, mostly because the usual chaos has been replaced by a total lack of work. The staff is just killing time and waiting for the next disaster to drop, even as Rescue Team 2 returns from a routine job in Jongno. Senior Ki Jae-hyung eventually tracks the kid down for a quick check-in, pulling him away from the desk to discuss some sensitive information. An S-rank gate is scheduled to open in the Mapogu district very soon, and while the details are classified, the deployment orders are already set. Their team is the one chosen to handle the heavy lifting for this raid, yet the senior is more worried about the lack of intel than the gate itself. He recalls that whenever things got this quiet in the past, it was always a sign that a mission far deadlier than an S-rank was coming. The senior warns the guys that they're the only alumni left on this side, and tells them to prioritize staying alive above everything else. Not long after, the squad finds themselves standing in a massive hall, wondering why they've been pulled into such a high-level meeting. It turns out they're reporting directly to the Monster Control Agency director, who warns them that their next assignment is going to be a heavy one. A group of contractors recently stole a dangerous magical device from the state, and the team's primary objective is to recover it before things escalate. The guys are not sure why a combat team is being used for a retrieval op, but a voice from behind reveals they were handpicked by a special recommender. Before anyone can even process the threat, a blur of motion tears through the room, nearly wrecking the office just by passing through the squad. The person responsible is a girl who looks like she should still be in school, yet she greets Shinbik and the senior like they're old friends. While the rest of the team is busy being confused by the kid, the protagonist recognizes her as someone from his earliest training days. This is the legendary instructor who taught them when they became national hunters. Song Hwa Ran, the Security Bureau Chief, is officially taking command of this mission. And though the theft and the S-rank gate seem like separate issues, they're both pieces of a puzzle that's about to end in a total disaster. Hwa Ran greets the guys like no time has passed, leaving the rest of the team reeling at her age. Shinbik and Jae-hyung are stuck in a loop of disbelief seeing their old master again, and the protagonist realizes she was the one who forged them into national hunters. Back then, she was the legendary instructor who whipped the elite into shape. And now the Security Bureau Chief is officially joining their squad for the retrieval. But while they're catching up, the scene shifts to Sicily where the mafia is making moves. At an outdoor cafe, a man approaches a blonde hunter with a very specific question, asking in Italian if she'll listen to the golden words of their organization. The girl has no clue what he's talking about and tries to brush him off, but the stranger does not seem interested in taking no for an answer. Suddenly, her expression twists as if something is crawling inside her head, while the man across the table waits for the psychological pressure to take hold. After a moment of visible struggle, her will finally snaps under the weight of the code, and she repeats the phrase back to him like she's been programmed. Matteo De Sica laughs off her weird hobbies and tells her to cut the small talk, revealing himself as a high-ranking player who does not have time to waste. He's only here to check on the progress of a specific item he ordered her to find, and the look in her eyes suggests the mission was far from a peaceful one. She confirms that the target is already in their possession, leaving behind a room full of corpses to prove that the mafia does not do clean work. Right now the group is tracking Oro Failna, better known as the Golden Moth, an Italian mafia group that's basically a one-stop shop for high-end contract crimes. By narrowing down the smuggling routes, the team managed to station units at various ports, setting up a stakeout at a local cafe right by the water to keep watch. While the team settles in for the long haul, the reality of the mission starts to sink in. Hyo-sung admits he's used to fighting monsters, not organized groups of ability users, which immediately gets him roasted by the others for acting like a nervous rookie. Laughter erupts at the table while he tries to maintain some professional dignity, and his teammate promises to keep everyone safe as long as she's on the clock. Hyo-sung is mostly banking on the fact that the Security Bureau Chief is backing them up, trusting in the strength of the senior officers despite their goofy behavior over coffee. After a bit more teasing, the kid decides to head to the bathroom to clear his head, only to get a quick lesson on how kids drink their tea these days. Jae-hyung tags along for the break to ensure the rookie does not wander off alone, leading the way to the second floor while complaining about the building's layout. They suddenly cross paths with a couple of serious-looking older men on the stairs, and the mood shifts the second they make eye contact with the strangers. The bearded man in the lead clearly is not just another tourist stopping for a drink, and neither group says a word as they pass each other in the narrow space. Both sides continue on their separate ways, but the encounter leaves a heavy tension behind. The silent standoff on the stairs does not last more than a few seconds, as the bearded man goes for his blade the moment they pass each other. He launches a brutal surprise attack that catches Jae-hyung completely off guard, landing a heavy slash that leaves the senior officer bleeding out on the steps. Hyo-sung barely has time to process the ambush before gunshots erupt from below, forcing the rookie to draw his weapon and immediately close the distance. The kid manages to parry a strike from the second attacker's mace-like weapon, holding his ground while the narrow stairwell turns into a chaotic death trap. Jae-hyung struggles to stay in the fight while the bearded man presses his advantage, revealing a grotesque eye embedded right in the center of his palm. This guy claims he's been keeping tabs on the bureau just as much as they have watched him. And the palm eye triggers a vision-based trap that completely stalls the rookie. It's a total bullshit ability that forces Hyo-sung to scramble for a way out, while the realization sinks in that their entire stakeout was a setup. More gunmen start flooding the stairs to capitalize on the team's confusion, sealing off the second floor and trapping the two officers in a deadly pincer move. The rest of the bureau team finally catches the sound of gunfire from their room, wondering how the hell the Golden Moth guys knew their exact location. The bearded man knows his reinforcements will give them the numerical win soon, but the team is warned that making eye contact with those palms will end the fight instantly. Hyo-sung knows he is the only one who can counter the palm eye, and he's not about to let anyone else get taken out like Jae-hyung. That oversized hammer comes down just as the stairwell turns into a war zone. While the rest of the team tries to hold back the flood of white-suited goons, the bearded man tries to close the distance with that creepy palm ability, but a massive hammer strike creates some much-needed breathing room. This shockwave is enough to blow back the attackers and disrupt their formation, giving the spear user a chance to jump in and start thinning the crowd. As the dust settles from the massive impact, the team realizes they're dealing with a coordinated terrorist-level threat. Hyo-sung checks his gear, knowing they can't afford any more mistakes, but something feels off about how the previous exchange went down. He spots several projectiles suspended midair in a weird red field, and it clicks that these are the exact rounds the gunman fired earlier. Looking back at the wounded, it is clear the enemy is using specialized tools, specifically a construction-type book to manipulate the battlefield. This is not just a simple ambush, it is a carefully laid trap for their specific powers. Those floating bullets are not just missed shots, they are active mines waiting to blow, and the red beams start locking onto Hyo-sung from every possible angle. He finally realizes the gunman's true trick was setting up a kill zone they walked right into. Hyo-sung launches a desperate counterattack to clear some space, sending a massive chunk of debris flying to break the enemy's momentum. Even with that opening, the team realizes this fight is going to be a nightmare. These new arrivals are not your typical street-level thugs. We are talking about a group of elite hunters who look way too comfortable on the battlefield. Not long ago, this enemy squad was scouting the port with total confidence, despite knowing there were ambushes waiting for them around every corner. Their leader was not even worried about the local resistance, scoring their performance a perfect 100. But the fact that everything went so smoothly in Korea actually made him suspicious. He was so relaxed he even planned a coffee break just to watch the port from a better angle, treating this high-stakes operation like a casual stroll through the city. Now that they have finally cornered the team, the gap in power is painfully obvious. The enemy leader offers a chance to talk instead of just finishing them off, claiming that mindless loyalty to the state is not worth throwing their lives away. While one teammate barely recovers from a near-fatal strike, Hyo-sung gets a sudden mental jolt that snaps him back to reality. A shared mindlink curse suddenly connects everyone on the battlefield, forcing Hyo-sung to cough up intel on the enemy's abilities before things get worse. He reveals that while most of the team is below a rank, his entire squad is a rank or higher, and with that kind of power gap, they do not stand a chance of surviving. The MC is not buying the negotiation for even a single second, and while the old man tries to sell them on a peaceful surrender, a sudden strike interrupts his sales pitch before he can finish. The counteroffensive kicks off with a jagged shard tearing through the enemy ranks, catching the squad off guard just as they thought they had the upper hand. The enemy leader is losing his cool over the blatant lack of respect, but the MC is more focused on gauging the speed of this new arrival. He notes that while the person is fast, they have not quite hit S-rank levels yet, which is the signal for the ginger-haired girl to finally jump into the fray. She does not hesitate to take the heat, diving straight into a hail of gunfire and manages to snatch the bullets right out of the air like they are toys. She triggers a freeze ability that locks the projectiles in place, turning the enemy's own firepower into a floating trap and asking what they will do next. Even though she admits their guns are a problem, she does not back down from a melee, slamming her fist into a sword wielder who thinks he can close the distance. The guy realizes too late that he has picked a fight with a monster, as she bites down on his blade to keep him from pulling away. With his movement locked, she lands a heavy blow that sends shockwaves through the area, shattering his weapon and leaving his entire defense completely wide open for the kill. It's a total reversal that proves the team is not going down without a massive fight. The momentum stays with the team as another heavy hit connects, leaving the enemy sword wielder coughing up blood and completely out of the fight. This catches the attention of the bearded leader and his team, who finally realize they are not dealing with amateurs. A sudden rain of red energy shards forces everyone to scramble for cover, but the kid is already tracking the source before the first one even lands. Even with his partner watching his back, the sheer volume of the attack nearly overwhelms their position. Amidst the chaos, the old man steps forward with a bone-chilling question, locking his sights directly onto the ginger-haired girl. He blames her for taking out his junior and prepares to end her right then and there. Just as his punch is about to land, a massive star-shaped spirit flashes into existence to take the hit. It is a total curveball that stops the leader's momentum dead in its tracks, revealing a high-level spirit that should not even be here. While the girl struggles to catch her breath, the spirit maintains the barrier against the leader's raw power. Then the star detonates into a massive pillar of blue light that levels the surrounding area, carving a path through the battlefield and forcing a hard reset on the positioning. The blue-haired ally takes a second to scan the remaining enemies. Realizing that once the bearded guy is handled, the rest of them are just B ranks. He thinks they've finally turned the corner and that the rest of the cleanup will be easy, but his confidence is cut short when he notices something shifting in the air. The kid screams for the girl to keep her guard up because the leader is far from finished. The leader is not backing down and deploys a defensive cube to stabilize his position. The kid realizes the old man has a literal eye embedded in his palm, proving he's been tracking their every move since the start of the raid. But the MC has his own tricks, revealing he's been spying on the enemy just as intensely. It's a high-stakes standoff where both sides are finally showing their cards. One of the surviving subordinates realizes the tide has completely turned, screaming at his teammates to stop freezing up and finish the fight. The shooter is starting to panic because he's almost out of ammo and magic. Amidst the chaos and smoke, the enemy group makes a split-second decision. When the dust finally settles, the heavy hitters have vanished from the battlefield. They are not looking for a fair fight anymore and decide to cut their losses. The order comes down to focus on the item and get it across the border. A trail of energy marks their path as they speed toward the nearest harbor. The team watches them retreat, confused by the sudden change in strategy. But it makes sense since their captain knows he cannot win a fight against four rankers. One of the enemies wants to circle back for revenge once he manages to recover, but his partner shuts that down, insisting they regroup at the port before it is too late. One enemy realizes the spirit user is still active and has not given up the chase. Back with the heroes, the kid decides he's going to blow up every ship in the port. His partner is shocked they're heading into a high-level fight with just the two of them. The enemies are starting to realize just how dangerous this kid actually is. Between his insane construction speed and sharp instincts, he is a massive wild card. They are banking on the hope that he's completely drained after absorbing so much energy, especially since he took a direct hit from a spear earlier in the fight. Plus, they're counting on a curse to keep his abilities locked down for good. Meanwhile, the bureau chief is likely making her own secret moves toward the harbor. One of the guys thinks they're just making a bunch of dangerous assumptions, but the kid's teammate is willing to bet everything on her hidden strength. The escaping group finally reaches the port to meet their contact as planned, finding Nicolette waiting for them on the docks with absolutely zero patience left. The bearded leader freezes up when he sees the kid already standing right there. Nicolette mentions she has been waiting so long she almost died of boredom, unaware that her partner is currently stuck in a loop of pure disbelief. He cannot wrap his head around how their target beat them to the docks. That water spear should have sent the kid flying across the distant horizon, launching him thousands of meters away even if he managed to survive the hit. Since he cannot fly, seeing him here breaks everything the leader knows about physics. Sensing the shift in power, the old man tells Nico to run while he covers. He knows he has no chance of winning if he's worried about protecting her. Before she can move, the intruder casually asks her if she speaks English. The enemy leader tries to recruit his opponent instead of fighting, even throwing out a weird compliment. This offer gets shut down immediately with a reveal that she is actually 60 years old. That age gap is apparently a deal-breaker for him, and he loses interest just as fast as he gained it. Insulted by the rejection, she launches into a full-on assault to make him regret the comment. He recognizes she's an S-rank body technique user the moment she closes the distance, but even with that insane speed, her opening strike does not even touch him. A barrier catches the kick before it can even graze his clothes, forcing her to pivot and try to find a gap in his guard from another angle. Every punch she throws meets that same wall of invisible resistance. She does not slow down for a second, flipping through the air to keep the pressure high. It is a relentless barrage of strikes, but nothing is actually landing, and even she has to admit this guy's defense is more than just a simple shield. Another heavy kick connects, only to be redirected by his automatic defenses. Frustrated by the lack of progress, she calls him out for relying on such a dirty trick. The leader is not bothered by the trash talk, confident that he's completely safe. This guy's ultimate move is a technique called water dice that acts as an absolute defense. The spirits powering the cube automatically track and intercept any incoming threat, making it impossible for a physical fighter to touch a single hair on his head. Even trying to attack through the floor is useless against the automatic barriers, leaving her looking for a way to crack the cube before he decides to hit back. She pivots to long range, launching a high-speed spirit volley, but she's not running out of energy just yet. The leader blocks the barrage effortlessly, questioning how much stamina she has left as counterattacks rain down while she maneuvers through the crossfire. This gives him enough confidence to call the fight a one-sided execution, so she finally decides to drop the restraint and stop playing it safe, even if it means the guy might not survive the next hit. A strange pressure fills the area, making the leader hesitate for the first time, watching as her energy starts to condense into a much more physical form. This is not just spirit power anymore, it is something far heavier. The resulting impact shatters his absolute defense and sends him flying. Once the dust settles, she finally takes a moment to recover while the leader lies defeated, stunned that a spirit user could hit that hard. The secret is her status as a reawakener, mastering both construction and body arts. He is too far gone to even understand what she is saying at this point, and she tells him to hang on while the focus shifts to a kid watching the city. Elsewhere, a new set of attacks streaks through the backstreets, where another operative is struggling to fend off a coordinated ambush. These guys are way more perceptive than the usual trash mobs, proving that even masking his energy will not be enough to shake them off. The operative is getting pushed further from the port while the bureau chief fights alone. The situation gets worse when the captain realizes he still cannot tap into his power. Admitting this is the first time he has ever been physically prevented from using his ability. The enemy duo is moving in, led by a gunman who specializes in a very specific gimmick. This guy is a blocking technique user who can shut down construction arts entirely. Normally, these arts require precise calculations to rewrite the laws of the world, so even a tiny ripple in the local energy flow causes the whole process to fail. By twisting the energy waves around them, the gunman makes any attempt at a counterattack impossible. Raphael thinks the fight is basically a wrap now that it's a 2-on-1 sweep. But his partner, Claudio, reminds him that high-level battles are never that predictable and warns him to stay focused if he does not want to get caught off guard. Seizing the chance to relocate, the operative ducks into a nearby underground passage. The enemies realize the two targets have split up to try and slip out of range, so they divide and conquer, with the gunman taking the lead on the constructor's trail, while one operative tries to navigate the tight corridors of the drainage system. His partner is intercepted by the blue-haired swordsman waiting in the dark. Back in the maze, the gunman continues the hunt with a chip on his shoulder. It turns out he is annoyed that his own teammate treats him like a one-trick pony. Tracking the target's movements, he realizes the kid is trying to lure him into a trap, but he is more than happy to just start blasting until he finds his mark. Raphael is feeling himself, bragging about how no one can hide from his special bullets. Distances and obstacles do not matter when he's the one pulling the trigger. Claudio's warning about this target being a dangerous wild card still rings in his ears, but he dismisses the operative as nothing more than a low-tier B rank. The gunman dares his opponent to try blocking a shot without any construction arts. That confidence evaporates instantly when a bullet rips through his own shoulder. Stumbling back in shock, the hunter realizes he just became the prey. It does not make sense why his own projectiles are suddenly turning on him until he realizes the entire swarm of rounds has been redirected toward him. His own energy is being manipulated and shoved right back into his face. The reflected barrage shreds through his defenses before he can even react. Barely clinging to life, the gunman tries to catch his breath among the brass. He realizes the kid only survived because he had a defensive wall formula preloaded. Even so, nobody should be able to activate abilities while Raphael is twisting the energy flow. The kid must have analyzed the entire distorted field in a matter of seconds and decoded the complex math behind the bullet trajectories perfectly. It is a level of genius that should not exist in someone with such a low rank. Before he can process the defeat, a massive wall of energy closes in on him. Completely pinned and broken, the gunman finally loses his grip on the fight. Looking at his doom, he starts to remember a certain rumor about a legendary monster. Raphael flashes back to a warning he once received about the hunters in Korea, specifically a legendary constructor whose technical skills are on a completely different level. The boss of Orofalna explained that the name Shinbeak is famous even among normal people, and if a hunter ever mastered construction formulas to their absolute physical limit, then Raphael's specialized blocking techniques would be completely useless against such a monster. That old warning turns into a brutal reality as the gunman is finally overwhelmed. Shinbeak secures the win, proving he really is the nightmare the legends described, leaving the wreckage behind while admitting it has been a while since he faced a decent challenge.